Another day, another banger. Today we'll be diving into the complete Terminator timeline. This video will feature all movies and series in chronological order, which you can find in the description below. Without further ado, make sure to sit back, relax, and as always enjoy the video. The Terminator begins in Los Angeles 2029 AD, where a spacecraft is seen flying amongst many other machineries. They all fire at people with one objective in mind: to end the human race. Going back to the past in 1984, a truck driver is doing his job when an electricity field comes out of nowhere, causing him to run off. Soon enough, a Terminator T-800 model appears and stares at his surroundings. We then see some punks on the street attempting to mess around with the Terminator and stupidly pull out knives on it, but are quickly apprehended and killed. Elsewhere, the same electricity field opens up in a dark alley when a man named Kyle Reese appears naked. Cops immediately pull up on him and chase him down. But Kyle makes his way through the dark alley and attacks the officer to ask him for the date and quickly hurries off with the officer's gun. With the rest searching for him in a clothes shop, they shine their flashlights and find him, but the man is too athletic and manages to get out. He steals a shotgun out of one of the cop cars and makes his way onto the street to just blend in with the crowd and go undetected. He soon discovers a phone book and rips out a specific page. In the morning, a lady is seen riding her bike and enjoying the beautiful day. Upon arrival at work, we learn this woman is Sarah Connor. In the meantime, the Terminator smashes through a window and steals a car. Soon arriving at a gun shop, the owner shows him a variety of weapons and is proud with what he has. Unfortunately for him, the Terminator loads a gun and kills the owner. He then quickly makes his way to a phone book and also looks for the same name, Sarah Connor. Going to the first name in the phone book, he is greeted by a lady who is ruthlessly gunned down. Later at the diner Sarah works at, she watches the news inform the world of the killing. Meanwhile, Kyle also decides to steal a car and gets a flashback about the time they were at war. We see him and his team being shot at by large machines as he throws a grenade to destroy the threat. His friend then arrives to pick him up as another ship starts firing at them and flips their car. Coming back to his senses, Kyle drives off slowly and remembers the war. Finishing work in the meantime, Sarah receives a call which sounds like she is being threatened, but it just turns out to be her friend just playing around. At the cop shop, we see Officer Traxler investigating the dead girl's case. After getting dressed, Sarah's date calls her to cancel the dinner plans and leaves her by herself. She instead goes on her bike and notices Kyle following her in his car. Officer Traxler is then met by the press, who have many questions, which leaves the department stressing for answers. Eating her dinner, Sarah hears the news about the women who are specifically named Sarah Connor being killed, leaving our Sarah to speculate about what is actually happening. Rushing to the phone book, she notices her name in it, which makes her leave in a hurry. As she walks alone, she once again notices Kyle following her, which scares her into entering a club. Rushing to the phone, she tries to contact the police station but isn't successful, as we see the Terminator has arrived at his next target. Inside, we see Sarah's friend dancing to her music, unaware of the threat, before being jump-scared by Sarah's lizard. Unfortunately for her partner, he is attacked by the Terminator, and unable to deal with his strength, his head is put through a wall. Ginger is then targeted and killed by the T-800. Simultaneously, Sarah calls the house and tells Ginger she thinks someone's following her whilst the Terminator listens. He begins to go through her things, finding her notes and identity card. Officer Traxler manages to get into contact with Sarah and discusses what she needs to do. Arriving at the club quickly, the Terminator searches for Sarah, and sitting around, she comes into eye contact with Kyle. The Terminator then spots her and comes towards her when Kyle sees this and opens fire to save Sarah. With the T-800 getting back up, he returns fire in the club to try and kill Kyle. Finding Sarah, he tries killing her too, but once again is shot by Kyle, who begins to escape with Sarah. Whilst running, the Terminator begins his chase in hot pursuit and jumps on the car they are in. Cops arrive on scene calling it in, and the Terminator steals their car to resume the chase. Still driving like crazy, Kyle tries to check on Sarah, but she panics at everything happening to her. He informs her he is there to protect her, and that he is from the future, while trying to explain that the man chasing them is a machine. The cops soon catch up to them, and Kyle gets crafty and evades them while continuing to tell Sarah about the Terminator. She eventually tries running away but is immediately stopped as he yells at her so she can understand the danger she is in. Meanwhile, the Terminator is still looking for the duo as the pair jump into another car, with Kyle telling Sarah that the Terminator is also from the future. Explaining a nuclear war is impending, it will wipe out all mankind due to the existence of the machines like the Terminator. He shows her the mark from the future, proving what it holds, and tells her that her unborn son was a hero, giving them hope. The Terminator then arrives in the parking garage and opens fire on Kyle and Sarah. Another chase ensues between them as more shots are fired. Jumping on the freeway, the Terminator is persistent in his chase and unwilling to give up. Causing an accident, the cops arrive on the scene and apprehend Sarah and Kyle before taking them back to the station. Traxler then informs Sarah of Ginger's death and brings a doctor to help them determine if Kyle is crazy. In the meantime, escaping the police, the Terminator is seen with an eye missing. He tries to fix himself up and we get to see what's under his skin. Back at the station, Kyle is questioned and the doctor there tries to understand how he knows about the future. With the Terminator adjusting his eye, his real eye is revealed, and it seems sunglasses are the best thing to hide it right now. Still being questioned, the officers laugh at Kyle and are unable to believe his story, with Sarah also watching. Traxler tells her to rest up and not to worry as she is safe inside the police station. Simultaneously, the Terminator arrives at the station asking of her whereabouts. He gets turned down to see her and immediately drives his car through the place before opening fire on everyone. Sarah hears the commotion and gets scared whilst the officers try and shoot back at the Terminator, who is unstoppable. Kyle uses this distraction to attack a guard and free himself as Sarah hides underneath a table. The T-800 continues killing the cops, and armed with 2 assault rifles, he manages to kill Traxler. Finding Sarah, Kyle makes another escape with her and gets to see the mayhem the Terminator has caused. However, the Terminator sees this and is ready for a rematch. During the same night, Kyle and Sarah break down due to lack of petrol and push the car off the road. They make their way on foot, hiding in a dark place, and Kyle tries to warm her up. She also notices he's wounded by one of the bullets and begins trying to patch him up, whilst also discussing her son's existence in the near future. Freaking out, Sarah wants nothing to do with the future, but Kyle brings her a message from her son, calming her down. They begin to have flashbacks of when Kyle was at war fighting against the machines. He courageously leads his team in the battles, showing us how life was or will be for the whole mankind. Opening a picture, we see Sarah's face and is interrupted by the future Terminator, who attacks their base, killing his men and the children that are there. Sarah's picture is burnt due to the Terminator's ruthless act of gunning them down. The next morning, Sarah wakes up with Kyle still with her, beginning their journey as they start walking. On the other hand, the Terminator reads her notes and is disturbed by the cleaner asking him questions, leading him to be sworn at before walking out armed to hunt. Meanwhile, Sarah and Kyle find a room to hide out in, happy that she can rest a bit whilst Kyle goes for a walk. She makes a call to her mum, telling her the hotel room and number, only to see the Terminator on the other end of the line. Unaware of the trouble, the pair goes through the shopping items, which teaches Sarah how to make a bomb. Lying down in bed, Sarah asks Kyle more questions as he stares out the window, watching for the Terminator to turn up. They begin talking once more about her son in detail, making Sarah cry knowing about what the future holds. In the meantime, the Terminator rides his bike and arrives at the targeted hotel to shoot inside Kyle's room, but notices they're driving off inside of a car. Kyle drives as fast as he can while being shot at, causing the pair to switch and Kyle to throw the handmade grenades they made at their assailant. He is shot in the process though, which allows the Terminator to catch up and cause a major collision. Still unfazed, he gets up and is run over by a truck driver. The driver is immediately killed and the T-800 hijacks the man's truck. He starts driving it into the duo and prepares to crash it when his targets manage to escape just in time. Running away, he catches up and almost running Sarah over. He is blown up by a massive explosion caused by Kyle. Sarah stares in horror at the fire as she notices the Terminator burning and finally dead. Approaching, she sees the mess and Kyle appears to hug Sarah, finally ecstatic they're safe. Their happiness is short-lived when the T-800 stands back up in his metal form, striking fear into them knowing he can't be killed. They try to escape once again while the machine chases them to complete his mission. Kyle then smartly activates all machines inside a warehouse but falls down. Sarah tries with all her might to help him get up and run, but the Terminator catches up. Confused by the machinery around it though, the T-800 is unable to track them, caused by the sounds in the warehouse. Sarah and Kyle sneak around the place trying to get to safety but are met by the machine, whose presence and physique is frightening, causing them to back up slowly. Kyle tries protecting Sarah and hits the Terminator with a pole but is overpowered by the strength it has. Although that's the case, Kyle sticks a bomb in him and finally blows up the machine. Sarah cries in agony due to the item that pierced her and attempts to crawl towards Kyle, who is dead and sacrificed his life for hers. Angrily enough, the Terminator also crawls towards her with a last effort to complete the task. Sarah tries to get away from the Terminator, who is right behind her, and upon finding a little cage, she locks him in and presses a button, causing the equipment to squash the Terminator's head, finally terminating her enemy. She problematically shakes rapidly at the sight of its arm though, and is carried away by the paramedics, with Kyle being placed in a body bag. The next day, Sarah is seen driving herself and making tapes for her future son. She pulls up at a gas station and we see she is pregnant. Continuing to talk to her future son, she explains to him about how heroic Kyle was and the sacrifices he made for her. The young kid then snaps a picture of her. Asking for money, Sarah realizes this is the same picture Kyle had in the future. She then drives off towards a nice place as everything is finally over for the time being. Terminator Judgment Day begins in Los Angeles, 2029 AD, where we see the skeletons of people in an abandoned Earth. The existence of mankind was wiped out as we hear a voice explaining the war against machines. We see an army of men fighting against the machines in an all-out battle, seeing the firepower that the machines poses. A man is seen walking while we hear Sarah talk, telling us this is John, her son, telling us about a protector sent to help him. We see all of the chaos that the machines caused due to nuclear war, and that they wiped out every single person, as a Terminator emerges from the fire strong as ever. In the present time, a truck drives away. and an electric field is shown only to see the Terminator emerge from it looking around to see where he is. Inside a bar, bikers see the man come in with no clothes, shocked at what's happening. He approaches a biker, demanding to have his clothes and motorcycle. The bikers laugh in his face and put out their cigar on his flesh, but are met with anger as he begins to bash them one by one, harming them viciously. The remaining one takes off in fear, while he confronts the boss, taking his gun and motorcycle keys off him. The Terminator steps out of the bar looking like a soldier and jumps on the bike, but is confronted by the bar owner, who aims his gun at him. Unfazed, the Terminator takes his gun and glasses before riding off in style onto the streets. In another place, electricity is seen again by an officer who calls it in as he proceeds to check out the place. He shines his light with gun in hand, confused at the sight, and is attacked from behind by another man who is the T-1000. Wasting no time, he searches up John Connor's name, finding out his address. The next day, we see a woman talking to John, trying to get his attention, but is ignored as she complains to her husband about his behavior. These people are his foster parents and are ignored by John, who rides away with his friend on his bike. At the state hospital, a woman is seen training in her room with doctors discussing her file to find out this woman is Sarah Connor. They approach her cautiously due to the crazy antics she's pulled. Entering her room, they try and give her medicine but ruthlessly begin beating on her when she denies, forcing her to take it. The T-1000 arrives at the foster parents' house, asking questions of John's whereabouts and getting a photo of him to know what he looks like. Having fun, John is playing around with stolen cards, attempting to withdraw money, showing us the skills he has. His friend pulls out Sarah's photo, which is the same one Kyle, his dad, had, but explains he isn't a fan of his mum's before continuing his ride, and is noticed by the Terminator, who is also riding. Having flashbacks, Sarah sees Kyle again, who asks about John, explaining to her that she needs to protect him. He tries to pick her up, telling her to fight for their son's life before leaving her as she tries to chase him down. Sarah runs in the hallway, opening a door only to see a bunch of kids playing around before she screams due to an explosion. In the meantime, Sarah is seen on tape talking to doctors, explaining the dreams she keeps on having about the future. Funny enough, it is Sarah who watches her own interview, spectating how bizarre she was acting. Dr. Silberman has a deep conversation with her, telling her she's improved and that she deserves to be in minimum security as she has other plans in mind. In a lab someplace else, we see two men conversing about their latest development. A door is opened leading to a secure facility, where we see the hand of the Terminator. Still trying to convince her doctor, he is skeptical to allow Sarah to be placed in minimum security due to her history of trying to escape. He denies her transfer, causing her to leap at him, angry that she isn't there for John. Meanwhile, John still rides his bike whilst the Terminator tries and catches up to him. On the other hand, the T-1000 is also spotted asking kids about him. Unaware of the danger, John and his friend play at the arcade with both the Terminator and T-1000 closing in on finding him. They continue playing as the machines keep searching, but the T-1000 encounters his friend, who informs John to run. Running away, John bumps into the Terminator, who pulls out a shotgun. Fortunately enough, the Terminator is now his protector, and him and the T-1000 get into a shootout. He is shot down, but his body heals, and they begin fighting with their hands before being thrown through a window. John gets on his bike, attempting to get away, but the machine runs right behind him and robs a truck to keep up with John. The young kid is skillful on the bike, managing to get away, and is shocked when the truck flies onto his path, still in pursuit. Right behind, the Terminator is hot on their tail, whilst John continues riding like crazy before the T-1000 is shot at by his protector. Fitting through tight spaces, the T-1000 doesn't give up his chase, determined to kill him. Simultaneously, the Terminator becomes airborne, landing his bike, giving him an edge slightly, and manages to get John onto his bike before shooting the truck's tires successfully, causing a massive accident and explosion. They ride off, although we see the machine walk out unharmed whilst John demands answers, confused at what's happening. He knows about the Terminators, realizing his mum was telling the truth, and is intrigued, touching and feeling the build of the Terminator. Back at the crime scene, officers clean up the scene as the pair discuss the T-1000, explaining it is an upgrade and much more advanced than he is. They arrive at the phone booth, calling the foster parents, checking up on their well-being. His mother says the wrong dog's named, making them hang up, and we see why, due to the T-1000 taking the shape of the mum killing the father. They keep talking, telling us the machine can imitate people, and can also create metallic items with its hands. At the house, the T-1000 shows no mercy, killing the dog before entering John's room to find some clues as to his whereabouts. He carefully goes around the room, finding his secret belongings containing pictures. In the meantime, Sarah is shown photos of the Terminator, saying his picture came up again, trying to get answers out of her. However, she is quick enough to slide a paperclip towards herself. John begins talking about his mother, upset he didn't believe her, and now she's stuck in a state hospital. The Terminator stops John from trying to save his mother and attracts attention with his screaming before he lets go. He figures out the Terminator must follow his command, making him bash two men, almost killing them before he is stopped by John. He tries and negotiates with the Terminator, telling him he must not kill, and their next mission is to save his mother. Unfortunately for them, the T-1000 arrives first, still posed as an officer easily passing through security checks. Inside, Sarah is strapped to her bed acting like she's asleep waiting for him to leave. Once he leaves, she quickly uses the clip to try and free herself and is successful, except the T-1000 is getting closer. With the men going home, Sarah picks at the door planning her release, as one guard walks around unaware that the machine has blended in with the floor, imitating his shape before killing him. Breaking free, Sarah bashes the nurse who had been giving her a hard time, dragging him into her room, locking him in there as she makes her way through the hallways. She moves swiftly, bashing Dr. Silberman and his man, threatening the doctor. The Terminator and John arrive at the facility and kneecap the guard to open the gates and ride into the parking lot. Determined on escaping, Sarah forces the guards to open the doors using the doctor as a hostage, but is pounced on, and this causes her to run off and find her own way out. Sarah finds an elevator and sees the Terminator, forcing her to panic and run away before being tackled by the nurses. The Terminator protects her by bashing them, reuniting mother and son as she's shocked that he is now a good guy protecting them. Noticing the T-1000, the group begin running, while the Terminator attempts to slow him down but isn't successful as their assailant uses his hands to make knives and stab into the elevator. The trio manage to escape and steal a police car and speed away, while being hunted by the Terminator, who is shot at multiple times. The T-1000 manages to latch onto the car, smashing the back window to get in, but the Terminator blows him off the car and successfully evade his chase. After the chase, Sarah hugs John and lectures him about taking risks and to never put himself in that situation again. Arriving at a spot, they park the car and attend to Sarah's wounds and to the Terminator's, whilst also being questioned by John, who seems to take a liking to him. She opens his head, discovering the machine underneath and taking out his chip, which leaves him unable to function. Sarah attempts to smash it and is quickly stopped by her son, who scolds her on damaging his friend, making her rethink her decision. The next morning, they steal a vehicle and get out of the city to avoid the T-1000. In the car, John teaches the Terminator how to talk and respond to humans, really bonding with him. Stopping at the gas station, he analyzes on how to smile before eating their food and changing the oil in his car. Kids playing around lead John to say humankind is going to lose, making him sad. Jumping back into the car, the Terminator explains the cyber system, clarifying what the future holds and how Skynet, a big company, plays a major role due to the man we had seen in the lab earlier, Miles Dyson. Someplace else, we see Miles and his wife discussing work, leading her to speak out, reminding him he promised to take his kids out. He explains the work to her. Although she disagrees, she accepts him for who he is, whilst his kids also come to them. Stopping at another destination, Sarah calls out to a man who pops out armed until he notices her. The hostility vanishes when they greet each other, talking and reminiscing about the old days between them. Sarah has a hidden stash house, filled with every weapon a man can dream of, leaving the Terminator happy. She informs Enrique to stay safe until this is all over, looking out for an old friend. Excited with their discoveries, they play with the guns and arm themselves while they bond some more until they find a massive gun. They then work on the car together, mentioning Judgment Day and more valuable information his mom had told him. He mentions Kyle, who is his father, remembering the stories about him, but the conversation is cut short once they enjoy each other's company some more. Sarah watches this and is happy to see her son has a protector. She plays with her knife, watching the people around her having fun with one another, which makes her cry, remembering Kyle and the time she had. Closing her eyes, she has the same dream of the kids at the playground and her screaming and her old self with John, only to be met with a horrific scene of the nuclear explosion that will happen if the machines win the war. Coming back to her senses, she sees carved letters in the table saying "No fate," making her mad. Arming herself with weapons and entering her car, Sarah drives off, leaving John and the Terminator behind. They come to the conclusion that Sarah is out to get Miles Dyson, quickly making them go after her, angry his mum could do such a thing. The same night, Sarah arrives at Miles' house, prepared to stop the war once she spots Miles in her sight. A red dot appears on his back as she prepares to change the future and misses due to his son distracting him. She shoots rapidly into the house, attempting to assassinate him. Sarah walks up to him, clipping him in the shoulder, but hesitates to finish it when his wife and kid watch her point the gun at him. She stares at him, crying, contemplating on what to do before coming to a decision, realizing what a monster she's become. Arriving, John and the Terminator check up on the family and Sarah hugs her son, relieved she had him. The Terminator shows Miles who he really is, cutting his skin, revealing his arm, leaving them scared. After everything calms down, they sit at the table, telling Miles how he's responsible for the death of all of mankind. Sarah tells him he is the reason the bomb is created in the first place, but is stopped by her son. They agree to quit Skynet to change the future for the better, revealing the chip from the first Terminator is stored at the lab, which infuriates Sarah. Agreeing to take them there, they quickly make their way into the lab, pointing their weapons at security to go up. Another guard walks around looking for his partner. Noticing him tied up, he triggers the alarm. Miles' card access is denied. Not sure on what to do, John steps up, trying to open it. Another door is locked but is blown open by the Terminator, who gives them gas masks to wear before entering the place. En route, the T-1000 comes to Miles' house. Going through his items, he hears the radio call in, naming Sarah as a person of interest at the Skynet building. In the meantime, the group begins their hard work destroying all the files along with Miles, who smashes his years of work. A fleet of officers arrive, armed with weapons along with SWAT and air support ready to apprehend the group. Using his magic, John gets into the system, but notices the chopper flying ahead with the convoy of cops. They make bombs for the sole purpose of destroying the whole building whilst Terminator gets ready to fight the police. He comes face to face with them, opening fire with his machine gun, making them flee for their lives. He shows them mercy because of John, but makes it clear he is his protector, blowing up their vehicles before leaving satisfied with his work. Meanwhile, John and Miles enter the facility where the Terminator parts are stored, getting the chip they need. SWAT, fed up with this, make an entrance into the building armed with assault rifles. The group prepares to leave, unaware of SWAT, who shoot Miles and open fire on Sarah. She doesn't hesitate to make a move for it, and then saved by the Terminator, who leads the way to their exit strategy. SWAT moves in, noticing the explosions, and Miles, who has the detonator in hand, leading them to fall back in a hurry. The building blows up just as planned, destroying all the hard work Miles had done, whilst the T-1000 simultaneously rocks up also. SWAT shoots gas at the group, which angers the Terminator, who bravely walks towards them although he is being shot at and hit multiple times. He begins kneecapping them, eliminating any threat to the Connor family, before going outside to shoot gas canisters at the police officers. Hijacking the SWAT truck, he drives it into the lobby, picking up the mum and son, driving off victorious until the T-1000 spots this. Crazily enough, he jumps onto the chopper, stealing it, GTA style, following the trio. They notice the chopper coming in and begin firing at each other, determined to finish each other off. The T-1000 follows closely, piercing Sarah with his bullets, causing them both to crash, having a major accident. The Terminator immediately spots his pursuer driving a truck again, so they rush to hop in another car, evading the persistent machine. The truck closes in, ramming into them, as he has no other goal in mind but to kill them. Taking over the wheel, John drives while the Terminator shoots in hope he slows him down a little. Jumping onto the truck, he makes the T-1000 swerve and lose his wheels, causing him to crash. Getting back up, he is frozen due to the spillage, which gives the Terminator the chance to shoot him, blowing him to smithereens. John approaches and sees the machine regenerating due to the heat, giving them a bit of time to get ready and carry Sarah, who is wounded. Time up and the machine follows behind, whilst the Terminator tries to find cover for them, coming to a factory working with molten metal. Turning around, he instructs the two to leave so he can handle business, which he does as they get into a fist fight, throwing each other around. The Terminator's arm is crushed, giving the T-1000 time to go and find John. Knowing this, the Terminator destroys his arm, but the machine has already found them, and Sarah sends John to safety. She shoots her attacker in the face, fearless of what stands in her way, but is stabbed by him, asking her to call John to him. The Terminator stabs him, and another fight ensues between the two, but as we can tell, the T-1000 is clearly years ahead, smashing the Terminator's face multiple times. Falling to the ground, he attempts to crawl to his gun, but is stabbed through the back, sending electric waves around him. Getting her own gun, Sarah reloads whilst John hides, although due to our surprise, the Terminator gets up again. John hears his mother calling to him, and he sees her, but also sees another Sarah, who opens fire, revealing the original as she shoots him over and over. Unable to do anything against him, they see the Terminator aiming his gun and shooting at the T-1000, causing him to blow up and fall into the molten metal, finally destroying the enemy, who looked unstoppable. They watch in disbelief as it screams in agony before disappearing into nothing. John helps him up as they look down at the molten steel and throw the chip in cyborg hand from the original Terminator. He points to his head, indicating he must also sacrifice himself so that John is safe. John puts up a fight, disagreeing with his choices, crying that his friend is going to die, and hugs him tightly. Sarah also shakes his hand and soon enough lowers him into the molten steel and is saddened that he must go. The Terminator goes under slowly, but not before giving them a thumbs up that everything will be okay. Meanwhile, in the future, the existence of mankind is still here as their lives were all saved. We see Sarah narrating her story, staring at an older John and his kids, happy with how life has turned out. She expresses her gratitude for the Terminator who made it all possible. The Sarah Connor Chronicles picks up after Terminator 2 Judgment Day, ignoring everything that came after. Judgment Day was stopped in 1997 but never erased. And by 1999, Sarah and John are still on the run when a new Terminator hunts them. A reprogrammed unit sends them 8 years into the future to 2007, where the story branches into its own timeline, one where Judgment Day is still coming, just later and deadlier. Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles begins in 1999 with Sarah Connor driving to her son John's school. She soon reaches the school and finds him in the library, where she hurriedly tells him that they need to leave. As they run, John wonders if police spotted her at the diner where she works as a waitress, but Sarah is unsure. However, once they get out of school, the police are already there and arrest them both. Sarah is placed inside the car when suddenly a man approaches them and opens fire on the police, killing several officers. Sarah frees herself before uncuffing John and telling him to run. She grabs an officer's gun to shoot the attacker, but the bullets don't affect him, and he shoots at John while he is running, making Sarah rush there only to find him unconscious. While weeping, she begs the man to kill her, but he replies that the future now belongs to the machines. Large explosions surround them, burning the man's skin away and revealing his metal body, a Terminator. As he grabs her neck, she suddenly wakes up from shock, which wakes her fiancé, Charlie Dixon, who comforts her before leaving for work. Later, Sarah sits beside a sleeping John, but he gets startled as he notices her there and tells her not to sneak up on him. However, she says they must leave now as this place is no longer safe, which prompts John to respond angrily that they've been here for 2 years and the cops haven't found them. He assumes that Sarah is getting cold feet because Charlie proposed to her, but Sarah aggressively tells him to never let his guard down, giving him 30 minutes to pack his belongings and guns while she packs food. On their way, Sarah narrates that every family has rules, and their rule is to resist the urge to feel special and always know the exits. Meanwhile, Charlie goes to a police station, asking for help to locate his fiancée, who left the city with a simple note, and the FBI agent James Ellison shows up there to ask Charlie if he knows about the Skynet defense system. When Charlie denies, James shows a picture of Miles Dyson, explaining that after escaping her mental hospital, Sarah killed him and destroyed a 4-story research lab. When Charlie questions her motives, James laughs, explaining that Sarah believes that Skynet sends Terminators to kill her son because she thinks John is humanity's only hope to lead the resistance against machines, which will otherwise annihilate the human race. Charlie angrily says he came for help, but James explains that Sarah is a threat to national security and requests Charlie's assistance in finding her. As James searches her data on his computer with the fake name revealed by Charlie, the same information appears on a monitor in an empty warehouse watched by a Terminator. A week later, John enrolls at a school in Red Valley, New Mexico, and a girl named Cameron shows interest in him, but he dismisses her when she asks about his mother. Returning home, he complains about the location and accidentally mentions the school's outdated computers. So Sarah worriedly asks if he's been hacking, which he quickly denies. She then jokingly asks if he met any pretty girls at school, which John denies as well. The next day, James arrives in New Mexico, where he is assigned an officer to help with his search for Sarah. At school, John notices Cameron ignoring him and explains that his father was a soldier killed on a mission, making his mother very possessive of him, so he doesn't talk much about her. Cameron thanks him for being honest, but before she can say anything else, the bell rings and the substitute teacher named Cromartie arrives. During attendance, Cromartie pulls out a concealed gun and opens fire when he reaches John's name. Cameron shields John and gets shot multiple times, but John jumps out of the classroom window, so Cromartie rushes after him. Sarah hears the news about the school shooting and rushes to school. Meanwhile, John hides behind cars in the parking lot until the Terminator finds him. But suddenly, a car hits Cromartie and reverses, only to reveal that Cameron is alive inside, and she tells John to quickly get in. When Sarah arrives, the police are already on the scene, so she hides and uses binoculars to search for John. But suddenly, Cromartie grabs her neck. She makes a desperate move with her weapon, but he stops her, planning to use her against John. When Sarah gets a call from John, the Terminator answers, imitating Sarah's voice, and asks him to stay home, as she will reach there soon. However, John realizes that something is wrong and decides to leave. The Terminator knocks Sarah unconscious and takes her home, where someone in John's hoodie enters the house, and Cromartie shoots it, only to discover it's Cameron impersonating John. This gives Sarah time to grab her gun and shoot Cromartie, while Cameron, revealing herself as a Terminator, fights him and eventually electrocutes him. Sarah and John, who had escaped by car, are joined by Cameron, who says the system will reboot in 2 minutes. Cameron explains she was sent to protect John, but Sarah tells her to postpone explanations until they're safe. That night, while John sleeps, Cameron tells Sarah she's from 2027 and took 73 days to find them. When Sarah asks about the war, Cameron explains that someone else built Skynet, whose missile defense system declares war on mankind in 2011, triggering a nuclear apocalypse. The next morning, John tells Sarah he can't keep running as he isn't the Messiah people think he is, so she should stop this. Having no other choice, Sarah decides to find Skynet instead of a hiding place. As they reach California, they visit Miles' house, where Sarah tells his ex-wife Teresa that she didn't kill Miles and that the Terminators have returned. She asks if anyone was interested in Miles' work on Skynet, but Teresa says that they destroyed everything. Suddenly, Cameron warns them about a nearby threat, and Sarah asks Teresa for help. They hit the Terminator with Teresa's car, but it opens fire and pursues them. A bullet hits Sarah, but Cameron blows up the other car when the Terminator approaches it, giving them time to escape. Taking cover, Sarah sends John for bandages while Cameron removes the bullet. The next morning, when Sarah regains consciousness, Cameron takes them to a security vault. She takes the guard's gun, forcing everyone to get on the floor, and she tells a woman to lock them in the safety deposit area. Cameron punches open a box and hands keys with numbers to John and Sarah, instructing them to empty those boxes onto the table. The police and Cromartie arrive, attempting to break into the vault, but Cameron quickly assembles gun parts, handing the weapon to Sarah with instructions to fire when the yellow isotope turns red. When John comments that they're trapped, Cameron assures him that they have an escape route. She scans herself using a machine from one box, which opens various other boxes. Cameron explains that the engineers built this vault so Terminators could return to their reality if they ever get trapped. She tells them that she can transport them to where Skynet was created, allowing them to destroy it before it begins functioning. Just as Cromartie breaks down the door, Sarah orders Cameron to activate the time displacement device while she shoots at their pursuer. They time jump to 2007 onto a deserted road where a man videotapes them, so they run to hide. Later, Cameron beats up 3 men and steals their clothes for the trio. Sarah narrates that her child's death would be no less than a holocaust, as even after time traveling, the Terminators will keep pursuing him, but she'll protect him no matter what. Sarah reflects on how she has had to suffer for speaking the truth by constantly shifting places, changing allies, and spending 3 years in a mental hospital. She believed she must prepare her son for the battlefield, but times have changed and now she feels lost. She goes inside and finds John in the living room, who asks her to get him his new ID as he has been confined to the house for the past 3 days. He tells her to call her friend Enrique, who was good at manipulating IDs, but Cameron walks in saying that John sent back better resistance fighters who can help them. Sarah gets angry at Cameron for not revealing this before, but Cameron remains unfazed and drives them to a building, saying they will find the 4 men sent by John here. However, once they reach the apartment, they find the men dead with barcodes on their arms, signifying they were part of a Skynet prison. Cameron checks them all, and suddenly one of them reveals himself as a Terminator and attacks Cameron. They get into a fight and eventually fall out of the window, where the Terminator scans Cameron and classifies her as an unknown Terminator and starts to run. Cameron runs after him, while Sarah takes the gun from the apartment before running out and stealing a motorbike. She drives in pursuit of the Terminator and upon seeing him, jumps off the bike, causing it to hit him. Cameron slows down in the middle of the road but gets hit by a car, which gives the Terminator enough time to stand up and run again. Once they get back home, Sarah aggressively pushes Cameron, asking her if she considers this safe. Sarah questions why she teleported them to the future because now they're more in danger, and John isn't prepared for this. However, Cameron says that Sarah couldn't have done anything as she would have died in 2005. Later, while John tends to Cameron's wounds, she explains that the Terminators sent have a directive mission. But because Skynet doesn't know Sarah and John are in this timeline, they are safe. However, Sarah points out that once they recognize John's face, they'll know to attack him, so she tells him to stay behind while she and Cameron head out. On the way, Sarah explains that she did parliamentary training with Enrique, and he taught John how to shoot rifles. She then asks Cameron if her sole purpose in coming back was to help Sarah avoid her death, but Cameron says no, saying that John wants them to fight, and Sarah is the best fighter he knows. Sarah questions how she died, and Cameron tells her it was because of cancer. Back at home, John finally gets bored and decides to leave the house, against Sarah's instructions. Meanwhile, Enrique tells Sarah he has retired as he wanted to quit illegal work without getting caught even once, but gives her his nephew Carlos's address, who now does the same document forging work, and they rush there. On the other hand, John goes inside a mall and finds a computer store with internet access where he quickly searches for his name, which shows an article saying that he, along with Sarah and Cameron, died in the bank heist. He then searches for Charlie Dixon and finds his address, but a girl approaches him and tells him not to use the demo computer if he doesn't want people snooping on his business. She then helps him delete the search history and tries to talk, but John doesn't engage much and quickly leaves. On the other side, Carlos asks for 20 grand for fake IDs, and Sarah is shocked, but she quickly gets out to save Cameron from a police officer investigating her by pretending that Cameron is her stepdaughter. Meanwhile, John sneaks into Charlie's house and discovers that Charlie is now married. However, Charlie enters before John can hide and is surprised to see him. John tells him to stop coming closer, but Charlie tries to comfort him, so John pushes him away before leaving. When Sarah and Cameron get home, they notice John acting unusual, so Cameron does a skin analysis and reports John having a high level of stress, but Sarah quickly realizes that John snuck out. She wonders if Cameron can do a CAT scan and blood analysis, but Cameron doesn't know how to do those. Later, Sarah tells John to put his shoes on, and they all go to the apartment where the resistance fighters were found dead. Cameron tells them that the fighters must have hidden guns, money, and valuables for them to find, and John soon discovers a safe, which Cameron tries to open but gets electrocuted. John suggests they leave, but Sarah insists on opening the safe, so John thinks and quickly inserts a pin which opens the lock, and they take the bag inside. However, this alerts the Terminator patrolling the area, but the trio manages to escape before it can reach them. Once they reach home, they open the bag to find money, guns, and a bag full of diamonds. Meanwhile, a man who had picked up a Terminator head from the trash is watching TV when a Terminator wearing a helmet breaks into his house and kills him before taking back his head. A few days later, Sarah goes back to Carlos, who gives them their new IDs but speaks something in Spanish with his crew that confuses Sarah. Later that night, she sneaks into Enrique's house, points a gun at him, and tells him that Carlos called him a snitch. She questions if he is selling people out to the police, and he tells her that he lied, as he was in prison for 3 weeks on a federal gun charge, where he gave information about his cellmate who had kidnapped a child. He says he didn't sell Sarah out, but before he can finish, Cameron shoots him, saying that Sarah wouldn't have done it. This angers Sarah, who slaps Cameron, aggressively demanding why she would kill someone based on a possibility. The next day, Cameron helps John practice questions related to his new ID, and John later asks Sarah if she went out late last night, which Sarah denies. She then tells him to join a school so she knows where he is in case of emergencies. Meanwhile, as the police check the crime scene, it is revealed that Enrique had called James, telling him that he has important information to sell. As the kids head to school, Sarah reflects that the only reliable thing in the world is oneself, as the material world can disappear in an instant, leaving behind only the love of family and the body God gave them. She goes to a hospital to get herself checked, hoping everything is fine. Sarah narrates that during her time in the mental hospital, she became obsessed with nuclear scientists, questioning why nobody stopped these fathers of destruction and wondering if she would have stopped them given the chance. She finds herself in the middle of the scientists and shoots them, but they come back to life and transform into Terminators that won't die no matter how many frickin' times she shoots them. Eventually, they gang up to execute her, causing her to wake up from the nightmare. John hands her coffee and she explains that she stayed up late last night trying to find information about the resistance fighters. She tells him that while she's unsure about many things, she's certain they were sent here as a Skynet hunting party. She finds an employee list of the Cyberdyne system and thinks that's a good place to start her investigation. The kids head to school and John tells Cameron to act as naturally as possible, but the guard instructs everyone to put their cell phones and jewelry in the basket and pass through the metal detector. However, Cameron is unable to pass through it, so John lies that Cameron has a metal plate in her head and the guard allows them to pass. Meanwhile, Sarah goes to Miles' grave where she shows a bunch of pictures to Teresa, asking her if she recognizes anyone, and she points out a young man named Andy Good who was an intern at Cyberdyne. Teresa asks if Andy will die as well, but Sarah doesn't have a clear answer. On the other hand, the police investigate the resistance fighters' murders when James arrives to point out that the same gun killed both the fighters and his informant Enrique. However, the officer dismisses him, saying these were just drug dealers, and James shouldn't escalate the matter. Elsewhere, the Terminator breaks into a hospital, steals several units of blood and attacks the guards before escaping. Meanwhile, Sarah goes to the store where Andy works and buys 3 cell phones, but just as she is about to leave, he asks her out for dinner, which she reluctantly agrees to. At school, Cameron transfers into John's class, and John is annoyed by her robotic behavior. On the other side, James visits Carlos, inquiring about Enrique, but Carlos says that they grew apart growing up. James asks why Enrique called him 3 times on the day he died and what they discussed, but Carlos nonchalantly comments that they discussed basketball. Carlos affirms that he didn't kill Enrique, but James says that Carlos knows who did, so he gives him his card before leaving. When the kids return from school, Sarah asks them about their day, before informing them that she is going to dinner with Andy, and Cameron questions if she will kill him. Sarah is shocked and says that she knows very little about Andy, before telling Cameron not to kill anyone without her permission. Meanwhile, the Terminator breaks into cellular regeneration, the house of scientist Dr. Fleming's, and decides to show him a formula written on the wall, telling him that it is completely possible. Dr. Fleming says that he will have to head to his lab to test it, but he would need a lot of equipment and blood, and the Terminator tells him that he has already procured the blood. On the other side, while showering, Sarah thinks about how in 1943, Heisenberg delivered a lecture where one audience member was Moe Berg, who was tasked with killing Heisenberg if he realized the scientist was close to perfecting the bomb. At dinner, Andy tells her he had to drop out of his computer science degree when his father died during his senior year, forcing him to return home to help his family. She roams around and finds a poster of a human playing chess with a machine and asks Andy to show her what he does, so he unlocks a door that has a large computer setup in it. He calls it the Turk, explaining that while the original Turk was an automaton, his version plays chess at a level capable of defeating any human player. However, Sarah notices someone outside mid-conversation and quickly steps out before telling Andy that she has to leave. He tries to stop her, but he gets a call from the police who report about some break-ins in the area. Once she reaches home, John quickly asks her about the computer system, asking if there was an obvious network access, but Sarah doesn't have any idea. John tells her about a point where machines will become so smart that they will be capable of making smarter versions of themselves without any human assistance. Meanwhile, James tells another FBI agent he found blood similar to human composition, but missing red blood cells, so he wants her to analyze blood from the resistance fighter's apartment to see if they find a match. Elsewhere, Dr. Fleming documents his discoveries while working to generate synthetic flesh using the Terminator's formula. Once it's done, The Terminator reveals its cybernetic body, making Fleming question what he is. The next day, Sarah visits the doctor, who tells her that she is healthy and doesn't need to worry about cancer. Later, she calls Andy, asking him to meet her but takes a gun with her. Meanwhile, as John heads to the chemistry lab, he finds students gathered around the door, mocking a girl whose explicit image is painted there, causing her to rush out crying. Cameron is in the washrooms when she hears the girl crying and goes to check up on her. However, Cameron doesn't know how to comfort her and only states the obvious, that the girl is upset. On the other hand, as Sarah and Andy go for a walk, Andy explains that the police have told him to install a security system, but he can't afford it. Sarah wonders if someone wants to steal the Turk, and Andy explains that he not only designed the software but the hardware as well. He explains that he used hardware from various Xbox and PlayStation consoles combined with code that came to him in a dream. He explains that Turk has moods and can solve the same problem differently, and he hopes that someday the Turk will communicate with him. Sarah comments that he treats his setup like a human, and Andy says that one never knows what might happen. At school, a man shouts that someone is on top of the gym building, and the whole school rushes to see what's happening. John tries to run up to help, but Cameron stops him, warning they need to leave before the police arrive. Back home, John regrets not stepping in, but Sarah reminds him that even if he had, it wouldn't have changed anything. She warns John not to act like a hero and attract press attention. This angers John, who points out that she wants him to be a hero by saving people from Terminators, but won't let him save a life. He walks away, and Cameron comments that Andy must be killed if they want to stop Skynet. Meanwhile, the police arrive at the crime scene to find Dr. Fleming killed with his eyes gouged out, while blood is rubbed all over the formula to make synthetic flesh. On the other hand, Sarah hides near Andy's house, reflecting on how the first nuclear bomb test in 1945 prompted Oppenheimer to quote the Bhagavad Gita, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds." She watches as Andy tries to rush into his burning house to save his computer, but he is stopped by others. In a flashback, the Terminator emerges from the bathtub full of blood with newly formed flesh on his endoskeleton, while Dr. Fleming cuts his eye sockets open to realize that he has bright red cybernetic eyes. A man named Dr. David Lyman is documenting a case in his clinic when suddenly, he hears a sound and goes to check it. He finds the Terminator scrolling through patient photos on a computer, and David tells him to leave since the office is closed, but the Terminator finds a patient who matches his structure by 92%. He asks David if he can do reconstructive surgery, but David tells him to book an appointment on Monday. However, the Terminator takes off his mask, showing his disoriented state, and says that he wants it now. On the other side, Sarah reflects on how she once told John the story of the Golem, where a clay monster was created by a rabbi to protect the Jews, but it turned against its master and killed everyone in the city. This story disturbed John for days, and now she watches as John looks at a memorial poster for the girl who died at his school. She tries to talk to him, but he seems upset with Cameron, who interrupts them to inform them that Cromartie is back. She explains that she has been monitoring the media for possible threats and shows her the video of when they teleported, which shows Cromartie's head teleported with them. She explains that they are programmed to rebuild as long as their chip is intact, and Sarah starts planning their escape, but John insists they fight this time. However, Sarah isn't ready, so John explains that they hunt Cromartie by finding his whereabouts, but Cameron says that if he gets a new skin they won't recognize his face. When John insists, Sarah tells him to get the guns and they drive to the port, where the Colton shipment will arrive at 5 a.m., as Cromartie will need Colton for his endoskeleton. However, they find no signs of Cromartie. Instead, a group of men steal the Colton truck, prompting Sarah to follow them. Once they reach the area, they find a Terminator, but Cameron quickly comments that it's not Cromartie, as their endoskeletal structures don't match, and Sarah wonders why another Terminator would be here. The dead body of David, in the meantime, is brought to James, as the office had synthetic blood there. After investigating, they discover footage of a strange man entering the clinic on Friday who left on Sunday, and they identify him as a patient named George Laszlo. On the other side, John wants to hunt this Terminator, but Sarah says that the plan was to destroy Cromartie, so they shouldn't involve themselves in unnecessary things. John protests, but Sarah tells him that he is their last hope and they can't let him die like this. However, John argues that with so much Colton they could build an army of Terminators, and he suggests that they at least track the trucks, but Sarah firmly orders him to abort the mission. However, John slips into the building while they're distracted, and Cameron stops Sarah from following, warning that John will be caught if they're spotted. John gets inside the truck to hide his phone there, but doesn't find time to get back as the men arrive and lock the door with one guard sitting inside with the shipment. Sarah and Cameron watch from a window when suddenly a man points a gun at them, demanding to know what they're doing there. However, Sarah easily beats him up, but during this the trucks leave, and later Cameron tracks John's phone to find that they're heading north. Meanwhile, John's phone slides and breaks, alerting the guard inside the truck, but John manages to knock the guard unconscious. However, despite having the key, he struggles to open the lock from the outside because the opening is very small. On the other hand, James investigates George and takes a blood sample to confirm his suspicions. Meanwhile, Sarah interrogates the man she knocked unconscious, But when he refuses to speak, she lets Cameron handle him, and he eventually agrees to drive them to the truck's destination. Elsewhere, George is heating his food when Cromartie comes to his house and kills him by smashing his head into the mirror. On the other hand, James gives a presentation connecting the 6 murders, suggesting someone underwent surgery to look like George. However, a young FBI agent argues no surgery occurred because no anesthesia was used over the weekend, and a lengthy reconstruction surgery lasting 4 to 5 hours would be impossible to endure without anesthesia. The head of the department walks out, saying things don't add up, and James is disappointed. Back with Sarah and Cameron, they leave the man at a minefield and head to the destination. John exits the truck and hides, witnessing the Terminator named Carter kill the employees he hired to transport the Colton before locking the room from inside. Cameron quickly recognizes the area as the factory where she was made and explains that Colton is rare in the future, as most of it was destroyed by the nuclear bombs, so this Terminator is stocking it in blast-proof rooms for later. Inside, John encounters another man named Mike who points his gun at John, so he quickly explains that Carter is killing everyone after the job is done. Mike goes to Carter demanding money before pushing him, which reboots Carter, who easily kills Mike. After finishing his mission, Carter shuts himself off, so John tries to look for ways to open the gate, but instead he finds a phone. Meanwhile, Sarah blames Cameron, arguing that if she had let John save the girl, he wouldn't have taken such risks. Suddenly, she gets a call from John, who explains that Carter is inactive, and Cameron tells them that Carter will take 15 seconds to reboot even after he is triggered. So Sarah tells him to open the door and run. John tries to open the gate but notices that it needs Carter's key and manages to take it off his neck without triggering him. The door opens and Cameron quickly pushes him to move him out of the way, while John tries to start the truck. However, Carter overpowers Cameron and pushes the truck backward until Sarah shoots at him, causing John to drive over Carter, and Cameron locks the door before quickly getting out and taking the keys with her. On the other side, James visits George to inform him that someone might be trying to steal his identity, and gives him his card to report in case he notices something unusual. Back with the trio, Sarah reflects that not every version of the Golem story ends badly, as in one version, the clay monster protects the city and defeats all who try to harm it, while in another, the monster is destroyed before it can cause harm. While Sarah thinks this, Cameron drives the truck full of Colton off the cliff into the water, jumping out just before it falls. Once home, Sarah reflects on how humans want to control everything they create, whether machines or children, as they create them from their flesh, but can never truly know how they will turn out. Sarah thinks of how, out of all the training John received in the jungles of Central America, nothing prepared him for combat better than chess. It taught him that he needed to be patient, bold, calculating, and willing to sacrifice to win the war. Later, Sarah gets a call from Andy, who tells her that he's entering a chess tournament and asks if she'd like to meet him there. Meanwhile, Cromartie disguises himself as an FBI agent and goes to Charlie's house. He says he wants to ask questions about the Connor family and asks if Charlie has seen them, but Charlie says they died long ago and he has no connection to them anymore. The next morning, Sarah tells John that Andy rebuilt the Turk, and Cameron questions why Sarah didn't kill him. Sarah ignores her and explains that he has entered a chess tournament, which is computer against computer. She tells them to meet her there after school and leaves for the venue, where she is met by Andy, who shows her the new Turk, saying it is not as powerful but it's getting there. Andy then introduces her to Dmitry Shipkov, who taught the Turk to play chess. But Dmitry is busy and Andy explains he is worried about a military contract that the winner will get. On the other hand, the kids go to school and Cameron finds it weird that people are leaving notes for Jordan when she has died. So John explains that sometimes when people feel sad, crying isn't enough, so they write their feelings down. He notices his chemistry lab partner Sherry standing there and goes to her. Later in mechanics class, John helps a classmate against bullies. The classmate tells him he saw John that morning and warns him to stay away from Sherry because she's damaged goods, but John dismisses the comment. They join Sarah after school, and while Cameron examines other computers, Sarah tells John that Andy reached the finals, but now they're hoping the Japanese computer wins. Otherwise, Cameron will kill Andy for securing the military contract. However, Andy's computer manages to take the Japanese queen, making Sarah sure that Andy will win. Meanwhile, Charlie's wife asks him to tell her the truth, and he reveals that he saw John inside their house. She quickly tells him to report this, as they are fugitives, but she gets angry when he refuses to hand them over to the police. On the other hand, the Japanese computer surprisingly wins the match, and John comments that the Japanese team didn't lose their queen, they sacrificed it. Sarah considers telling Andy everything, but when she goes to his room backstage, she finds him dead. She quickly steps out and notices a guy suspiciously rushing past the crowd and follows him. They get into a fight, and Sarah tries to question his motive. But when the police arrive to arrest the fleeing man, Sarah hides and mourns Andy's death. The next morning, while Sarah is working out, Cameron offers her a pencil, telling her to write a note if she can't cry. But Sarah breaks the pencil before heading in. Sarah questions whether Andy's death bothers Cameron at all, and Cameron comments that the world is safer without Andy. John joins them, explaining he hacked into the LAPD computer and discovered the man who killed Andy has a barcode tattoo. Cameron identifies him as the fourth resistance fighter named Derek, who is one of John's best soldiers in the future. Cameron comments that his mission was to wait for John, not make a move without his orders. And Sarah says that she will go visit him, which confuses John, as the man is in lockdown. On the other side, the Terminator sent to terminate the resistance fighters scans the face of its fourth target, Derek Reese, before going to police officers patrolling the area and beating them up. Meanwhile, Derek is visited by James, who tells him that 3 people who had the same barcode tattoo as him were murdered, along with multiple others, but the blood found at the site isn't human, it's synthetic, and asks Derek to help. Derek only says that they are all going to die, so James orders him to be out of local custody, so he can talk more. However, the Terminator is brought into lockdown as a prisoner after attacking police officers. Meanwhile, Sarah steals several passes and poses as an FBI agent to meet Derek, who quickly tells her that he didn't kill Andy, as Andy was dead and somebody had stolen the Turk when he arrived. He tells her to leave, telling her that he has a Terminator following him and doesn't want her to get hurt. As Sarah is about to leave, Derek expresses sadness that Sarah will never know the Reese brothers who will support John so much in the future, and Sarah is shocked to hear the name of Kyle Reese from Derek. Sarah remembers when Kyle Reese was sent back by John to protect her. During their 2 days together, he told her about the apocalypse and the terror of a machine-dominated world. He gave her a son but never mentioned having a brother or family who could support them through their struggles. Once Sarah leaves, the Terminator breaks open his cell door to murder Derek, only to find out that he has been moved. On the other side, Sarah picks up the kids from school and tells them they're going on a mission. They follow the car transporting Derek, and Cameron gets on top of it before breaking the windshield and pushing one of the officers out. Sarah points a gun at the other and tells him to run. They free Derek and Sarah gets in the car to drive it. However, the Terminator follows them, so Sarah orders Cameron to fight it, and during the battle one of its arms is severed and falls to the ground. When they reach their safe point, they quickly get ready to run, but John wants to go and help Cameron, who is getting attacked badly by the Terminator. Sarah stops John but opens fire on the machine, who grabs Cameron's gun and aims at Derek. Cameron attacks again, causing the Terminator to miss Derek's head, but hit his stomach. Cameron overpowers the Terminator before asking John to bring the toolbox so she can take its chip out and destroy it. After all that, they rush to their home and Cameron tries to help Derek but quickly realizes that he has internal damage and would die without proper medical assistance. Not knowing what else to do, Sarah takes out her stun gun to go kidnap a doctor, and John tries to stop her, but she tells him that Derek is his uncle, so she must save him. Hearing this, John rushes out before Sarah can stop him. Meanwhile, James is shocked that 2 women overpowered 2 officers and kidnapped his prisoner, but he's even more surprised to discover the severed robotic arm on the road. While trying to stop Derek's bleeding, Sarah reflects that the only difference between chess and war is that chess has constant rules, whereas in war, truces can be called, and the greatest enemies can become allies. Just as Derek is taking his final breaths, John rushes in along with Charlie, who quickly starts giving Derek CPR. Sarah reminisces about the warnings of her lover Kyle Reese regarding a nightmarish judgment day and the box he bequeathed to his unborn son John Connor before he died. Meanwhile, as Charlie operates on a seriously injured Derek in the kitchen, Derek rants about Cameron being a dangerous Terminator and warns her to stay away, while Charlie tries to make sense of the situation and treat the wounds. Back in the post-Judgment Day future, Derek filters water through a cloth while sitting beside Kyle in the Resistance Fighters base. One of their friends named Wisher sits beside them, and together they make fun of Kyle by exaggerating tales of him saving their leader John. Kyle doesn't think much of it, and pulls out a picture of Sarah just as the bunker shakes violently from an explosion. He calls it his lucky charm, but Derek orders him to put it away, wondering why John Connor would give Kyle a picture of his mother. Another fighter, Sales, approaches them to inform them of John's orders to investigate the origin of the centaurs who caused the explosion. Moments later, they climb up and navigate their way through the destroyed surface, while avoiding the attention of Skynet jet patrols. Having lost the trail, they contemplate their next move, and Wisher mentions that Connor suspects that Skynet is building a secret weapon. When they see a couple Terminators dragging away a huge machine, Kyle is sent ahead to scout while the others provide cover, but 2 jets suddenly ambush him, prompting Derek to leave his position to provide support. Derek exchanges fire with the jets on the move, but suddenly runs into the chokehold of a Terminator. Back in 2007, Charlie extracts a bullet from Derek's wounds after stabilizing him. He reveals how authorities told him his runaway ex-fiancée Sarah was a schizophrenic who hated machines and eventually died. Meanwhile, Cameron advises John to take a sedative to calm his nerves, but John refuses and questions her if she knows who Derek is, which results in Cameron giving factual information about Derek, leaving John speechless. Charlie continues telling Sarah how he visited the site of the blast in which she was killed but found no satisfaction. Sarah confesses that she did not want to leave him, but she had no choice due to the circumstances that are too complicated to explain. Back in the future, Derek wakes up in a truck and calls for Kyle, but sees only Wisher and Sales beside him. When he tries reaching for an unconscious man sitting in front of him, Derek realizes that his legs are chained to the seat, and the man is the Terminator that captured them, who proceeds to knock him unconscious. On the other hand, Charlie struggles to accept Sarah's story about Skynet, Terminators, and Doomsday, even with a Terminator body lying in front of him. Sarah offers him a drink, and Cameron takes away the Terminator to melt its endoskeleton with thermite. John gets Charlie a beer and asks him if he blames him for getting mixed up in the matter of Terminators and Skynet, but Charlie only regrets not being able to help him before. In the future, Derek wakes up in a house with many other captured humans as a Terminator monitors them and prints a barcode on his wrist with a laser. Derek introduces himself to a fellow prisoner named Timms as the Terminator drags Wisher to the basement. Meanwhile, in 2007, Sarah finds Cameron holding a pillow over Derek's head and thinks she's harming him, but Cameron is simply giving him a pillow. Derek then starts vomiting blood, and Charlie emphasizes he needs a transfusion of the AB+ blood type. Sarah suggests anonymously dropping him off at the hospital, but Cameron reminds them he is wanted for Andy's murder, so it is better to kill him. However, John volunteers to be the donor, requesting Charlie to test his blood. Meanwhile, in the future, Wisher returns from the basement in a dazed state, while Derek notices Skynet jets transporting the machines he saw earlier. Back in the present, Sarah warns John about the blood transfusion, but he stands firm and suggests they tell Derek about their blood relation. But Sarah deems it too dangerous. In 2027, Wisher regains consciousness and confesses to Derek that his real name is Andy Good, and he built the computer that eventually evolved into Skynet. The Terminator then takes Derek to the basement and locks him in a dark room. In the present, Cameron picks apart the body of the Terminator, while John watches over Derek as the blood transfusion takes place. Meanwhile, noticing Derek shares John's blood type and Sarah's surname, Charlie asks if he's Sarah's husband, which she denies. Suddenly, Derek wakes up in a frenzy and pushes away John, shouting for Kyle before they sedate him. Ahead in the future, Derek is brought back in a dazed state from the basement, and the next day they find the Terminator gone, and an axe lies close to them, with which they free themselves and hurry back to their bunker with Timms, but find it destroyed. Meanwhile, in 2007, Charlie concludes that Kyle must be Sarah's ex-lover, which Sarah confirms. At the other end, Derek and the others search the destroyed bunker when a party of resistance fighters led by Sumner arrive and inform them that Skynet destroyed the bunker, but John survived and led an attack on a Skynet base in Topanga with Kyle, destroying it later. However, Kyle was not seen after that. Back in 2007, Charlie sees Cameron coldly dispose of the Terminator in his garage, which creeps him out, while in 2027 Derek is refused any information about his brother and their operation in Topanga, and a reprogrammed Terminator Cameron is added to the resistance against his wishes. At night, Derek is woken up by people screaming, and he finds a Terminator shooting people in their base. He shoots it, but it has no effect until Cameron arrives to take it out by shoving it through a wall and shooting it. She then reveals that they turn rogue sometimes, but no one can tell why. Back in the garage, Sarah confronts Cameron for scaring Charlie and threatens her to stay away from him before ordering her to find and dispose of the left hand of the Terminator, but Cameron secretly hides a component of it. Later, when Charlie is leaving, Sarah denies his request to stay as he hands her the card of an FBI agent in case they need it. Back inside, Sarah consoles John upon Charlie's departure. Simultaneously in the future, Cameron takes Derek to John, and as he enters the room he sees a big machine through its window just as John approaches him from behind. Later, while overlooking the ruins of the city, Derek, Timms, Sales, and Sumner prepare to travel back in time to save Kyle and the others through the newly acquired time machine on John's orders. Later, they time travel to a warehouse, and upon emerging, they see that the world is still intact. Back in 2007, Derek regains consciousness, and John tells him how his brother Kyle saved him in 1997, but doesn't tell him that Kyle is his father. After that, we see a flashback of Derek shooting Andy Good dead. Cameron, disguised as a police officer, arrives at a power plant and bends the gate to break in. Once inside, she sticks her hand in a turbine, damaging it and cutting off power to large parts of the city. Moments later, she walks into a police station during the confusion caused by the blackout and breaks into the evidence room, stealing the file of the Andy Good murder. On the other end, Sarah visits Andy's grave in a crematorium. Later at the house, while Derek sleeps, Sarah checks his wounds, but he suddenly seizes her hand and questions her about the T-888 Terminator and Dimitri. Sarah informs him that the Terminator has been vaporized, but Dimitri is still on the loose. Derek suggests sending Cameron to take him out, and Sarah agrees. Sarah then asks John to skip school, so they can retrieve the Terminator arm from the FBI, which Cameron could not find in the police station. John dismisses the importance of the arm, claiming that Skynet was built off chips, not Terminator arms, and that skipping school would draw unnecessary attention. Cameron, on the other hand, skips school as she is tasked by Sarah to discreetly investigate Dimitri's sister, who teaches ballet, to get a lead on Dimitri. Later, Sarah, pretending to be the senior property officer at LAPD, calls the FBI office, reporting that a prosthetic hand was accidentally deposited in the FBI evidence section from a robbery by a drunk rookie police officer. However, the FBI officer finds no record of it, and James, who is passing by, also denies it. At night, James watches videotapes from Sarah's time in the mental hospital, in one of which she tries to escape and smashes the camera. In another, she rambles about the invasion of machines and attacks the doctor before she is sedated. After watching the videos, the detective examines the prosthetic hand from the crime scene and considers the possibility that Sarah's warnings might be true. The next day, he checks out Sarah's room in the mental hospital where she spent 3 years before escaping, but finds that her doctor, Dr. Silberman, and all the staff acquainted with her have left. Meanwhile, Sarah breaks into James's house and finds the videotapes inside. On the other hand, Cameron disguises herself as a student in the ballet class taught by Dimitri's sister, Maria. There, she notices a Russian man arguing with Maria about the money Dimitri borrowed and threatens her before leaving. Later at night, John finds Derek loading guns in Sarah's room and they argue about Charlie's reliability, which Derek doubts in addition to being suspicious of Cameron, whom he deems a machine not deserving a name. He repeats himself to Sarah, who tells him to rest and asks John to find an address. Meanwhile, John secretly takes the videotape from Sarah's bag and plays it on his TV, which deeply upsets him. The next morning, Sarah prepares breakfast and informs Derek that James has the prosthetic arm. While John hurriedly hands Sarah Dr. Silberman's address and leaves without having breakfast, Sarah finds it suspicious and discovers that the videotape has been taken from her bag and finds it in John's room. And when played, it reveals that Sarah gave up John's guardianship to the state during her hospitalization. Meanwhile, James visits Dr. Silberman at his house in the countryside and questions him about Sarah. The doctor tells him that Sarah was paranoid, schizophrenic, and delusional, believing in Terminators and their invasion. The tea served by the doctor is drugged, as the detective starts to feel dizzy and eventually passes out. Around the same time, Cameron visits Maria's ballet school, where she observes her dancing. Maria inquires about her purpose, and while they are talking, the Russian man from the previous day returns and threatens to break Maria's leg. Cameron intervenes and sends the man unconscious with a kick, while inquiring Maria about Dimitri's whereabouts, promising to help him. James regains consciousness to find himself tied to a chair. He discovers that Dr. Silberman believes him to be a Terminator from the future, about whom Sarah warned him. The detective warns him that he is an FBI agent, but the doctor stabs his thigh with a knife to test him. Meanwhile, in the lawn of the house, Derek enjoys how the grass and fresh air feel on his skin after years spent in the wasteland. Sarah comes out and they talk about Kyle and his grave, to which Sarah promises to take him one day. Back at Dr. Silberman's house, the doctor apologizes for thinking the detective was a Terminator after seeing him bleed from the thigh wound, but keeps him bound. He then asks him if he believes in the apocalypse and then reveals that he witnessed 2 of the Terminators, one of which was very big and threw a guard through a window with ease, while the other was very refined, but he has no proof of it. However, James informs him that he has the evidence to prove it, which he calls the hand, and sends the doctor to fetch it from the trunk of his car. But the doctor resolves to destroy the arm to help Sarah and prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. The detective tells him that Sarah is dead, but Dr. Silberman again sedates him. Back at the house, John brings Derek some t-shirts and mentions that he also slept on couches frequently while his mother was locked up in the mental hospital. He also shows disappointment at his mother's relinquishment of his guardianship, but Derek defends her, saying that being locked up in a room changes people. Elsewhere, Maria leads Cameron to Dimitri's hotel hideout, where Cameron offers him a diamond in exchange for information about the Turk. Dimitri confesses that he programmed the Turk to lose its final match, so he could steal it and sell it to pay the loan sharks from whom he borrowed money to bring his sister to the USA. He gives Cameron a chit with information about the Turk's buyer, with which she takes off, leaving the siblings helpless as the loan sharks arrive and kill both. On the other end, Silberman douses the house with gasoline and sets it on fire, leaving the detective inside. But as he leaves, Sarah arrives, to whom he apologizes for not believing in her. However, she knocks him out, takes the prosthetic arm, and saves James from the fire while he's unconscious. When he wakes up, he finds the hand gone and Silberman laughing maniacally as he lies on the ground while water rains down on them from the sprinklers. Back at home, Sarah asks Cameron about Dimitri, to which she responds by giving her the buyer's information and the news of Dimitri and his sister's deaths without her involvement. Sarah then goes to John's room to console him and tells him she couldn't accept abandoning her son, so she escaped the same day when he tried to break her out. The two of them accept their mistakes and later burn the prosthetic hand, while Sarah, as the narrator, comments how technology can create life, and if it can replace us, then it won't have to destroy us. As she is saying this, Dr. Silberman is locked up in the mental hospital where he worked, while Derek peeks into Cameron's room, where she gracefully performs ballet dancing to music. Cromartie, disguised as FBI agent Kester, visits a high school administrator's office demanding information about recently enrolled male Caucasian students aged 15 to 18. When the administrator refuses due to a lack of court orders, Cromarty breaks his neck and checks the database himself. In the meantime, Sarah calls the buyer of the Turk, Mr. Sarkeesian, when John warns her that the food is going to burn, making her rush to the kitchen. Derek enters the kitchen and reveals the T-888 Terminator's chip that Cameron had hidden in her room, emphasizing that she cannot be trusted. But Cameron argues she kept it to access the Terminator's visual data for intelligence purposes. John and Cameron then purchase some computer parts from a video game shop to equip their computer and process the chip. Back at home, they manage to access the visual memory of the Terminator, who had adopted the name Vic, and was married to a woman. They also manage to read his address from a letter visible in his visual memory and decide to investigate. Later, Sarah and Derek arrive at the house to find it abandoned with letters piled in the mailbox, leading Derek to assume Vic killed his wife. Upon going inside, they find the computer gone and discover that Vic's wife, Barbara, was a city manager, making them suspect that Skynet wanted information about the city infrastructure from her. Meanwhile, another video from Vic's memory shows his wife's concern about their marriage not working out as she urges him to open up to her. In their school cafe, John approaches Sherry and invites her to study together, but she becomes agitated when he mentions that she is from Wichita, which she denies, and leaves. Elsewhere, Cromarty visits a high school locker room in search of Eric Carlson, suspecting him to be John in disguise. However, he is just another boy. On the way out, he forcefully shoves the coach into the lockers when he is confronted. Back home, John discovers through Vic's video memory that he killed Barbara and threw her off a cliff. They visit the site at night, but discover the body belongs to Jessica Peck, a woman lobbying against Barbara's traffic control program called ARTI, which could become Skynet's nervous system in the future, providing it with surveillance data. Vic's memory shows Barbara being concerned about Jessica opposing her project in the city hall. So Sarah and company decide to infiltrate the city hall and plant a virus designed by John to fail ARTI before it can benefit Skynet. Sometime later, Derek and Sarah sit at a diner in front of the heavily guarded city hall, planning their infiltration, when he informs her that they can use the underground tunnels connecting the buildings, which were built during the Cold War, where Kyle and he took shelter after Skynet bombed them. At school, a fellow student hands Cameron a call slip for John from a cop waiting in the principal's office. Cameron peeks at the cop from the window, discovering that it is actually Cromarty, and she cunningly sends her fellow student named Morris to the office as John. Cromarty scans him and leaves while Cameron follows him, but John suddenly appears from behind, prompting Cameron to take him aside and quit Cromarty's pursuit. However, she hides the matter from him, and instead he finds out about it from Morris, who boasts about deceiving the cop. Later, while decoding Vic's memory, John sees Vic manipulating Barbara to continue the project despite her desire to quit. As John turns around, he is startled by Cameron sitting behind him, and she reveals that she intentionally sent Morris to the office in John's place because the cop was actually Cromarty, searching for him across the school. She adds that he would not come back to the same school, and John tells her to hide the news from Sarah so she does not move them to another school. Further video evidence from Vic's memory reveals that Barbara was being spied on by Sales, whom Vic tracked to the Resistance fighter's safe house and killed him along with Timms and Sumner. The video upsets Derek, who reveals that Sales was spying on Barbara without his knowledge because they had many leads to follow. Sarah also storms off to her room, and when John checks on her, she reveals that she cannot bear any more people dying for their success. That night, Derek and Sarah enter underground tunnels leading to City Hall. They find a wall blocking their path, which Derek blasts through with dynamite. They enter the hall through the tunnels and access the system to upload the virus, but the system blocks it. So Derek suggests blowing up the building, but they are soon detected by guards who pursue them through the tunnels, prompting Sarah to hide and let them run after Derek. When they corner Derek, she sneaks up on them and knocks them out. Back at the house, John and Cameron find Vic's chip resisting certain access to memory, and suddenly it somehow gets John's phone to dial for the internet, while turning the webcam on to scan John. Cameron realizes that Vic is reactivating, and they quickly unplug the computer and the chip. Meanwhile, Derek and Sarah return from their failed mission, but John suggests they plug Cameron's microchip into one of the traffic lights to hack and shut down ARTI. Since Cameron is currently the most sophisticated learning computer in the world, for this purpose John makes an incision in her skull and takes out the chip, shutting her down. Moments later, Derek and John pick a traffic light and hack into its interface by plugging Cameron's chip into it and waiting for her to disable it. Cameron successfully gets inside the system and shuts it down, causing citywide traffic jams as the traffic lights start to malfunction. Derek then unplugs her and intends to destroy the chip, as she has done her job and is no longer useful, but John defends her and takes the chip back. Meanwhile, John reinserts the chip into Cameron's skull and shows tenderness towards her before she wakes up and reveals that she saw everything when she was inside the system. Later, when Derek is taking a shower, Sarah walks in on him, informing him that she got a call from Sarkeesian, who has arranged a meeting the next day to make a deal about the Turk. She warns him not to lie to her again, as he did in the case of Andy Good, whom he murdered but then denied doing so. Another video memory from Vic shows him approaching Barbara while she is showering after having finished making Artie, and is excited for her vacation in Tahiti, but Vic suddenly grabs hold of her neck and chokes her to death. Sarah narrates in the background warning how we often set ourselves up for terrible fates by not bothering to look behind the masks people put on and let the real danger take us by surprise. On the morning of the Judgment Day, which happened on the 21st of April 2011, a 15-year-old Derek is playing baseball with Kyle, teaching him how to hit the ball. After a couple of misses, Kyle manages to hit the ball well, and as he celebrates, they hear the sound of explosions, which Kyle naively assumes to be fireworks, but as they look up, they see missiles launched into the sky. Back in 2007, Sarah and Cameron enter and book a computer in an internet cafe, the location of their meeting with Sarkeesian for buying the Turk, while Derek and John wait outside in the car. John explains Moore's Law, proposed by the founder of Intel, to Derek, stating that chip power doubles every 2 years, making 4 years sufficient to create Skynet. However, Derek counters that it only took Skynet 4 seconds to turn their childhood into a nightmare when missiles set the sky ablaze, forcing him to take his younger brother underground. On the other end, Sarah receives an anonymous message on her computer which demands she bring $500,000 to their next meeting location for the Turk's purchase, and the sender logs off without providing further information. Sometime later, Detective James visits Charlie at home claiming Sarah is alive and demands more information since Charlie must know something, but Charlie denies any knowledge, saying he gave the same statement to another agent named Kester, which makes James suspicious since he knows no agent by that name. Elsewhere, a man enters Carlos Salceda's house with his boss Sarkeesian, who inquires Carlos about Sarah and murders 3 of his men when he refuses to comply. Meanwhile, Charlie visits Sarah at her house and advises her to cooperate with Detective James so the FBI can protect them, but she explains that the FBI can't help them and tells him to leave for his safety. Later, Cameron determines the worth of the diamonds from Derek's safe house as they calculate the money for buying the Turk. They only manage to acquire around $246,000, so they plan to negotiate the price with Sarkeesian. Moments later, Derek and Sarah visit the food court where Sarkeesian was supposed to meet them, but he does not come and they leave immediately when they see police in the area. When they return home, they find Sarkeesian sitting on the couch, who refuses to sell them the Turk, but instead threatens to give Sarah away to the FBI unless she pays him 4 times the agreed amount of money without getting the Turk. When Derek gets hold of him, Sarkeesian threatens to get his men to kill John, so Sarah lets him go but instructs Derek to follow him. On the other hand, when Cameron inquires about the reason for John's sad mood during the school trip to a museum, he tells her that he has his birthday tomorrow and his mom has probably forgotten about it. During the conversation, Cameron notices Sarkeesian's thug stalking them, so she tries to confront him but is instructed by their teacher to stick to the group. However, Morris later sees her closing the trunk of a Mercedes, and upon his asking, she reveals that it belongs to the man she killed and stuffed in the trunk who was stalking them. John arrives at that moment, and they play it off as a joke, and he makes Cameron accept Morris's prom proposal as they quickly leave in the car. Meanwhile, at the FBI office, Detective James checks for Agent Kester in the database, while the T-888 Terminator Cromartie searches for Sarah Connor's file in the evidence room. He's told Agent James has it, and they narrowly miss each other near the elevators. On the other end, John and Cameron bring back the Mercedes to their garage and open the trunk to check the thug's dead body, who receives a call from Sarkeesian, demanding that he forcefully bring Sarah's kids to him. Cameron impersonates the thug's voice, but they don't manage to get his location. However, Chola, the woman guarding Carlos's house, arrives at that moment and takes them to Sarkeesian's hideout, which turns out to be the internet cafe they visited earlier. They force their way inside, but the cafe manager alerts Sarkeesian, who locks himself in a back room. Sarah instructs John to look for the Turk, but he only finds a young girl in a room. Meanwhile, Cameron smashes through the wall, but Sarkeesian escapes through a small opening and circles back to take John hostage, forcing him into an alley. Sarah reaches them as Sarkeesian holds John at gunpoint, and Derek brings out the young girl as a counter-hostage, but when Sarkeesian doesn't claim her, Derek shoots him dead while pretending to console the girl. Back inside, they send the girl to her father, the cafe manager, and take Sarkeesian's hard drive with them. Meanwhile, in his office, Detective James informs his partner that Agent Kester, whom she might know as actor George Laszlo with a forged ID, is actually someone else pretending to be Laszlo, and this person committed 6 murders before daring to infiltrate the FBI. The agent has trouble believing the story, but they still set off to arrest Kester. On the other hand, John is busy decrypting Sarkeesian's hard drive and tells Sarah that it would take quite a while. When Sarah leaves, Derek comes to him and takes him out to buy him ice cream for his birthday, claiming that they will celebrate his birthdays in the future. He intentionally takes him to a park where Derek and Kyle used to play baseball, and he reveals that he knows John is Kyle's son because they resemble each other a lot, which pleases John. Sometime later, James arrives with an FBI squad to raid the hotel room where Cromartie is staying, and Charlie, who is on paramedics duty, rushes to the site in his ambulance when he hears on the radio transmission that the target of the FBI raid is Agent Kester. During the raid, Cromartie brutally wipes out the whole squad but spares James. When Charlie arrives, he sees Cromartie leaving the hotel, and inside he sees the bloodbath, finally understanding why Sarah didn't go to the FBI for help. Back at home, John continues decrypting the hard drive and informs Sarah about the record of another man in the drive, who had also been looking for the Turk. Sarah then asks him to take a break so they can celebrate his birthday and questions if he thought she would forget it. John deems it less important, but Sarah lets him know that stopping Skynet is only a mission, and there is more to their lives than that. Moments later, John and Sarah find a picture of Sarkeesian on the hard drive, which is different from the man Derek killed in the alley. Simultaneously, the real Sarkeesian watches Cameron get into her car outside their house, and as she turns the key, it blows up, having been rigged by the real Sarkeesian, who walks away. Season 2 kicks off right away, where we see Cameron unconscious in the car that exploded on ignition. A man breaks into Sarah's house, causing her to fall when he unexpectedly opens the door. He points a gun at Sarah and John runs to the back door, but he is caught by another man. Cameron reboots and attempts to move, but she discovers that her chip has been compromised, so she removes the foreign object from her head. Meanwhile, a man ties up and beats Sarah, while John struggles to cut his restraints. The other man searches around the house and finds the hard drive. As he attempts to light a smoke, Cameron enters and attacks him, causing kerosene in the storage room to spill and ignite. She goes upstairs, where John and Sarah have freed themselves and defeated the guy holding them hostage. However, when she scans John, she suddenly reads the mission to terminate him and points her gun at him. But before she can shoot, the explosion causes her to fall. John notices that she hasn't died, so he jumps out of the window to run, and Sarah follows him. Meanwhile, Charlie goes to the hotel after Cromartie leaves, only to find a pile of dead bodies. Later, when more officers arrive, FBI agent Norgard shows James the dead body of George, asking if this is the man who killed 20 people. When James confirms, she tells him that the office wants a detailed report on the incident. Sarah and John escape in a car, where Sarah repeatedly asks if he's okay. When he remains unresponsive, Sarah turns to address him firmly, causing them to crash, and John hits his head while Sarah injures her shoulder. With no other option, Sarah tells him to run despite his injured leg. Charlie rushes after hearing that the house had caught fire, and the firefighter reports 2 dead bodies. He finds Derek disguised as a firefighter, and they wonder where Sarah has gone, but suddenly hear the walkie-talkie reporting an accident and head there. Meanwhile, a woman named Weaver calls Mr. Walsh, who has the Turk, and Walsh tells her the Turk doesn't appear to be worth $300,000, but promises to deliver it to her within an hour. Weaver tells her assistant to call a meeting of department heads for tonight, even though it's a weekend. On the other hand, upon reaching the area of the accident, Charlie is informed that a woman and a teenage boy ran out of the car and went in the south direction. Sarah and John, having no other place to hide, get inside a local church, and Sarah asks the priest for sanctuary, so he tells them to come inside. However, Cameron tries to find them, and she notices blood on the street, so she decides to follow it. On the other side, Weaver takes the Turk from Walsh, telling him that most computers are obedient, and the only reason she wants this one is that it can be unpredictable. While Sarah and John are at the priest's house, Sarah argues they must kill Cameron since the explosion reverted her settings, and this makes John angry, even though he knows they have no other choice. On the other hand, the FBI chief questions James about how George killed so many officers, but knowing the FBI won't accept the truth about Terminators, James lies and says he doesn't know how he survived, so the chief forces James to take a 6-week paid leave. Meanwhile, Cameron enters the church and lies to the pastor, claiming she's looking for her family who were in an accident. However, when the pastor says no one came there, she decides to search around. Knowing Cameron would follow the blood trail, John had deliberately dropped some near the water. When Cameron puts her hand in the water, John electrocutes her, and he hurriedly searches for her chip, knowing she'll reboot in 2 minutes. John tries to remove her chip but is unable to do so in time, and Sarah quickly tells him to run as Cameron begins rebooting. They rush out and steal a car, which Sarah drives into a tunnel. However, when they emerge from the tunnel, Cameron stands directly in front of them, and she strikes the car, causing it to flip. John worriedly checks on the unconscious Sarah, who soon regains consciousness and tells him to leave. John runs, but Cameron reaches Sarah and demands she call for John, hurting her when she refuses. John reaches an empty warehouse where he tries to repair a broken truck, but the sound of ignition gets Cameron's attention. She stands in front of the truck and throws an object that shatters the windshield, but before she can do anything else, Sarah crashes in and traps Cameron between the 2 vehicles. John gets out and once again tries to find Cameron's chip to kill her, but she begs John not to remove her chip, telling him she loves him and knows he loves her too. But despite this, John finally manages to extract the chip. Later, Sarah calls Derek to the warehouse, who brings Charlie to check their wounds. Derek goes to talk to John, who insists on repairing Cameron, so he lets Sarah talk to him, who says that she understands that John wants to try fixing Cameron, but she can't let him take such a big risk, so John orders her to burn Cameron. They get into Charlie's fire truck with Cameron's body, and Sarah tries to tell John that everything Cameron said earlier was to trick John because Terminators don't have feelings. They take her to a secluded area where John places Cameron's chip in her hand before asking Charlie for a flare. However, after taking the flare, he apologizes and puts the chip back into Cameron, then draws his gun to prevent Derek from stopping him. Cameron wakes up and John points his gun at her, but she says she isn't there to kill him. He hands her his gun, asking her to promise that she won't kill him, so she scans him to override the termination mission before handing him back the gun. Knowing Cameron is no longer a threat, John helps her get out of the car and burns it. Meanwhile, James goes to Sarah's burned house and finds Cromarty there. James tells him that he will never lead him to Sarah, so if that's the reason Cromarty let him live, he should kill James. But Cromarty leaves. In the meeting, Weaver announces the formation of a new division in a meeting, saying she will be taking a member from each team. When the head of the AI division, Mr. Tuck, protests that he doesn't have anyone to spare, she dismisses him, saying the list of new teams will be on their desks. She then tells them that the new team will be called Babylon, which will change the world. Meanwhile, Sarah takes a sandwich outside looking for John but finds Cameron there, who asks her to never let John revive her if she forgets her mission again. She goes to John, who is in the shower, so she sits outside the door and tells him that whatever happened today, at least they all made it out alive. John shaves his hair inside while Sarah wishes him a happy birthday. On the other hand, Mr. Tuck complains about Weaver to a colleague in the washroom. However, once the colleague leaves, the urinal transforms into Weaver, who turns her finger into a sharp object and stabs Mr. Tuck, saying she dislikes him as well. The next morning, Derek walks into the church and asks Sarah if she slept, but she tells him that she couldn't sleep in Cameron's presence. John wakes up and goes to Cameron, asking her if she's back to normal, but she tells him that she can't trust him anymore because he risked his life to save her. Sarah tells John to go to school so he can get back to normal, but refuses to let Cameron go with him. John sits quietly until his classmate Riley comes to sit with him and randomly asks him for money to buy more food, which makes him smile. On the other hand, Sarah goes to look for a house and tells them that they will move in today. Once she settles down and is about to take a nap on the couch, a man suddenly barges into their house by breaking the window. Sarah notices he is badly injured and has a barcode tattoo on his arm, signifying that he was sent by John. The man tells them to stop Greenway at the Serrano power plant and that they only have 2 days. However, before he can give them more information, he passes away. Derek tells Sarah that he will handle it, but she refuses to let people die and says that they will go together. They reach the plant, where Cameron explains that humans took this plant from Skynet in 2026, and Derek adds that it is one of their key strategic holdings. Believing that the man sent from the future is trying to sabotage them, however, they decide to check what will happen in 2 days. So they apply for janitor positions at the plant, where Cameron searches through employee records and easily identifies Carl Greenway. Meanwhile, James goes to Charlie's house to ask a few questions. Charlie also shows up and explains the whole thing to his wife Michelle, who refuses to believe in Terminators or the fact that Charlie doesn't love Sarah anymore, and slaps him before leaving the house. James tells Charlie to move houses, as this place isn't safe anymore, but Charlie doesn't believe there is a safe place anywhere. Back at the school, John buys Riley food and then he tells her that they're moving as his mom has found a new place that he hasn't seen yet. He invites Riley to come see the mystery house, and she agrees. On the other hand, Sarah starts small talk with Greenway, faking that she is from the same hometown as he is, and then asks him about the big event of the reactor going online in 2 days, but he doesn't give her any information. He is called by his supervisor named Nelson, who takes him to a private room, and Sarah almost gets caught spying on them. Meanwhile, Riley jokes about John acting like it's his first time bringing a girl home, but he mentions that she is correct. They head to his room, only to find it decorated as a 5-year-old's room. Later that night, Sarah heads to the bar where Greenway is drinking and asks how he ended up in the power plant. So Greenway tells Sarah about his cancer story and she calls him lucky for surviving. Meanwhile, Derek breaks into Greenway's car, but a man appears out of nowhere and breaks the windshield before running away. The three gather to share the information they've collected, and Sarah explains that Greenway has a lot of enemies, as he stopped the last reactor test because of safety concerns. If he stops the plant tomorrow, the plant might get shut down, and people are afraid that they will lose their jobs. Cameron says that she hacked into his computer and read his notes, realizing that a coolant pump is showing slight irregularities. If they run the test despite the problem, the reactor would melt and half of the city would be contaminated. However, if Greenway stops the test, the plant will be closed, and the Resistance won't be able to use it in the future, so Skynet will win either way. They return home to find Riley in the house, and Sarah calls John to talk in private. She tells John that they don't have time for this, but John questions whether he will ever have time to live his life. Riley feels bad and tells them that she can leave, but John asks her to stay before dragging her upstairs. There, Riley asks him if he thinks about the future, and he says that he does a lot, but doesn't know if he will ever have freedom. The next day, Sarah follows Nelson into a restricted area of the plant, but gets caught. So he tells her to suit up properly and clean the leaked hydraulic fluid. She goes inside the area with high radiation warnings, but feels suffocated and quickly exits. Once she comes out, they run a test on her, only to reveal that they have bad news. A few people wash her while harshly scrubbing the radiation-affected area. Meanwhile, as John wakes up, Riley tells him that she is heading to class and asks if he wants to come along, but he tells her that he will skip school today, so she leaves after getting his number. On the other hand, Sarah is scanned again to reveal no radiation on her, and Nelson gives her old clothes back, saying that the scanner sensed wrong radiation, which leaves Sarah feeling humiliated. She leaves and finds Greenway acting oddly like a Terminator, so she calls Derek to ask if he is searching Greenway's house. He tells her he is heading inside and finds the dead body of Greenway at the house. On the other hand, the Terminator impersonating Greenway starts the test before heading down and opening a vault, which causes an emergency, so Sarah tells Cameron to fix it. While Cameron goes to the vault, the Terminator kills everyone in the control room before smashing Nelson into the wall and heading towards the vault. When Derek reaches the site, he hears the emergency sirens, and Derek asks Sarah to leave, but she refuses. She rushes down to the restricted high radiation area and opens fire on the Terminator impersonating Greenway, giving Cameron enough time to throw him into a plant, causing an explosion. Cameron goes and fixes the vault before putting the Terminator in one of the sealed bins. Later at night, she scans Sarah for radiation and announces that she is clear, but Sarah still wonders how long she has to be scared that one day she might develop a disease that will kill her. However, Cameron says that she is uncertain, as she might blow up any day as well. On the other hand, Sarah notices blood on a pillar and follows the trail into the garage, only to find various names written on the wall in blood. Meanwhile, a press conference is held where a man reveals that because of the tragic incident, Serrano and 6 power plants of the country are entering a partnership with Automite Systems, which will employ machines in the control room to reduce human error. Later, the man sits in his car and shape-shifts into Weaver before driving off. Charlie and Michelle leave the city due to the threats, but stop at a gas station outside California where Charlie leaves to grab a can of soda for Michelle. Suddenly, another car shows up, and Cromartie gets out of it before getting into Charlie's car and driving away with a screaming Michelle while Charlie can do nothing but run after the car. Meanwhile, John fixes his neighbor Casey's TV and they watch the news, which reports that George Laszlo killed 20 FBI agents in a hostage rescue mission. Once he returns home, he gets a call from Charlie, who asks him to pass the phone to Sarah. Charlie begs Sarah to help him, explaining that Cromartie has taken his wife, so Sarah asks for his location in code words as she doesn't want John to follow them. She cuts the call and packs a bag of guns before telling Cameron not to let John out of her sight. She goes outside and tells Derek that Cromartie has kidnapped Michelle, so she is going there, asking him if he wants to join her. However, Derek is against the idea of going, saying that it's a ploy to get to John, but when Sarah doesn't back down, he decides to go with her. Meanwhile, Michelle is tied to a chair in a warehouse and tries to move her chair to get to the phone nearby while Cromartie sets up a computer in the warehouse. John and Cameron buy the computers, and as they are putting them in the car, John gets a call from Riley, who asks him to come meet her at the magazine stand in front of the coffee shop. John tells Cameron to drop him there, but she refuses, saying that she needs to keep an eye on him. However, John is frustrated and tells her to follow his orders. Just as Cameron gets inside the car, John runs away, making Cameron follow him elsewhere. James is watching TV when he is called by Weaver, who tells him to meet her for a job opportunity. James refuses, saying he doesn't know her well enough to meet her, but she insists, saying that she will explain what killed his colleagues. Sarah and Derek reach an agitated Charlie, and Derek tells him to consider Michelle dead as Cromartie only kidnapped her to get to John. Suddenly, Charlie gets a call from Michelle, who tells him that she is in an abandoned building outside Mojave. However, Derek asks him to make sure it's his wife and not Cromartie impersonating her voice, so he asks her questions about the first time they were together, and she answers them all correctly. However, Cromartie comes into the room where Michelle is, so she quickly hangs up and pretends that she didn't move. Cromartie tapes her mouth before placing various mousetraps nearby and putting her chair in contact with the mousetraps that are wired to a bomb. Meanwhile, John tells Riley that he doesn't plan on returning to school as his mom will homeschool him for a while. But Riley suddenly points out Cameron, who is sitting at the cafe and staring at them. John grabs Riley's arm and they start running while Cameron gets up to follow them. On the other side, the trio enters the warehouse and finds Michelle completely trapped. So Sarah removes Michelle's mouth tape and tells her that she is sitting on a bomb that will go off if she moves. Charlie tries to comfort her, but Michelle angrily tells him that they will all die and asks Charlie to stop lying to her, as nothing is fine. Sarah tells Charlie to bring her bag from the car so she can defuse the bomb, but Charlie tells her that Cromartie has destroyed the car. Sarah realizes that Cromartie is messing with them and removes the bomb, which is actually molding clay. Sarah tells Charlie to cut Michelle free while explaining that Cromartie destroyed the car, so they won't be able to reach John in time as they will be stuck here. She calls John to tell him to stay outside with Cameron under all conditions, but he dismisses her warning. Derek, while exploring the warehouse, finds a computer that displays Sarah's call to John and then discovers a real bomb. But before he can do anything, Cromartie blows up the cell tower. Most of them are okay, but Michelle gets hit by shrapnel that makes her bleed. However, she decides that she can still walk back with them. Meanwhile, James visits Weaver, who shows him pictures of a commuter jet that had Terminator remains in it, saying that her brother was on the team that investigated that case. She adds that 8 years ago, locals reported seeing a man with a Terminator leg trying to kill John Connor, and now believes that a Terminator killed 20 FBI agents. She tells him that she wants him to help her find a Terminator. Sarah finds a car in the desert and points her gun at the driver to steal the car. They get into the car and Sarah drives, but Michelle's bleeding gets worse from the bumps, prompting Charlie to make Sarah stop the car. Meanwhile, John goes to the pier because Cromartie impersonating Sarah calls him there. However, he soon realizes that it's a trap and runs, but he gains Cromartie's attention, who follows him. John eventually jumps into the sea to save himself, but Cromartie jumps after him. However, John swims up, but Cromartie sinks because of the weight, while Cameron watches John struggle in the water, saying that she can't swim. Sarah comes to pick them up, and John notices blood in the back of the car but doesn't say anything. Meanwhile, Cromartie eventually makes his way out of the sea. John reaches the hospital to see Charlie sobbing with Michelle's ring in his hand, and John tries to comfort him. Michelle's funeral is organized, but the Connor family doesn't attend it, and Charlie throws a Bible into Michelle's grave before leaving the venue. It is revealed that Cromartie was observing the funeral, waiting for John to show up. Cameron is in a haze as she thinks of a memory from the future, where she was running in fear before being captured. In the present, John tells her to stop zoning out and drops her at the supermarket before telling her that he will be back in 30 minutes. Cameron is initially worried, but he promises to be back in time, so she lets him go. She walks inside and looks at her reflection in a balloon, which triggers a flashback of when she was running, so she quickly tries to get away, causing her to hit her trolley into a watermelon stand. She suddenly zones out again, and a security guard is called, who shines a flashlight in her eyes, causing her to think she's in an interrogation room, where a Terminator asks for her name and makes a barcode tattoo on her arm when she refuses to answer. Because of pain, she screams that her name is Allison Young and is taken to a prison. In the present, Cameron finds herself in a cell with a girl named Jody, who asks what she's in for, but Cameron explains that she doesn't remember anything except being in a store. When Jody asks for Cameron's name, she introduces herself as Allison. Meanwhile, Sarah takes Casey to the hospital after Casey expresses discomfort, and once the ultrasound is done, Casey tells Sarah to leave, but Sarah decides to stay. On the other hand, John hears the story from a man and rushes to the police station, where Cameron and Jody are allowed out of the cell without charges. And Jody notices Cameron has a wad of cash, so she takes Cameron with her. When John reaches the station, the officer tells him that Cameron was released an hour ago and went with Jody, who is usually found at the boulevard. Meanwhile, Sarah tells Casey that John was born while she was hiking in Central America, and she lies that John's father was there to support her. She heads out to see newborns in the nursery and calls John to check up on him, but John hurriedly hangs up after telling her that he is shopping with Cameron. On the other side, James visits Weaver again, and she tells him that 2 years ago, she and her husband got into a helicopter accident where her husband died. She suggests that even the calmest men panic in alarming situations and believes that Terminators can reduce this human error. She asks James to find the machine so they can take it apart and determine its composition. Jody takes Cameron to eat, when a man appears demanding that Jody pay for his laptop. When she refuses, he punches her in the face, making Cameron hand him the cash and tell him to leave. Later, they head to a hostel and Jody scolds her for giving away so much money as Cameron dresses Jody's wound. Jody gives her a necklace, telling her that from now on she will have her back. Elsewhere, James visits his friend Lila and asks her to run a background check on Weaver. Back at the hostel, Cameron has a meeting with a counselor, who asks her questions about her hometown, which reminds Cameron of the time she was interrogated by a woman in the future. She told them that her father was an architect while her mother was a music teacher, and she remembers that soon everyone was dead. She tells the same story to the counselor but gets distracted by a statue of a Balinese tiger which went extinct in the 1930s that makes Cameron wonder if humans can be hunted to extinction. She gets another flashback and realizes that she is from Palmdale. In the hospital, Sarah goes back to Casey, who tells her that she and the baby's father, Trevor, have been in an on and off relationship because Trevor freaked out at the idea of having a child. The counselor makes Cameron call her mother's number. However, a pregnant woman picks up and says that she doesn't have a daughter yet. Cameron goes back inside the room and weeps at her mother, not even knowing her. Later, Trevor returns with food and insists that Sarah eat with them, while Casey informs Sarah that Trevor is a part of the LAPD. Meanwhile, John finds Cameron playing table football with Jody. When Jody goes to get a soda, John secretly goes to Cameron, telling her to come home, but she freaks out as she doesn't believe that she is a machine. She gets a flashback of when she tried to run from the prison and eventually got out of the building, only to realize that she's on the edge of a ship. So she jumps down into the water. However, she is captured by a net underwater. Back in the present, John tries to tell Jody that he is Cameron's brother and grabs her, but Cameron pushes him away, making the security show up and ask John to leave the place. In the future, Allison is taken to Cameron, who tells Allison that she must be very brave for John Connor to choose her, before adding that the Terminators will kill every single human until they are extinct. However, Cameron wants peace and asks Allison to reveal the location of John's camp. Back in the present, Cameron again goes to the counselor and tells her that she might be a machine from the future who infiltrates the human resistance. Upon asking what her mission is, she reveals that she wants to kill John Connor and hang his head on the pike for all to see. Once Cameron leaves the room, the counselor calls the police to report her. However, Cameron and Jody leave the hostel before the cops can arrive. Meanwhile, James goes to Weaver after finding out that she has no criminal record, but is surprised to see that her husband died because of a technical error in the helicopter. There he meets Weaver's daughter, Savannah, and later asks Weaver the truth about her husband. When Weaver hints at the official reports being untrue, James himself adds that reports are often manipulated and asks her when he can start the job. On the other side, Jody takes Cameron to a house, telling her to look for cash and valuables. Cameron notices matching earrings for the necklace Jody gave her and questions if Jody stole them. So Jody reveals that this is her parents' house. Cameron gets another flashback where she asks Allison why she lied about the bracelet being a gift from her sister, when in reality, all of her friends have the same bracelet. Cameron realizes that the bracelet is a pass into the Connor camp, and Allison was sending Cameron there without the bracelet, so the resistance fighters would have recognized that it wasn't Allison. Cameron snaps Allison's neck before taking her bracelet and heads to John Connor. Back in the present, Cameron asks Jody to tell her the truth, and Jody starts telling Cameron about her life but says that they need to leave as there is a silent alarm and the police will be here any minute. Cameron realizes that Jody was never going to tell Cameron about the alarm, and leave her here to take the blame while she runs. Cameron chokes Jody and is about to snap her neck, but John comes in, so they quietly leave. Meanwhile, Sarah spends the night at the hospital with Casey and tells her that she lied about John's father, as he died before John was born, even before Sarah knew she was pregnant. The next morning, Derek shows John the news, reporting the death of Martin Bedell, saying that Martin was of great help to the resistance, as he had combat experience and knowledge. John takes out a logbook to show that there were 3 Martin Bedell in LA. Now only 2 are left, and Derek loads his gun to head to the address of the nearest one. However, John stops him and quickly checks the names written on their storage with blood to find out the name of a military academy where Martin Bedell is enrolled. Derek convinces her to let John carry out the mission, and while Derek and John head to the academy, Sarah takes Cameron to the address of the other Martin Bedell, hoping they stop the Terminator before it reaches John. Meanwhile, Weaver tells James to look into the Serrano power plant, handing him a piece of a Terminator before saying that the recent mishap wasn't an accident. Upon reaching the academy, Derek gets a flashback where Kyle reports that the Terminators have attacked the Kansas bunker, captured all the survivors, and will transfer them to camps tomorrow. Kyle suggests they attack the convoy, but Derek tells him to follow the orders of John and report Skynet's movement. However, Martin tells Derek that John isn't here, so he takes charge and tells Kyle to find resistance fighters nearby so they can raid the convoy. Back in the present, John asks Derek if he is okay, which jerks him to reality, and he heads inside the academy. The headmaster keeps John for 3 weeks as a plebe and asks Derek to work as a substitute in the academy for a week. The Terminator rings the doorbell of the second Martin Bedell, who is a young kid, but Sarah pulls him away from the door just as the Terminator opens fire. Sarah pulls Martin away and gets him to the car, but the Terminator tears off the roof of the car, so Sarah shoots it before escaping. At the academy, John starts the training and helps a fellow whose gun is jammed. Martin comes to tell him that he will be keeping an eye on John before telling him that next time they need help they should ask the instructor instead, and tells John to come on a run with him. They find Derek in the woods, who is about to scold John for running alone, but he notices Martin with him and lets them go as he is overtaken by nostalgia. On the other hand, Sarah takes little Martin to her house, and Cameron scares him by telling him that he can't call his mother or the Terminator will kill them all. Once the child goes to sleep, Cameron tells Sarah that they made a mistake by not engaging with the Terminator. But Sarah tells her that protecting the child is now a part of their mission. Meanwhile, Derek takes his first class, where a student asks him about his kills in war, which makes Derek angry, and he tells him not to treat the lives of their platoon as a game. He gets a flashback of how Martin gathered the people, explaining that people will open fire on this bunker, which will make the hunter-killer tank think they are Terminators, and assist them, then they will blow it up. Back in the present, Martin sits with John for lunch and tells him that their academy does a cross-country course where he met a girl named Alicia, whom he plans to leave with and never return later. Derek tells John that the area is all secure, but the woods are exposed and the Terminator will come from there. John tells him that Martin wants to leave, but Derek suggests that he help Martin graduate from the academy, which angers John. John tells Derek that he has figured out the exits if the Terminator reaches here. At Connor's house, Martin watches TV, where his mother is appealing for her missing son, and Sarah tries to comfort him by finding him a book. Sarah tells Cameron to go protect Martin's parents and confront the Terminator if it comes down to it. To investigate further, James goes to the bar where Greenway was a regular and questions the barista, who tells him that one day before an accident a woman accompanied him. He adds that there was a birthday party in the bar that day and shows some pictures to James, who is surprised to find Sarah in the background. Back at the academy, Derek and John plant bombs in the woods to slow down the Terminator if he comes from there, while they discuss Kyle. On the other hand, James reports to Weaver, explaining the possibility of a fight between 2 machines at the plant, and that Nelson wants the NRC to investigate, which might hinder their search. Later, Nelson is at the bar when a girl approaches him and takes him to the back of the bar before sucking his life out and shape-shifting into Weaver. Later, Cameron tells Sarah that the Terminator has stopped pursuing young Martin, so he must be on his way to the other Martin, and Sarah calls Derek to inform him of the threat while telling him that Cameron is heading their way. Derek tells the senior class, who are in the woods for an exercise, that soon a man with a gun will arrive, and their task is not to engage with him at any cost and send a hand signal if they see him. Derek takes Martin and John with him, and Martin is surprised to see that Derek has Claymore simulators, along with a plan on how to lead the infiltrator to this area. Derek gets a flashback of the mission where the tanks started moving towards them. making Derek sure that they don't have enough manpower to fight it, but Martin points to an EFP machine, saying it can blow the tank. Back in reality, the Terminator reaches the woods at night, while most of the senior squad camouflages itself before quickly sending the signal to Derek. Derek waits for it to come closer before shooting it, and then run towards the trap with the Terminator following him. He reaches the area and signals John, who clicks the detonator, making a bomb go off. However, the Terminator survives the blast but recognizes Martin as the target. But before he can move, John catches its attention by loudly saying that he is John Connor, which makes the Terminator make John the primary target. John crosses a bridge that has coal tar under it, and when a Terminator reaches there, Derek shoots it so it falls and then shoots its head off while John lights a dynamite and throws it inside, causing the Terminator to melt, while Cameron witnesses this. Meanwhile, Sarah reads a children's novel to the young Martin, and he falls asleep in her lap. The next morning, she drops him near a payphone telling him to call his mom, but she also gives him her number, asking him to call her if anything goes wrong. Before leaving the academy, John tells Martin the truth, but Martin doesn't believe it, and John weeps on the way back, wishing it all were a bad dream he could wake up from. Derek tells him that in the future, Martin heads out with the EFP to protect Kyle, and blows up the tank, which results in his death and 40 people being rescued, one of whom was John. Derek claims that eventually they all die for him because he is their only hope. Sarah reflects on how her father always kept a gun under his pillow, and there was no medicine to comfort his mind. She and Cameron search the house of Dr. Boyd Sherman, a child and family specialist, after finding his name on a blood-written list in the storage room, but when he wakes up they quickly escape. On their way back they discuss how they don't know if he is with Skynet or against it. At Zeracorp, Weaver has a photo shoot where she firmly asks Savannah to join her, which scares the child enough to wet herself and leave the room. Weaver asks her secretary for advice on dealing with her daughter, and the secretary provides Boyd's contact information. Later, Sarah and the kids visit Boyd, but don't provide him with any personal information, and only realize that Boyd worked in the military before. John decides to have a one-on-one session with Boyd the next day, while Cameron hides a hearing device on his lamp. Weaver is called by the team lead, Mr. Merck, who informs her that the AI is providing unexpected responses and is taking longer to accomplish less. Later, she takes Savannah to Boyd, who tries to engage with her, but Savannah doesn't respond, and Boyd tells Weaver that it will take some time for her to get back to normal. While Weaver waits outside, Boyd notices that Savannah is holding a card that shows a scared man. Later, Sarah hears a gunshot and they all rush to John's room, but he tells them that it was an accident, as he thought the gun was empty. The next day, Savannah tells Boyd that she wants her old mother back, and Boyd informs Weaver that Savannah's most vivid memory is the death of her father, which makes her feel very lonely. In a park, Derek is enjoying a hot dog when he notices a woman acting suspiciously, so he follows her to her hotel room where she reveals herself as Jessie, a fellow resistance fighter. Derek asks why John sent her, but she says that John didn't send her here, and informs him that in the future, after he comes here, John has a Terminator working for the resistance in every department. Derek questions if she ran from the war, and Jessie admits that she is no longer a soldier, so Derek leaves her. Meanwhile, John is called in for his appointment, where Boyd notices John looking for exits in case of an emergency and asks John what role he plays in the family, as children who grow up with an absent parent feel the need to take that role. John feels like he wants to share, but then looks at the device Cameron implanted and holds back. When John goes out, Boyd tells Sarah that John has this alertness of war veterans, wondering if he has faced any kind of violence in his life, but Sarah says he has never been abused. Later, Weaver watches videos of old Weaver so she can act similarly, but she is called to the lab below, where the team tells her that the AI won't run any tests. The team head suggests scrapping the entire project, which angers Weaver, who says that they need to work with this equipment. When she goes back up, she finds Savannah watching the video and tries to copy the movements of the video by caressing Savannah's arm. At night, Sarah tells them not to go to Boyd anymore, as he doesn't have a Terminator after him, but Cameron suggests that maybe Boyd's name is on the wall because he helps John. Sarah dismisses it, saying that John can talk to her, but John refuses before leaving. Derek shows up and tells Sarah that he had a tough friend who helped him build tunnels before blowing off his head one day. Sarah tells him that John isn't miserable, and Derek tells her that things have changed since John has seen his mother kill a man. On the other hand, a Terminator teleports to the present and kills Boyd's secretary. The next morning, Weaver calls Boyd and tells him that they are building a human interacting AI and need to train its neural network to recognize images. She shows Boyd the images, which keep displaying, and Boyd says that the AI is telling them a joke that a third grader told him in picture format. Boyd explains that while a 4-year-old child typically starts asking questions, this AI has progressed to recognizing humor and is now amusing itself. Elsewhere, Sarah listens to John's tape with Boyd, recognizing that he has fears and doesn't feel safe in any place. Derek goes to thank Jessie for saving him from bad thoughts and spends the night there. However, just as he leaves, Jessie hides John's pictures that she had secretly taken under her bed. Later, James asks Weaver why the security of the basement is so tight, but she only tells him that they are building something and wishes him luck for his hunt for the Terminator. The next day, John goes to Boyd's office and tampers with the bug Cameron installed, so Cameron heads inside and notices another Terminator doing the same. Cameron ignores it till it reaches out to go to Boyd's office, and they get into a fight. Inside, John tells him that on his birthday, while his sister was out to get cake, a man broke into their house and tied them up. He becomes emotional and lies, claiming nothing else happened, and Boyd comforts him by explaining that as a child he isn't responsible for protecting his parents. Cameron defeats the Terminator and brings its body home, telling them that it was here for Boyd. Cameron tells them that once she accessed the CPU, the chip destroyed itself, suggesting that this model has a self-destruct feature. John realizes it was done, so he can't reprogram the Terminator. Elsewhere, Weaver asks Boyd to act as a consultant for her AI, because his insights helped her project a lot. Sarah reflects on how soldiers suffered from what doctors called nostalgia, a desperate longing to return to innocence before witnessing unspeakable horrors. She visits Boyd, who says that he is surprised to see her, and asks Sarah what she would like to talk about. And Sarah thinks of how, the day the man broke into their house, it was John who killed him to protect Sarah. James is eating when he hears a knock on the door and heads there. But before he can open the door, it is opened by a Terminator in James's skin who points a gun at James. However, before the Terminator can shoot, Cromartie appears and kills it, explaining that he believes James will lead him to John Connor. The Connors reach home to realize that they have been robbed. All the money, diamonds, and their IDs have been stolen. She calls Derek to tell him that if their IDs get into the wrong hands, their lives will be in danger, and he tells them to head downtown as he will meet them there. Sarah questions why the alarm didn't go off, and Cameron explains that Riley climbed out of John's window, meaning John must have disabled the alarm system. Later, the hostel compiles a report of recent guests, and when Cameron's picture is scanned, it triggers a notification to Cromartie. He goes there for more information, but when the staff is dismissive, he finds Jody instead, who questions if Cromartie is going to hurt Cameron and her brother John Baum. On the other hand, the police arrive at James's house and arrest him for the murder of Peter Myers. Meanwhile, Sarah and the kids go to a downtown jeweler named Moishi, who shows them diamonds he bought recently, and Cameron quickly recognizes the ones that are theirs. Derek tells him that they don't plan to take them back, as they only want to know the person who sold them, and the jeweler reveals that the seller's name is Walter Ostrovsky, who works out of Toluca Lake. As John shops at the supermarket to replace their stolen food, Jody leads Cromartie to the same location, explaining this was where police found Cameron, but Cromartie misses John by chance. Later, James is questioned why he was naked at the time of the murder and why he stole Myers' clothes, but James has no idea after finding the address. Sarah and Cameron go to Walter, who runs upon seeing them, but Cameron catches him and asks him where their stuff is. However, he isn't the guy who robbed them, but someone who owes Moishi money. They take the money from him, give it to Moishi, but Sarah points a gun at Moishi, demanding the robber who sold him the diamonds. Moishi finally reveals that it's Tristan DeWitt, and they head to meet him. Meanwhile, Cromartie goes around looking for Cameron, which annoys Jody, so Cromartie kicks her out. He finally reaches Casey's house and asks for Cameron, but she lies that she doesn't know her. She quickly calls John to warn him that a dangerous man is searching for his sister, when suddenly someone begins knocking at the door. John peeks out and hides when he finds Cromartie there, quickly telling Riley that they need to get out of here, but she breaks away from John's hold and says that she will drive the man away. She opens the door and tells Cromartie that she doesn't know the girl he is looking for, and Cromartie is almost convinced, but John loads a gun which catches his attention. He pushes Riley away and goes inside, but John hides. After scanning the pictures on the fridge, Cromartie accepts that John isn't in the house and leaves. Sarah arrives at Tristan's house, where his parents complain about their disobedient son. His mom says that he works at a video store with Dave, and Sarah heads there, but she gets a call that the robbers are at a bowling alley. Cromartie's computer shows the same notification, and he rushes there. In a recording, the witness reports that there was a bluish light which caused a dent on the road, and James appeared from there before killing Myers and taking his clothes. Sarah and Cameron reach Tristan, who is with two other guys in a bowling alley, and they take back their stuff before Cameron shoots 3 of them. Sarah checks the restroom and finds the 4th robber, but she tells him to pretend he was never there if he wants to live. Elsewhere, the judge dismisses the witness's statement as impossible. So the investigator releases James, then steps outside and shapeshifts into Weaver. Derek goes to Moishi only to find him shot with Jesse there, who tells Derek to take all the diamonds. Later, Sarah returns home and tells John that he can't bring people to the house anymore, as Cameron labels Riley as a security risk, but John angrily says that they dislike that he has someone he enjoys spending time with. Sarah tells him that she didn't choose this life, but she will protect him as long as he is alive. John questions why she didn't protect him from killing Sarkeesian and leaves when Sarah doesn't answer. However, Cromartie reaches the bowling alley where Sarah left one man alive, and he questions him about the location of the IDs, promising that he won't let Sarah kill him. Late at night, Sarah is making a safe when John walks Riley out to her bike and joins Sarah to tell her that he bought a helmet for Riley. But Sarah questions if it will stop a bullet because people might make her a target to get to John. She tells John to leave her alone if he cares for her, but he doesn't listen, so Cameron says that she will talk to John. The next morning, Cameron tells Sarah that she will be going to buy ammunition as they are running out of it, and tells her that John won't be seeing Riley anymore. which annoys Sarah as John listens to Cameron more than he listens to Sarah. Suddenly, Cromartie arrives there and drags Sarah upstairs before choking her till she is unconscious when he doesn't find John in his room. In a flashback of last night, Cameron went into John's room explaining that she understands how lonely he is because he talks about that a lot in the future, but still expects him not to see Riley anymore. The next morning, while getting ammunition, she encounters Derek, but suddenly they receive John's alarm code indicating he's in danger. Meanwhile, John sneaked out last night after Cameron left his room and went on a trip to DeHollow, his childhood hometown, with Riley. She mentions that she understands they came here to get away, but she doesn't like the skulls and dark atmosphere of the place. They book a jacuzzi, but get into a disagreement when Riley mentions that she doesn't know anything about John, as he is secretive. Later, as they have dinner, a photographer takes their picture and John offers him $5 to delete the picture, but the photographer recognizes him as John Connor, who used to live there. John quickly asks the man to come to the side, and the photographer says that John must not want the authorities to see the pictures and asks for everything that John has. While they are talking, Riley appears and snatches the camera from the photographer's hand, and John tells her to run. John manages to get out, but the security guard catches Riley, and John is taken to the police when he comes to rescue her. John gives the statement, but the officer says that if John's parents come to pick him up, he will be released with a warning, so John calls Derek, but the officer asks him to call his mother. When John calls Sarah, she doesn't respond with the code, so he quickly realizes that Sarah is being impersonated. The officer places John in a holding cell and runs his name through the database to check for criminal records. The next morning, Riley convinces the guard to open the door, but John quickly overpowers him and tells Riley to run as far as she can. Back with Sarah, Cromartie has tied her and drives her somewhere and tells Sarah that she should have killed the boy at the bowling alley, but Sarah refuses to be a murderer and jumps out of the car. However, Cromartie quickly picks her up and this time locks her in the trunk, where she finds an empty tin can and uses it to cut the tape binding her arms. However, she is locked in and hears gunshots along with people speaking in Spanish. On the other side, James is jogging when he gets a call from a fellow FBI agent who tells him that John Connor has been seen in Mexico, so James rushes there. However, he finds Cromartie there, who opens fire on the Mexican officers. But Riley runs out and James stops John, telling him that he is here to help. They get inside the car and James drives it away. Riley feels a thumping in the back and John asks James to stop the car, so they find shelter and open the trunk to find Sarah in it. Sarah notices Cromartie nearby and quickly tells them to run. Once they reach the room booked by John, Sarah tells James that he shouldn't have come here if the Terminator has been keeping an eye on him, but James mocks that Sarah was the one who got caught by Cromartie. Meanwhile, John urges Riley to return to LA, explaining that the Terminator won't pursue her if she distances herself from him, but Riley refuses to leave. Sarah uses James's phone to call Derek, who tells her that they're already at the jail, and Sarah tells them to come. Cromartie searches for them, spotting James entering a church and following him to demand John's location. Suddenly, gunfire erupts from the windows above as Derek and Sarah open fire, but Cromartie returns fire. However, Cameron enters, wielding heavy weapons, and unleashes a barrage that nearly kills Cromartie before John delivers the final shot. As they bury Cromartie, Sarah tells James that they will bring something to destroy the body and suggests that they will attract less attention if they travel without him, but he asks what his role is in all of this. Sarah recognizes that James deserves answers, but explains there's nothing she can tell him. She asks Cameron for Cromartie's chip, and then screams hysterically while smashing it, so John embraces her and she breaks down weeping in his arms. Sarah returns to the site and finds Cromartie's grave empty. She turns to see Cameron watering the ground from where cacti begin to sprout, and the plants suddenly transform into massive metal structures that entrap John. Sarah tries to help him but is unable to, and the fear makes her wake up from the nightmare to see that John is driving. She quickly asks him to stop the car and vomits, making Cameron question if Sarah is pregnant, while John notices that she has a fever. They soon reach home and John gives Sarah medicine. However, she tries to get up, saying that they have to go back and burn Cromartie's body. John tells her to relax, as they've destroyed the chip and he is buried in the middle of nowhere, but Sarah doesn't feel safe. On the other hand, Derek gets a call from Jesse, who tells him to quickly come with a gun, so he rushes to her. She shows him a man she claims is Charles Fisher, someone who collaborated with machines in the future. However, Derek doesn't remember anyone like that working for Skynet and is confused. Meanwhile, Cameron has her foot outside the car window, and John questions what she is trying to do. So she answers that she wants to feel the wind. When John opposes by saying that she is a machine, she tells him that she still has sensations and the ability to feel. Back with Derek, Jesse explains that the man is one of the Greys traders who worked with Skynet to make their machines more human-like. She takes off his mouth tape, and the man explains that Jesse is misunderstanding, as his name is Paul Stewart. He explains that he repairs watches and was looking for a second-hand store, but Jesse doesn't believe him. She is about to hit him more, but Derek stops her before pulling her out and asking her if she is sure. She tells him that she is, but he tells her that she can only kill him if he confesses. Back at home, Sarah is sleeping when she is woken up by the sound of a walkie-talkie and gets up to find where the sound is coming from. She enters a nursery filled with turtles rather than children. She spots an empty crib, then watches as Cameron cradles a turtle before gently placing it in Cromartie's hand. Sarah wakes up and draws 3 dots on the paper, wondering what they could mean. In Mexico, John and Cameron dig Cromarty's grave only to realize that his body is missing. On the other hand, Derek brings food for Paul, who tells him that he was an engineer, but didn't like sitting in cubicles, so he opted for watchmaking. But Derek notices a tattoo on Paul and asks where he got the prison ink from. Derek says that the tattoo means Paul has a life sentence, and Paul tells him that if he had a life sentence he wouldn't be here. Derek sends a picture of Paul to Cameron, asking her if she knows this guy, but she tells him that she has no record of him, having no one to talk to. Sarah goes to Boyd to talk about her nightmares, and despite not wanting to, he tells her to come into his office. Later, Cameron and John question James about Cromarty's body, but James says he has nothing to do with the missing body, and Cameron throws him against the wall, saying that James is lying. She starts choking him, but he repeatedly states that he doesn't know, so John tells Cameron to let him go. Meanwhile, Jesse brings in another Charles Fisher, a young guy who also doesn't know what is happening, and Jesse tells Derek that he has to beat Paul till he spills the truth. Derek tortures younger Charles by pulling his nails out till Paul can't take it and confesses that he is Charles Fisher. Begging them to let the young boy go, Paul tells them that he was sent back as a reward for providing services to Skynet. When the bombs dropped, he was in solitary confinement, which ensured his survival, and Skynet demanded he teach them human information or lose his life. So he betrayed the humans, which makes Jesse angry. At the office, Boyd asks if there was any conflict between John and Sarah after the last time they saw him, as dreams mirror the central conflict of the dreamer. Boyd asks her questions about her children, but she refuses to speak about them, and Boyd tells her that the 3 dots she is obsessing over might be the 3 of them, including Sarah, John, and Cameron. Boyd says that he can't do anything if Sarah isn't honest, so Sarah leaves the office. Back with Jesse, she tells Derek to kill Fisher, which makes Derek question whether Jesse has a personal grudge with Fisher, and Jesse reveals that once Terminators raided a bunker and killed 30 people, the rest were captured. Jesse was one of the prisoners who was taken to Fisher, where he said that he would teach machines how to get information out of people. She explains that it went on for months, where she was starved and drugged and talked to for hours just to reach her inner core. Derek asks Jesse how she got out, and she reveals that it was Derek who was experimented on. This overwhelms Derek, and he goes inside to beat Fisher, who is shocked it took this much time for Derek to remember his suffering. Derek wants to shoot the young Fisher, but Jesse shoots the old one. Later, John comes home and Sarah shows him the paper with 3 dots, asking him what it means to him, and he tells her that she is only having weird nightmares because she is sick. He tells her about not being able to find Cromarty's body and confirms that James doesn't have it. Sarah tells him that Cromarty found them because of her, as she left one of the boys alive in the bowling alley, who led him here, but John comforts her by telling her that they aren't murderers. Sarah tells John that they have to find Cromarty's body under any condition. Derek buries Fisher, and Jesse wonders how he can't remember even a single thing, as he used to talk a lot about it. Derek says that maybe he came from a future where it never happened, but she has come from a different timeline. Jesse wonders if that's possible, and Derek says that every change they make somehow changes the future. Upon entering his workplace, young Fisher is called by the FBI, who say that the computer reported that he entered the building 2 nights ago, where unauthorized access was made, which allowed access to all military and industrial complex computer systems. Fisher says he doesn't know what they are talking about, but the FBI doesn't believe him, and it's shown that Fisher from the future did this. The FBI next asks him to explain his disoriented state, and Fisher doesn't know what to say. Meanwhile, James calls Weaver and shows her the body of Cromarty, saying that they need to learn how they work so they can know how to fight them. Elsewhere, young Fisher is wrongly accused and thrown into jail, while James wishes for history not to repeat itself. On the other hand, Sarah dreams that she is going down into a grave but finds a door that leads to Dr. Boyd's office. However, Boyd tells her that it's a waste of time coming here, as she only lies and tells Sarah to go back to work. Sarah goes to the storage room where names were written with blood and notices the same 3 dots on the wall. James is sleeping when suddenly he hears an odd sound and quickly gets up to look around, but he only finds Cameron in his yard, poking a sharp stick into the ground to check for Cromarty's body. Meanwhile, Sarah and Derek enter Dakara Systems and steal their drives, which John accesses and tells them that they are hollow reports, as he would need an entire setup to run these files. Sarah says that there are 3 dots in the basement, which is the logo of this AI company, but Derek tells her that they might be fingerprints left by a bleeding man, telling Sarah not to think much of it. The next morning, John tells Sarah that he did some digging and found that the Dakara system needs investors for the server farm they want to build. John says that he made her an appointment and hands her the details about her cover. Sarah wonders if John stayed up all night doing this, and John tells her that he is worried because Dakara Systems is a startup, but so was Cyberdyne. Meanwhile, Derek finds the pictures of John in Jesse's apartment and tells her that she has 30 seconds to explain herself, but Jesse questions why Derek didn't tell her that he was living with John and Cameron. She explains that in the future, John only talks to Cameron, which results in questionable decisions that lead to people being killed. She tells him that Cameron has taken over and she is here to save John from Cameron's influence and dependency on Terminators. Derek says he will think about this, but Jesse questions why Derek is here, and Derek tells her not to get on his nerves before leaving. James in the meantime reaches Zara Corp, where an FBI agent tells James that a transformer blew up because of a heat wave, and that a man working the weekend spent 8 hours trapped in a room with no ventilation until he died from heat. James checks the man, and it is revealed as Dr. Boyd. Later, Weaver tells James that Boyd was a consultant for one of her projects and was working here when the blackout occurred, which resulted in the AI reserving all generator power for itself and shutting down all other systems. James questions whether AI allows the agonizing death of humans, and Weaver comments that she doesn't know the intentions, which they will have to find out. Sarah arrives in Dakara, where she meets the owner Alex, and they discuss the money, while Cameron asks his son named Xander, who has built the AI, if he likes chess. Alex tells Sarah that they need $1 million, and Sarah says she doesn't have that much money. Elsewhere, John visits Riley and tries to make small talk but realizes that he can't explain what happened back in Mexico, so he leaves. Back at home, Sarah discusses how Alex's company is making a self-preserving AI and has the interest of the US Air Force, but Cameron disregards it by saying that Xander doesn't like chess, so this isn't the Turk. However, Sarah is sure that Dakara will get the money and meet the Air Force deadline because it's written in blood on her wall. Riley in the meantime is thrifting when Jesse approaches her to discuss something. Riley tells Jesse that John visited her today, and she believed that he would tell her everything, but he didn't. Riley tells Jesse that she can't do this anymore, and Jesse says that it's okay if Riley is developing real feelings for John, but tells her that there is no getting out of the mission. As they head home, Derek tells John that because of Sarah's obsession, he is seeing 3 dots everywhere. He says that if it continues, they might forget their real mission to fight against Skynet, but John says that he will always remember, which makes Derek question him. Later, Sarah walks with Alex and he tells her that the Air Force wants to give them a chip from the Japanese computer that won the chess tournament, so they can test it. However, the Japanese want a $500,000 deposit to show seriousness, and Alex needs money. James visits Babylon, where Mr. Merck explains that it invented new rules to keep itself running through the blackout, but James questions how Babylon felt about Boyd, and the machine's head is shocked by the question, answering that Babylon is a computer that doesn't have feelings. Elsewhere, Sarah gathers all their money and gives it to Minamoto, securing the chip for Dakara. They head back to the company, and Xander runs the chip to find its data, but quickly realizes that something is wrong. So Cameron analyzes it and reveals that this is an older chip designed to appear advanced. Alex realizes that they've been scammed, but says that Minamoto is backed by Yakuza, so they can't just threaten him. Sarah realizes that Alex wasn't paying for the chip, he was paying Minamoto to steal it. Meanwhile, Weaver tells James to question the AI directly, as it's a mind that was given the name John Henry by Boyd. James goes to John Henry and asks him to show what happened to Boyd, so John Henry gives a detailed account of how Boyd was working when the blackout happened, causing all power to go out. The generator only had enough power to keep the computers cold and running, so the electric door and the biometrics stopped working. He then shows the video of Boyd at the time electricity returned, explaining that Boyd's body temperature had risen with the room, causing his heart to stop. John Henry still called the paramedics because he believed that Boyd could be saved. James asks him to show a picture of how he feels about Boyd's death, but John Henry gives no response, making James realize that he has no ethics or morals. James is about to leave, but Weaver stops him, asking what he would teach John if he could, and James tells them to start with the 10 Commandments. In an underground casino, Cameron finds Minamoto, who reveals that he was hired by Alex to hand him the fake chip. Sarah comes out and says they have to dig deeper, but Derek tells her that she is exerting her energy over useless things. Later, Sarah goes to Alex and beats him up, asking him who he is working for, but he tells her that the 3 dots are only a logo. She drags him to Xander and makes him confess that he made up the chip to get money from Sarah. Eventually, Alex tells Sarah that their money is under his desk and the 3 dots have no meaning. Derek meanwhile tells Jesse that he came back to fight a war to stop Skynet, and tells her to tell him if she is hiding anything, but she tells him that there are no secrets. Back at Connor's house, Riley asks John to come for a walk, so they head out while Sarah goes upstairs and notices 3 dots made by blood on her face, which angers her to the point of breaking the mirror. Later, Weaver tells James that she isn't qualified to teach John the basics and shows him Kamordy's body attached to the AI, who now introduces himself as John Henry. Sarah is still obsessed with the 3 dots, so John shortlists hundreds of websites that have 3 dots in their logos, but Sarah tells him to keep looking, which makes John angry, and he tells her that Sarah saw the 3 dots in a dream, so maybe they don't have any value. However, Sarah says that they were blood written on the wall as well, so she is sure they mean something. Later that night, Cameron goes to a library and meets a guy named Eric who works there and offers him donuts. They go inside and start reading books when she asks him for the history of California Field Artillery, so he takes her to another room to help her find the book, but she finds a picture of a T-888 Terminator there. Eric explains that the picture is from the famous New Year's Eve speakeasy fire in 1920, in which 43 people died. He adds that there were a lot of rivalries between different clubs, and this man was one of the survivors. Meanwhile, a call from Riley wakes John up from sleep and she tells him an address, asking him to come pick her up in a distressed tone. Back with Cameron, Eric searches and finds a picture of the T-888 named Myron Stark with Rudolph Valentino, the greatest film star. So Cameron asks if there are any county records about Myron Stark. He tells her that those are in the basement, but it is locked. However, Cameron doesn't listen and heads to the basement. On the other side, John reaches the party and Riley tells him that she wants to hang out with him, which makes him angry as she seemed upset on the call. He quickly apologizes when he notices a change in Riley's mood and tells her that they can stay. Back with Cameron, Eric angrily tells her that she will get him fired for breaking the lock, and he falls out of his wheelchair while trying to reach her. She tries to help him, but he tells her to stay away and struggles to get into his wheelchair before leaving. Later, Cameron apologizes, saying that he is her only friend. So he asks if she has found any information on Myron. Cameron tells him that there is no record of him before the fire, and Eric suggests that Myron might be an immigrant or a criminal. She asks for police records and they find that a Terminator robbed many banks, and the robber was hit with over 30 bullets but still escaped on foot. They dig deeper and find that Myron used the money to buy land where he built houses. They find another video where Myron had competition with another famous real estate agent named Rupert. But people were partial towards Myron because he treated workers equally and helped with construction. While discussing this, Cameron drops a few things including her gun, and Eric is shocked to see that. So Cameron explains that she keeps it to protect her brother. Noticing Eric's interest, Cameron helps him fire a bullet into a book. Meanwhile, Riley makes John play a video game, but he loses and people make fun of him. So he angrily tells Riley that he is going to leave. But before they can leave, a guy searches Riley, saying that she stole his lighter, which makes John beat him up. On the other hand, records report Rupert's right-hand man Jeffers' disappearance, which was followed by Rupert's son's death on New Year's Eve in 1920. Riley and John go to an empty parking lot and discuss their foster families, eventually getting intimate with each other. Meanwhile, Cameron and Eric go to find a documentary of a survivor from the 1920 club fire, and Cameron picks Eric up because the area has no wheelchair access. The survivor explains that people thought someone threw a bomb in the club, but what she saw was a bright blue light followed by a man appearing out of nowhere. Cameron says that Myron didn't want to kill all those people and looked up at the sky to pinpoint the date because he had teleported to the wrong date. She then reads the eulogy Rupert wrote for his son, where he promised to never sell the land where his son wanted to build Pico Tower. But Eric comments that someone did build the Pico Tower, as it is a monumental building. They find tax reports which reveal that Rupert went bankrupt and had to sell all of his land to Myron. Cameron says that Myron accidentally killed the man who would make the building, so he built it himself, and everything he did was to acquire that piece of land. Eric explains that Myron disappeared 2 weeks before the opening of Pico Tower and was never found again. She quickly asks him if any important event happened at the tower, but Eric says there are none, but the Pico Tower is closed for now. Cameron storms out and rushes inside the tower, where she finds a stage and realizes that on New Year's Eve of 2010, Governor Mark Wyman was shot here. She tries to find the optimal position for shooting and breaks the wall to find Myron hidden in the wall. She pulls him out and opens fire at him before throwing him and dropping an elevator over him. She takes out his chip and goes back to the library, where she tells Eric that his cancer is back because she scanned and found a tumor in his long bone in the arm. Eric gets angry, claiming this is why Cameron doesn't have any friends, as she carries guns and pokes her nose into people's business. She tells him to make an appointment with his oncologist, but Eric tells her to get out. The next night, she goes to the library again but finds a new girl there, who says that she was asked to fill in the shift for today. So Cameron offers her the donuts and the girl lets Cameron in. Derek walks into a warehouse and finds a screaming woman there. So he rushes there and finds a pregnant woman whimpering in pain. Derek notices that a bullet passed through her lungs and quickly puts a tube inside her, which gives her some relief. There is another woman named Lauren nearby who explains that a Terminator has been following them for 6 months now. When Derek asks how Lauren knows Sarah, she explains that 6 months back Sarah barged into her house and told her family that someone is coming after them, so they needed to leave immediately. Lauren comes out of her house with a gun and her father, named David, points it at Sarah. He tries to hold Cameron hostage, but Cameron just snatches the gun out of his hand and Sarah tells them to quickly leave. They all get in a car, but Lauren's mother, Anne, scolds her husband for having a gun in the house before telling Sarah that her son will grow up to be a delinquent like her. This distracts Sarah long enough for a car to crash into them, and not surprisingly, a Terminator comes out of it. Cameron starts fighting her, while the family gets out of the car and runs towards the cabin with Sarah following them. Lauren explains that Sarah told them to call her if it comes after them again, and that they were in a motel when it found them. David fought it and gave them enough time to run, but Anne got hurt. Derek gets a flashback where he was told that a bunker was hit with a bioweapon that killed everyone inside it, except for one, so they need her back alive and plan to send a Terminator to get her. But Derek is against the idea as he believes that the Terminator can malfunction and kill the survivor. Derek says that he will go and bring her, hoping that she will save them from the bioweapon plague, but his supervisor tells him that if Derek gets exposed to it he might die. However, Derek doesn't care. Back in the present, Derek asks Lauren how the Terminator found them, and Lauren explains that she called a friend because she wanted to feel normal. Lauren remembers that 6 months earlier, once they made it into the cabin, they noticed that David had badly hurt his leg, so he told them to leave without him, but Anne refused to do so. Sarah gathers things from the storage to build a trap for the Terminator when Lauren shows up and tells Sarah that David is hiding something. So Sarah goes to David and questions what he is working on with Syndine Cybernetics, but he tells her that it's only business, which makes Sarah angry, and she tells him that she isn't here to be nice, as she is trying really hard to save her family and the world. In the present, Lauren tells Derek that she needs some air and heads outside, while Derek remembers the future, where he entered the bunker to find 200 people dead, including a pregnant woman and her young children. He heads out, and just when hope fades away, Jesse interrupts and tells him that his fly is open. Back in reality, he is dressing Anne's wounds, who wakes up and asks where Lauren is. Derek tells her that she went out for air and explains that he knows it was Anne who called someone. Anne remembers how Sarah set a trap to electrocute the Terminator that came through the front door, while Anne goes upstairs to call Roger, the man she is cheating on her husband with. Upon seeing him, she quickly dismantles the trap and lets him in. In the present, she reveals that even now she is the one who called Roger and wishes that Lauren and the baby inside her would be safe. Derek reminisces, and Jesse tells him that her party got a signal that someone is alive inside the bunker, and she has come here to find them, for the same reason as Derek. They head inside together and search the entire place before finally reaching a metal door that someone is banging on. Back in the present, Anne's health deteriorates, and she remembers how she got into a fight with her husband because of Roger, but Sarah stops them by shooting in the air. Roger suggests they go to his car a mile away, but Sarah tells him that he has no idea that the Terminator would crush them in that much time. Roger refuses to believe them, but suddenly an unconscious Cameron is thrown in by the other Terminator, which makes Roger run away, while David says that he should sacrifice himself so the Terminator can spare his family. David steps out towards the Terminator, but it scans David and throws him away, as he is not the target. Sarah quickly asks Anne if she is hiding something, and Anne says that she is pregnant, but David doesn't know as the baby is not his. Sarah hides Lauren in the storage room while Sarah takes Anne away. In the present, the tube starts filling with blood and Anne repeatedly apologizes, making Lauren question why she is saying this. However, Derek tells Lauren to focus on saving her baby sister, and Lauren wonders how he knows but quickly realizes that Derek is from the future. Derek explains that Lauren's sister's name is Sydney, and he knew her. He gets another flashback of when he and Jesse opened the metal door and Sydney was in there, who told them that the gas masks won't help, as they are already infected by the bioweapon. The sun comes up and Derek says that they are trapped here for the day, as the outside won't be safe unless it's dark, and Jesse gives Sydney a made-up protein bar. Jesse gulps down her entire water bottle and then asks Derek for more water, while Derek also notices that he is sweating unusually. Derek suggests they move out of the place in daylight, as Sydney tells them that the plague starts with dry mouth and heavy sweats. It is followed by fever, shaking, and then the lungs fill up with fluid, causing them to die. In the present, Derek tells Anne that Sydney has an immunity in her blood, which helps them cure a plague. Anne asks about Lauren, and Lauren gets a flashback of hiding in the storage room when Cameron comes there and hits Roger, confusing him as a Terminator. Cameron then takes them all in a car and drives to Anne and Sarah. Back in the present, Anne dies in childbirth, but Lauren takes the newborn baby and goes out. Derek remembers how he and Jesse reached the Serrano Point with Sydney, but both were in very bad condition. They were injected with the antibodies, and Lauren thanks Derek for saving her sister. Once again in the present, Lauren asks Derek if there are more Terminators, and if it will ever end. But Derek tells her that he doesn't know, as they are trying, and asks Lauren to come stay with them. However, Lauren understands that it is her battle to fight. Lauren thinks of the time when she told Sarah that her parents would have trouble adapting to this new life, and Sarah told her to help them. In reality, Derek informs Sarah about the situation, and she tells him that they have destroyed the T-888 after Sydney. Derek goes back inside to take Lauren, but finds that she has left the place with her sister, only leaving her necklace behind. Sarah drives towards the Desert Canyon Space Conference, thinking about the Spanish explorer Cabeza de Vaca, who learned the ways of his New World captors, and after being freed attracted a large following. At the conference, the host validates a woman named Eileen who claims to have witnessed alien activity, and then proceeds to address Sarah, who claims to be investigating the three-dot symbol she has been seeing in her dreams. Outside, a man claims that the three-dot symbols have been seen on alien drones spotted in California, and have also been mentioned in Abraham blogs by a scientist working on a secret high-tech metal alloy. Sarah asks about Abraham's location, but the man doesn't know. However, Eileen claims to know. On the other hand, Riley brings John a smoothie while he paints his room, and also tells him about how she lashed out at her ungrateful and always fighting foster siblings, about how lucky they were. Meanwhile, Cameron enters, asking why Riley didn't bring a smoothie for her, but John sends her away. Back in 2027, Riley searches for food in the rubble in a shabby state when Jesse approaches her and takes her in. On the other hand, Eileen brings Sarah to her trailer in the middle of the desert and tells her over a cup of tea that Abraham is a pseudonym for Alan Park, an MIT scholar working on litter technology, which is closely related to Terminators. She tells Sarah of her interest in such things and shows her the locations where drones and Abraham have been recently spotted. In a flashback, we see Jesse and Riley travel back to 2007 together and take shelter in an apartment, where Riley is blown away by the comforts of pre-Judgment Day civilization, and Jesse prepares her to pass as a normal teenage girl. Back at the house in 2007, John notices a bruise on Riley's face when he tries to remove some paint debris from her hair and vows to beat up her foster father in case he abused Riley. But Riley denies it and begs him to drop the matter. Later at Zeracorp, Weaver tries to convince James to teach John Henry human morality and ethics as she considers it necessary for the initial stages of development of an AI, but he is reluctant because John Henry resides in Camarty's body, who killed Dr. Sherman and James's whole squad. However, Weaver explains that John Henry is a different AI, just making use of Camarty's body while having its own separate identity. Meanwhile, Eileen takes Sarah to a space-themed diner where she claims Abraham was last seen. But Sarah gets fed up with her delays and barges in on her while she's in the washroom to discover that she is Abraham. Abraham then reveals that he had a high-paid job at a firm where no one knew what they were working on, which made him post blogs about it in the hope of some information. However, his house was broken into and his car brakes were compromised, which made him go into hiding. Sarah doesn't buy his story, so he offers to show her a piece of the high-tech metal that he stole and hid at a storage locker, which they set off to. Meanwhile, Riley covers her bruise with makeup and remembers the time when Jesse first sent her to John's school to get close to him. When she comes out of the room, Cameron asks her about the bruise, which she says is from banging her head on the door, and Cameron also examines her star tattoo, claiming she is thinking of getting one. On the other hand, Sarah and Abraham visit the storage locker but find the metal gone, which prompts Sarah to walk away from him. However, once they get outside, a biker ambushes them, firing at them but doesn't hit anyone before getting away. Back at the trailer, Abraham is shocked at Sarah's unbothered attitude towards the assassination attempt on their life, and later tells her that he was transported to his workplace in a van with blackened windows. However, Sarah suggests they can take the help of the hypno-regression therapist Barbara Morris, who was a host at the space conference. On the other hand, Riley visits Jesse's apartment and requests that she let her stay with her as she got thrown out of her foster home for pushing her mom while ranting about Judgment Day. However, Jesse smacks her and demands that she complete her mission of separating Cameron from John. With that, Riley heads to John's house in complete shock that Jesse treated her that way. Outside the house, Cameron tells John that Riley was lying about something as her pulse was elevated, but John tells her to stay away from her. He then goes up to check on Riley in the washroom, but she does not open the door, so he gets Cameron to break it and inside finds Riley unconscious. Elsewhere, Sarah arrives at Dr. Morris's clinic, bringing Abraham, who is disguised as Eileen, ready for a therapy session. Before it begins, she discreetly slips a small device into Abraham's bag. Back at Zeracorp, James plays chess with John Henry and asks him if he misses Dr. Sherman, which John Henry does not, prompting James to give him a lecture on the sanctity of human life. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Dr. Morris hypnotizes Abraham and gets him to remember his experience of being transported to his workplace, while Sarah listens outside through the hidden device. However, she hears some commotion and then sounds of shooting through the device and returns to find both Dr. Morris and Abraham dead inside, while the killer gets away on a bike. Later, Sarah listens to the recording and tries to follow Abraham's experiences, which leads her to a warehouse in the desert where a man arrives in a van and goes inside. Sarah walks inside and holds the man named Winston at gunpoint while inquiring about the metal. However, he claims to be only an installer, but as Sarah goes through his bag, he gets up and shoots her in the leg. When he gets close to finishing her off, she grabs onto him, pulling him down where both wrestle for control of the gun. A shot is fired and Winston goes unconscious, so Sarah pushes him off of her while dragging herself slowly outside. The desert sun blazes, while a drone emerges with a shape resembling the three dots, and the light from it shines on Sarah's face as she passes out from the pain. Sarah wakes up in a hospital as she reminisces about Kyle Reese's confession of time travel and his love for her, while a police officer questions the nurse outside about Sarah's identity, which is marked as unknown. The nurse sends the cop away and closes the room's door as Sarah pretends to sleep. She then rips the intravenous tubing off her arm and starts to wriggle her way out of her bed while hallucinating Kyle to be there, urging her to move forward. The cop outside hears a commotion and enters the room to find the window broken, but Sarah ambushes him from behind and chokes him unconscious with the tubes and takes his gun before leaving. She imagines Kyle accompanying her as she limps through the corridor and refuses to call John, as it would put him in danger, but agrees to contact Derek. Meanwhile, Derek receives a call from John at Jesse's apartment, informing him of Riley's admission into a hospital. He swiftly leaves after Jesse assures him that Riley is safe. At the hospital, the doctor informs John and Derek that he has placed Riley on hold until the arrival of Child Protective Services, so they will have to wait. Derek then receives a call from Sarah informing him about her situation and asking him to burn her Jeep to get rid of any evidence. Derek informs John about it, but advises him to stay in the hospital while he goes to help Sarah. On the other hand, Sarah waits in the hospital parking lot while imagining Kyle by her side when a woman parks her car nearby, and Sarah, guessing that she is a doctor, takes her at gunpoint, escorting her to a motel room where she tells her to extract the bullet in her leg. Sarah is tense and keeps threatening the doctor with her gun, but Kyle's ghost tells her to relax, so Sarah pretends to be a woman going through a tough time to get the doctor's sympathy. Meanwhile, a couple of police officers examining Sarah's Jeep are called and informed of her escape, and in the hospital they discover that a resident doctor, Felicia Burnett, is absent, so they conclude that Sarah kidnapped her to extract the bullet, and they start searching for her. Back in the motel, Felicia makes an incision in Sarah's leg to pull out the bullet, while distracting her by making her talk about John. Meanwhile, Riley regains consciousness in the hospital but avoids talking about her incident. At the same time, in the motel, Sarah reawakens to find Kyle's ghost reminding her of John's message from the future for her to live, or he would not exist. Felicia then explains to Sarah that she cannot get the bullet out unless she is in the hospital, so Sarah reluctantly agrees to go back. Sometime later at ZaraCorp, John Henry recounts Camarty's history and crimes to James, which he claims to have discovered from the internet. Moments later, James relays to Weaver his fears of what John Henry might evolve into provided a connection to the outside world, but Weaver assures James that he will guide John Henry rightly. Meanwhile, the cops arrive at the motel but find Sarah and Felicia gone, who are by that time trying to sneak into a hospital morgue to operate on Sarah's leg. On the other hand, John asks Cameron what the future John would do about Riley, to which she answers by saying that the future John has bigger concerns than this. In the meantime, Jesse sneaks into Riley's hospital room and tells her it's time to leave. Back at the morgue, Felicia goes out to bring some equipment while Sarah calls Derek to inform him about the danger she is in, and comes to know that John's girlfriend had a bad incident. Sometime later in the ZaraCorp basement, John Henry reveals that he knows about Weaver's T-1001 identity, which she tells him to keep secret. He also reveals that ZaraCorp is monopolizing the world's coltan reserves, the metal used in his body, and that he recently discovered through an unsecured call that a warehouse in Desert Canyon has 16 tons of it. Weaver gets up to leave, and when questioned about her intentions, she only says that everything she does is for John Henry. Back at the morgue, Felicia explains that she is going to insert a camera into Sarah's leg to find the bullet, and that she has to force her to hand over the gun for her safety.
You're not one of them.
In the meantime, the doctor informs John that Riley is missing from her room, which makes John want to start looking for her. However, Cameron stops him, saying it is unnecessary. Later, when Jessie brings Riley to her apartment and confronts her for her ungratefulness, Riley asks to stay with her just for an hour, to which Jessie agrees. Meanwhile, at the Desert Heat and Air warehouse, the manager gets all the workers in motion to pack up all the stuff and leave by tomorrow. He then goes to use the washroom, and when he comes out, Weaver is there to kill him. She then goes on a rampage, massacring every worker in her path by stabbing them with her morphing liquid metal arm. After killing everyone, she uses the demolition material to blow up the warehouse and walks out through the flames unharmed. On the other hand, the police officers listen to the tape recording of Dr. Morris and Abraham getting shot and conclude that there is another shooter involved. The senior officer, Alvin, orders the other officer to send all the documents to the FBI, and he leaves to search for the warehouse mentioned in the tape. However, Sarah's Jeep is blown up, making both rush outside while Derek sneaks into the office and burns all the evidence. Meanwhile, Sarah dreams of being with Kyle in the post-Judgment Day world while Felicia operates on her leg. Sarah and Kyle stand near a dead tree, from the base of which Kyle pulls out a box that he and Derek had buried, which has Sarah's picture. They get intimate. While in the morgue, Derek arrives, closely followed by Alvin, leading to a standoff between Felicia, Derek, and the officer Alvin. Felicia, however, shoots Alvin in the arm, whom she reveals to be her abusive husband. Derek and Sarah thus get on their way while telling Felicia to let the police blame Sarah for the shooting to get out of trouble. They then set off through the desert and on the way see smoke rise from afar where Sarah claims the warehouse is located. The Connors are on their way to Charm Acres to attend the funeral of the 32 employees killed in the Desert Canyon heat and air plant explosion, while several cows mysteriously lie dead near the road, but go unnoticed. Among the portraits of the dead, Sarah notices the picture of Winston, whom she shot in the factory, and John approaches a girl named Zoe, who shares his aversion for funerals, and they sit and talk while Cameron stares at them. Sarah then comes across the wife of Winston, Diana, and pretends to be an employee at the company, to whom Diana complains in the church that she used to spend very little time with her husband because of his 24/7 work week. Meanwhile, Weaver's associate Walsh, who is attending the service, is called and ordered by her to locate a man who has been presumed dead in the blast. On the other hand, Agent James arrives at Weaver's company and is welcomed by Mr. Merck, who wears a plaid tie as a homage to Lachlan Weaver on his anniversary. And then both are received by Weaver. Back again at the church, the pastor thanks the Kaliba group who own the factory for sending flowers and condolences, but Diana protests it by highlighting the suspicious secrecy of the company and the lack of attendance at the funeral, and then storms off. Sarah follows out to console her while Derek glances at Walsh with suspicion. Outside the church, Sarah consoles Diana and agrees with the suspicious nature of the company, claiming herself to have only worked there as a waitress. Diana goes even further and gives Sarah a key to Winston's private storage locker, which she does not have the courage to find and open, as it may tarnish his image in her eyes. Moments later, Sarah enters the storage locker and finds a bloody towel lying on the floor. Later, Derek offers a lift to Walsh, whose car tire is punctured, and on the way he questions Walsh, who reveals that he is an OSHA investigator investigating the explosion. When Derek presses him with more questions about the cause of the explosion, Walsh gets out of the car. On the other hand, Sarah tells Diana that the storage locker was empty as they drive along the procession, but Diana plays the recording of the last call she received from Winston 3 days before the explosion, where he appears to be begging for his life. Meanwhile, John and Cameron accompany Zoe and her boyfriend Henry in his car as they drive along with the procession. Zoe starts talking about her ex, who disappeared overnight when his mom was fired by the company. This annoys Henry, who starts arguing with her, but Cameron interrupts to tell him that Zoe does not love him, making him stop the car to get them out, stalling the procession in the process and drawing the attention of the police patrol. But John quickly takes over the car and drives away, following Zoe's directions to the site where the cows lie dead by a pool of water. Zoe claims that cows often die there and disappear the next day. Henry thinks they might have been shot, but Cameron finds no bullet wounds, and John thinks the water they drank may have been poisoned. Later at the cemetery, Zoe comments on how the victims' families, including hers, are going to get rich off the insurance because they allegedly worked on a secret government project under the cover of a heat and air plant. Meanwhile, Walsh arrives at the cemetery, closely followed by Derek, who informs Sarah that he is looking for something. As Sarah has become suspicious of Walsh, he follows him to a house where he breaks in through the window. Back at the cemetery, while saying farewell to Zoe, John questions the inconsistency in the story of her father's death, which causes her to change her tone and scold John before leaving. Cameron notices this and tells John that Zoe is not even mourning the death. Elsewhere, James returns from his break to Weaver's office with a plaid tie and inquires how Savannah is dealing with her father's death and why she is not present on his anniversary, while sharing with her the story of his own father's passing. Weaver responds awkwardly to his questions and sends him away, excusing that she is emotional. As James exits the office, she calls her assistant Victoria to bring Savannah to Weaver so she can play the role of a mourning wife. All the while, Sarah gets tired of waiting for Walsh outside the house and enters through the open window. Meanwhile, at Zoe's father's wake, Cameron remarks on the lack of sorrow on the part of Zoe and her mother as being abnormal at the occasion of the death of a family member. Back at the house, Sarah finds it empty of any furniture, and upon inspecting some scuff marks, she discovers a cabinet that acts as a hidden door to a basement, which has several monitors providing a look into all the houses in the community. She also sees some blood and follows the trail, while John frantically searches a room at Zoe's house, but she suddenly walks in on him. However, he says that he knows that her father is not dead and he can help her, but she refuses and gestures towards a hidden camera and an air vent above them whose footage is displayed at the surveillance room. Simultaneously, Sarah walks through a tunnel connected to the room that leads up through a hatch into a garage, when she is called by Derek. While they talk, she sees him outside the window, revealing that Zoe's father was in charge of the surveillance room and was secretly accessing it through the tunnel entrance in his garage. Later, while gathered up at the surveillance room, Sarah inquires Zoe's mom about what was being built at the factory, but she says that she has no clue and that the money was enough for them to look away. However, Cameron finds a video in the archives in which Zoe's father is seen shooting Zoe's former boyfriend Mike and his family in their home. John finds a boot in the room and claims that he knows where Zoe's father might be. When they are leaving the house, Diana approaches Sarah, demanding an explanation for her suspicious behavior, but Sarah refuses to answer and leaves. Meanwhile, in her office, Weaver notices Savannah quietly crying over a drawing. When she asks why, Savannah says she misses her dad. Weaver narrates to her James's story about his father, passing it as her own. But the daughter still seems upset, no matter how hard Weaver tries to simulate human emotions. Moments later, the Connors arrive at the pool where the cows were found dead and find Walsh's dead body beside the water. Sarah asks John about the place, but before he can reply, the water starts boiling and a drone shoots out of it and flies away. It arrives near a semi-truck which Zoe's father opens for it to land in before he closes the door and drives away. Sarah drives through deserted streets at midnight, eventually arriving near an industrial park in downtown when she is called by John, to whom she reveals that she is looking into a company named Western Iron and Metal that used to supply metal tooling equipment to Desert Heat and Air, and asks him to check its background. Sarah then attempts to break into the factory when she notices a coyote nearby staring at her, and suddenly, a man in a ski mask shoots her from behind with a stun gun. She wakes up in a bed with electrodes attached to her head and is approached by Nurse Hobson, who explains she is again woken up from a nightmare and needs to stay in the clinic till they diagnose the cause of her insomnia. When the nurse leaves, Sarah notices another patient named Dana trying to have a smoke secretly and requests that Sarah keep it a secret. Meanwhile, John arrives and takes Sarah down to the cafeteria for breakfast, where Cameron is waiting. At the breakfast table, John stresses the importance of the treatment of her insomnia despite her desire to go back home, as being unable to sleep for 2 weeks led to her falling down the stairs. He then leaves with Cameron, and Sarah notices a coyote tattoo on the neck of a janitor. Later, Sarah has another nightmare where she finds herself tied and blindfolded in the back of a van. and to her surprise, the kidnapper turns out to be Winston, who inquires about her involvement in blowing up the factory and is about to inject her with a drug that would make her talk. However, she again wakes up in the clinic and the nurse informs her that her nightmares are a cause of anxiety, but Sarah refuses both therapy and sedatives as treatment. Moments later, Sarah finds a dream catcher hanging in the window, which Dana reveals was made for her by the janitor named Hector, and is supposed to catch nightmares. She shares that her nightmares are associated with addiction and attributes Sarah's nightmares to something she is running from. Back again in the nightmare, Sarah regains consciousness and argues with Winston about how the Kaliba group is going to kill him one day and bring about the end, but he ignores her. However, he gets furious when Diana is mentioned and attacks Sarah, which causes him to trip and fall over in the fight, accidentally injecting himself with the drug. Moments later, she wakes up at night in her bed and notices the nurse secretly giving Dana an injection while she sleeps. When the nurse leaves, Sarah tries to wake Dana, who lies unconscious with a mark of the injection near her neck. Sarah then tails the nurse to the basement, but she gets suspicious and checks the stairs, but Sarah hides behind the wall bracing. The next morning, Nurse Hobson inquires why Sarah took off her electrodes, which Sarah excuses as having been caused by sleepwalking. Down below, Cameron questions John about the nature of dreams as he unsuccessfully tries to get a snack that is stuck in the vending machine, which is then shaken loose by Cameron's single blow. In the meantime, Sarah comes down and reports the nurse's suspicious behavior to John, but he finds it hard to believe as everyone is acting normal. John then asks Sarah about the contents of her nightmare, and she appears to be suffering from the guilt of killing Winston. Their conversation is interrupted by the nurse, who takes Sarah inside for a nap, where she again returns to her nightmare and answers Winston's questions about how his wife dressed for his funeral. He then reveals that he did the dirty work for his company, including assassinations, the first one of which was of a bookkeeper who was his neighbor. Sarah offers to help him disappear with his wife, which gets him to open her handcuffs, but when she runs out of the van, she finds the door of the garage chained and Winston again restrains her. When Sarah wakes up, she hears a commotion in the room and finds Dana's bed on fire as she is evacuated out of the room.
Get out of the room. Dana! Get out of the room!
She immediately informs John, who advises her to return, but instead she decides to stay and get to the root of the issue. Moments later, Nurse Hobson addresses the staff and the patients, telling them that Dana is alive but in critical condition, and that the patients can choose to leave but must allow their sleep to be monitored with electrodes for research and diagnostic purposes in case they stay. She then approaches Sarah in the hallway and urges her to take diazepam for her increased anxiety due to the accident in front of her eyes. However, when she leaves, Sarah spits out the capsules. Later, as Hector mops the floor in her room, she asks him about dream catchers and his tattoo. He tells her that Dana should have tried to take control of her nightmares, and that the tattoo has no symbolic significance other than aesthetic purposes. Back again in her nightmare, Winston urges her to tell him a story, and he guesses from her C-section scars and her emotional responses that she has a son of her own who is also her accomplice. At night, when Sarah wakes up, she sees the nurse leave the room after giving her an injection in her shoulder, which takes her back to her nightmare, where Winston resolves to kill her son when he comes to save her. He then tries to choke her to get her to call her son, but fails. Moments later, Sarah is woken up by John, who claims to have been called by her. They then go downstairs and break into the nurse's basement office and find a brain scanning program inside, which has the record of all the patients. Sarah tells him to delete her data, and in the meantime, a staff member informs the nurse that Sarah's electrodes must have been taken off as there is no incoming data. So she comes back to the basement office and finds Sarah while John hides. She then attacks Sarah and is about to kill her when John shoots her. She turns out to be a Terminatrix and infiltrates who overpowers both and shoots them dead. However, it turns out that all the events in the clinic were just nightmares. As Sarah finds herself tied in the back of the van and hears Winston report to someone on the call that her son was her accomplice who must be taken out, Sarah tries desperately to get the handcuffs off by biting her wrists, but to no avail. She then breaks one of her fingers in an attempt to slip the cuffs off her wrists. Meanwhile, Winston cuts the call and opens the back of the van intending to kill Sarah, but she ambushes him and shoves the injection into his eye. They both then engage in a scuffle that ends with her overpowering him and saying that he is real before shooting him. She then drives away in the night, likening herself to the demon spirit that haunts men in their sleep. In the Connor's house, Cameron addresses a pigeon, telling it not to nest in the chimney before catching it and bringing it outside to set it free, but accidentally squeezes it to death in her metallic hand. Meanwhile, Sarah sees the faded bloodstains of Riley Dawson on the washroom floor and starts scrubbing them, when she suddenly sees Riley standing before her, freshly discharged from the hospital. Riley is apologetic about her incident and offers to bring Sarah more cleaning agent from the kitchen. However, instead of taking it up to Sarah, she holds the cleaning agent in her hands as she sits on the countertop, when she is approached by John, who consoles her and tells her to let go of the past. Meanwhile, Sarah, who is waiting for Riley, decides to get the cleaning agent herself, but finds it placed in the middle of the corridor. Elsewhere, Derek and Jesse practice target shooting with apples, and he asks her to help him get some information from a guy, which she reluctantly agrees. Back at home, Sarah inquires Cameron about a stack of research files on the shell companies, which Cameron claims to have been taken by Derek. Sarah then questions Riley's incident, to which Cameron replies by telling her that Riley was upset the day she dropped unconscious and had a bruise on her face which she claimed to have gotten by bumping into a door, while John claimed it was given to her by her foster father. So Sarah decides to look into her foster parents. Moments later, Cameron cuts herself but then opens up all of her forearm to fix her hand. While she is at it, Riley approaches the garage to get her bicycle but is freaked out and walks away as Cameron observes her from behind. John then enters the garage and offers to fix Cameron's hand with a spare part. As a result, Cameron pulls up a box of T-888 spare parts that angers John, as she was supposed to destroy them, but Cameron insists that they would prove to be useful, and that future John would agree with her. Sometime later, Riley meets up with Jessie, informing her that she saw Cameron repairing her endoskeleton, and that she cannot go back there or else she would be terminated. Jessie reassures her and tells her to focus on the mission. Meanwhile, Sarah shares a beer with Riley's foster father and indirectly asks if he hit Riley, prompting him to reveal that Riley attacked his wife while ranting about the end of the world and then asked to see a guidance counselor. He blames John for his bad influence on her as Sarah takes the counselor's number from him. Back in the garage, John fixes Cameron's arm while Sarah meets the counselor, who turns out to be Jessie disguised as Ms. Wilson. Sarah tries to get some information about Riley's background, but Jessie instead targets her by implying she is a careless mother. Elsewhere, Riley is prescribed more antibiotics by her doctor for her wounds. Sometime later, Cameron finds John researching a restaurant where Derek's target, a Kaliba lawyer, is going to dine, and offers to make him a sandwich as he is hungry, but he refuses her help. Meanwhile, Derek observes his target at a bar when he is approached by a woman who asks him to buy her a drink, but he refuses as he is on business. Back home, John invites Riley over for a movie, but Sarah arrives and scolds John for telling Riley about the Judgment Day. John refuses to tell her anything, but Sarah does not believe him and warns him to be prepared if Cameron finds out about it. Moments later, Riley arrives at the house and Sarah confronts her about the things she said to her father and counselor, but she tells her and John that she didn't say anything. Just then, a woman named Molly Malloy from the Department of Child and Family Services knocks on their door, wanting to talk about Riley, whom they claim is not present as she is taken by Cameron to the garage. In the garage, Cameron blames Riley for bringing trouble to John and tells her to leave him, as she poses a threat to his safety. Meanwhile, Molly probes into the Connors family environment, claiming to be testing whether it is appropriate for children like John and Riley. She questions them about owning and keeping guns, but John sharply defends their case before the woman leaves. John then enters the garage as Cameron walks towards Riley with her spasming left hand and menacing intentions, but Riley runs over to John, who tells her to wait outside while he himself orders Cameron to stay away from Riley. He also questions Cameron's jealousy of Riley, deeming it uncharacteristic of her. Back in the house, Sarah walks around with her gun in an alert state, but then puts it down unloaded on the table. Simultaneously, John talks to Riley outside, assuring her that he believes in her innocence but asks her if there is anything that she would want to tell him. However, Riley refuses and instead poses the question back at him as John looks up at his mother on the balcony and down at Cameron waiting by the car, and finally says no. Elsewhere, Derek examines some photos of his target and his routine, when Jessie enters and is informed that the target is surrounded by security 24/7, and the only way to get him is to kidnap him on the way to the airport. Derek tells her that she will block the road with her guard and pin down the target's guards while he picks up the lawyer. However, Jessie is reluctant to join in, claiming she is out of practice and that he should do it with his people, but Derek dismisses the excuses and leaves. Meanwhile, John is assuring Sarah of Riley's innocence when she suddenly disappears from outside the house. On the other hand, Jessie is preparing to help Derek with his mission, but she is attacked by Riley, who claims to have figured out that Jessie made her look like a rat by calling her foster parents and the DCFS, so that Cameron would kill her and incur John's anger and loathing. They both brawl, and Riley dominates but is shot dead by Jessie as she gets her hands on a pistol from a hidden cabinet in a nearby table. Meanwhile, Derek waits for Jessie and sees his target slip away before his eyes. Back at the garage, John questions Cameron if she has anything to do with Riley's disappearance, but she refuses and instead claims to have been working on a locket, which she gifts to John for helping to fix her. She tells him that it has a switch that would detonate a bomb planted inside her skull in case John ever decides to destroy her. John finds it unnecessary and questions if future John would accept it, but Cameron tells him that it is his own decision, not future John's. With this, John walks outside and sees another bird who appears to have been squeezed to death by Cameron. In her apartment, Jessie deals with the shock of killing Riley as she zips the corpse in a body bag, and while she is at it, she is reminded of the time she was setting off on a long maritime mission in 2027, when Derek warned her to be careful of the reprogrammed T-888 named Queeg who accompanied her on the mission. Derek also informed her about his secret mission, which would take him away for a long time as he kissed her goodbye. Back at the Connors' house, Sarah packs stuff in the living room in preparation to change their residence, and John volunteers to pack the stuff in the garage before she does. In the garage, John finds Cameron arranging many Terminator spare parts on the table and orders her to bury them before Sarah finds out about them, before telling her that he will return to burn them. Meanwhile, Jessie is approached by a naval aviator in a bar who buys her a drink and flirts with her, leading her to abruptly lash out and punch the man, alerting his friends who surround her. Back at the house, Sarah speaks with her landlord and neighbor Casey as she packs stuff in the kitchen. When Casey reveals that Trevor found a girl's corpse in a river, the description of which makes Sarah realize that it was Riley. In the garage, Cameron and John quickly hide the Terminator parts when they hear Sarah approaching, who asks to talk to John alone. Cameron walks out of the garage and sees a pigeon on the wall, which immediately flies away on her approach. Simultaneously, Sarah informs John of Riley's death, who then walks out of the garage and gives Cameron an accusatory look before storming off. Sarah is then about to tell Cameron, but she interrupts her, saying she heard their conversation. Later at night, John stands on the porch, fidgeting with Cameron's kill switch locket, when she comes out and is asked by John if she killed Riley. Cameron denies it and offers her condolences, but he refuses to believe her. Elsewhere, Derek drives Jessie home as she thanks him for bailing her out of the police station, but refuses to give him any details. Back in 2027, Jessie and her crew celebrate crossing the equator in their submarine when they suddenly experience turbulence and get back to their post to fend off a probable enemy attack. Meanwhile, in the office, Savannah tries to jump scare Weaver and requests her to play hide-and-seek with her, but Weaver lectures her on the virtues of patience and work, prompting Savannah to leave her office. Savannah notices a door open up for her without any human help, and as she enters the hallway, the elevator opens up for her, while also playing music, luring the girl eventually to Cromartie in a basement room, who offers to play hide-and-seek with her. Later, James is approached by Weaver, asking him to search for Savannah in the building. They go down to the basement and question John Henry about Savannah, but John Henry reveals that she is playing hide-and-seek and they will have to play along to find her, despite James trying to coax it out of him. While Weaver agrees to play along, in a dark alley, Derek is patching up Jesse's bruised knuckles when he receives a call informing him about Riley's murder, which he believes was carried out by Cameron, the Terminator. Jesse urges him to get John to kill the machine, claiming that Derek cannot do it himself. Back in 2027, Jessie and her crew discover that the turbulence was caused by some depth changes, but their troubles increase when an enemy submarine called Kraken attacks them with torpedoes. However, the T-888 skipper Queeg fires a torpedo back and expertly takes the submarine to lower depths to play dead. He is commended by Jessie, but she questions him why they are 3,000 miles off course. Meanwhile, Sarah discovers the hidden Terminator parts in the garage, and when John tries to defend Cameron by saying that they kept it for research, she dismisses his excuses and urges him to be honest with himself. As she is sure that Cameron killed Riley, John defends Cameron regardless of Sarah reminding him of the time she lied to them, and he leaves in anger. On the other hand, James is getting frustrated with John Henry's guessing game and tries to coax Savannah's location out of him while Weaver plays along, fascinated by the growth of her AI creation. James finally manages to guess Savannah's location from John Henry's clues and climbs up to the roof and finds her crying in a helicopter. He consoles Savannah and hands her back to her unbothered mother. At night, John visits Riley's foster home pretending to check up on her, but her father reveals she has not come home and might have left them, which foster kids often tend to do. However, he receives a call from Riley, who is actually Cameron impersonating her voice, telling him she went back to her hometown. John also plays along and talks on the phone like everything is normal, but later confronts Cameron for taking it too far by saying "I love you" to him and takes off alone. On the other end, James, while teaching John Henry human morality, explains to him that the choices he made were wrong, as they could have harmed Savannah, and its reality dawns on John Henry. Meanwhile, in her apartment, Jessie tries to convince Derek of the utility of Riley's death, claiming that something good can come of it, but Derek refutes her claim, saying it can serve no good purpose. They get intimate, after which Derek leaves, while Jessie's mind drifts back to 2027. In the submarine, she questions Queeg as to why they have been sailing off course, which he explains by informing her of a new mission put forth by John Connor involving the retrieval of a package from a deep-water oil rig near Indonesia, but doesn't tell her what's in the package. Later, Lieutenant Dietz and his team are sent to retrieve the package from the oil rig, where they find it being guarded by a Terminator unit and 2 hunter-killers. He goes up to them unarmed, informing them he is there for John Connor's package. Back at the garage, Cameron finds Sarah burning up the spare parts, and she says that she would have killed Cameron if it wasn't for John, claiming her to be a threat to him. But Cameron states that they all are a threat to him as he cares about them and would endanger himself for them, so he is better off alone, as he would be in the future. On the other hand, John is in a morgue to see Riley's body, which is stored under the name of Jane Doe. He reluctantly looks at the corpse and then holds her hand against his face, apologizing to her before leaving. Meanwhile, Jessie sits in her apartment, suffering from the guilt of Riley's murder. Derek offers John his condolences at Riley's passing as they sit in their car outside the morgue, when John questions how long Derek thinks he could survive face-to-face against Cameron. and they both conclude that he wouldn't stand a chance. Meanwhile, Jesse observes the notice board in an indoor swimming pool with pictures of families before approaching the pool and testing the water with her hand, which again reminds her of her mission on the submarine named Jimmy Carter in 2027, where after Lieutenant Dietz's team returns with the package, Queeg, the reprogrammed Terminator, takes it into his possession, placing it in the magazine with authorized access only. His secrecy makes Dietz suspicious, but his doubts are dismissed by Jesse, who mentions that the orders are from John Connor. However, Dietz still rants about it to the crew during lunch break, saying that John Connor has been tricked by the Terminators into handing them control of every Resistance fighter base, leaving the humans vulnerable. Jesse notices this and dismisses their break while scolding Dietz for letting the pressure get to him. Back in 2007, she contemplates the decision she took in 2027 as she stands on the edge of the pool before jumping in. In the meantime, Sarah tells John that he shouldn't have gone to see Riley's body as it would have been hard on him, but he assures her that these are things he has to face himself. He then goes and apologizes to Cameron for doubting her. Meanwhile, in 2027, Queeg instructs Jesse to get the crew ready for a direct route to their destination to make up for the time they lost while trying to escape the enemy submarine. But Jesse explains that the crew needs a reason and motivation to perform the miracles he desires. While they are at it, alarms alert them about someone interfering with their cargo, and when they arrive to check on it, they see Dietz along with other crew members force open the package. Jesse tries to stop them, but Dietz dismisses her authority, and all of a sudden a metallic fluid in the package materializes into a human shape that stabs an officer dead and steals her appearance before disappearing into an air vent. The crew is about to pursue it, but Queeg orders them to get back to work and refuses to give any explanations about the package, even to Jesse. On the other hand, Sarah fixes the floorboards and apologizes to John for having to shift residence again. However, John admits that he is responsible for it as he broke the rules. Sarah then reminds him of the different towns and schools they have had to change on the run. Meanwhile, at Zeracorp, James sits along with John Henry as he makes miniature statues, and when he is about to turn off Henry's body before leaving, Henry requests him to stay for a while so that he can complete his statue, and when James grants his request, he wonders if they are now friends. Simultaneously, Jesse zones back to 2027 while swimming, where Dietz, now paranoid due to the liquid Terminator being on the loose in the ship, starts suspecting that Garvin is not eating because he is the escaped infiltrator. And when Jesse confronts him, Dietz threatens to strip her down to check if even she is a machine. Jesse thus attacks him but is subdued by the rest of the crew who start beating her, until Queeg arrives and smashes Dietz's head into the wall, killing him instantly and ordering the rest of the mutineers to return to their posts. Back home, Sarah stops Cameron from going out after John, questioning why she is staying with him and then implying that the future John sent her back because he wanted to get rid of her. Back at Zeracorp, Weaver comes to see Henry, who tells her that he convinced James to leave his body operational, and also informs her that he found James's resignation in the company inventory along with the files of his new job in Denmark. He then questions Weaver if she is going to kill James despite being their friend, and she replies that she might if it is necessary. Back at the pool, a staff member inquires Jesse about Riley's absence, which she deflects by saying that she will bring her along next time. Meanwhile, in 2027, Queeg advises an upset Jesse to rest for recovery from the fight, but she refuses and instead relieves Queeg of his post due to his coldness towards the crewmates' deaths and secrecy about the package. However, Queeg does not comply, prompting Jesse to blow his head off with a plasma gun and order the crew to evacuate the ship, hoping that the liquid Terminator will be destroyed in the process. However, when she is about to exit, the infiltrator appears behind her in Officer Goodno's form and tells her to inform John Connor that the answer is no, before escaping the submarine into the ocean as it explodes. Back in the present, when Jesse enters her apartment, she finds John inside with a gun, who tells her that he had become suspicious of Riley, making him follow her, which led him to Jesse, and he later figured out that she had murdered her. However, he spares her and orders her to leave, and before Jesse leaves, she inquires if her plan would have successfully driven a wedge between him and Cameron, to which he replies no, making Jesse regret the loss of Riley even more. Back at Serrano Base in 2027, Cameron interrogates Jesse, telling her that her actions cost them at T-888, a submarine in the package, and yet she has not given any useful information. Jesse tells her that she would only report to John Connor, not to a Terminator. However, she gives up and informs Cameron that the answer was no. In return, Jesse demands the question, which Cameron reveals was, "Will you join us?" Before leaving, Cameron informs Jesse that she was pregnant but her baby died during the events of the mission and offers her condolences. Back in 2007, Jesse finds Derek waiting for her in the parking lot, who tells her the story of how he killed Billy Wisher despite him being his best mate in the post-Judgment Day future, because he had lied to him and was the man who created the software that evolved into Skynet. Using the same reason, he disowns Jesse and decides to shoot her despite John's orders not to. and he takes aim in a conflicted state as Jesse tries to run away. Back in the apartment, John questions Derek about what people think of him in the future, and Derek tells him that not everyone agrees with his actions or loves him, but they follow him as he is the leader on whose shoulders they rise and fall. When asked about Jesse, Derek is cryptic and only says that John Connor let her go. Meanwhile, Sarah burns the Terminator spare parts in the garage, while Cameron holds a pigeon in her hands outside. Back at the house, John sits between Cameron and Sarah and then starts to weep for his loss as Sarah consoles him. A little while later, Sarah packs toiletries in the washroom and recounts how John used to love jungle stories, specifically of the old man of the forest who was turned into a half-man, half-animal thing for his transgressions. All the while, she and a young John walk through a jungle where he stops to watch a macaw, but Sarah urges him to keep moving as it is a part of their training. Meanwhile, at their home, John approaches her in the washroom, informing her that they have to leave. She instructs Derek to empty their storage locker in the safe house before dark as they leave their house to relocate. Elsewhere, Savannah approaches John Henry to join in his game of Segos and asks him to change the rules so her toy ducklings can play. He agrees but suddenly turns off and starts rebooting Camarty's software, which makes him seize Savannah's arm and try to get to the main system. However, Mr. Merck arrives in time to quickly turn the system off and is closely followed by Weaver and James. Elsewhere, John travels with Sarah in their car and notices that the radio signals are weak due to some interference. Sarah starts playing Bug Slug with him to lighten his mood, while also taking a detour from their main route. On the other hand, Merck informs Weaver and James that John Henry does not have an engineering flaw. However, he was attacked externally with malware by someone who probably wanted to kill him. In the meantime, Cameron and Derek are clearing out the storage locker when Derek's possessive attitude towards Jesse's jacket prompts Cameron to offer condolences about their lost child, which startles Derek, making him probe further to finally discover that Jesse was pregnant and miscarried aboard the submarine mission. Sometime later, Sarah and John arrive at a secluded house near a lighthouse where John, to his surprise, finds Charlie Dixon, who offers him homemade soup and then takes him outside to help him with the boat, but is rather cold towards Sarah as she intends to leave the next day. Sarah observes them from the window as John tells Charlie about Riley, and Charlie tries to console him by saying how he used to see his wife Michelle everywhere after her death, but then it slowly got better. He also tells John about the security system with bombs rigged to it, and his intentions to escape by boat if the Terminators attack. Later, when John sleeps, Sarah's mind goes back to the jungle where young John sleeps near a campfire, and she places his hand on the gun before leaving. At that moment, Charlie returns from the market and Sarah requests him to take care of John, which he is reluctant to do. But Sarah convinces him by revealing that she has breast cancer despite having thought that she bypassed it by jumping ahead in time. Meanwhile, at ZeraCorp, Weaver instructs Merck to turn John Henry back on after restoring his processes, but without providing him access to the outside world to prevent further attacks. They try to communicate with him, but he only replies with, "God, why hast thou forsaken me?" The next morning, Sarah makes pancakes and then sits down to have breakfast with Charlie and John like a happy family. Back at ZeraCorp, Mr. Merck explains that John Henry experienced a very long death-like state when he was shut down abruptly and needs to be connected to the outside network to get back to normal. Weaver gives permission, and John Henry is reawakened to reveal that there is another AI like him out in the world.
Another one like me.
Later, as they are preparing to leave, John questions Sarah about Derek and Cameron's absence and is told that they are not trusted anymore since Derek put John's life in danger by hiding Jesse's matter from them. Back in the jungle, Sarah wakes up on a hill and looks for John near the campfire but finds him gone, making her search for him frantically until he sneaks up on her from behind and is embraced by her. Sometime later, Sarah gets the lump in her breast checked out, which turns out to be a cyst formed around a metallic object, which she guesses to be a transmitter hidden inside her by Winston when she was kidnapped. In the meantime, a janitor walks around the hospital, tracking the signal from the transmitter, while two other men in a van follow Cameron and Derek from the storage lockers, and a third walks towards Charlie's house. However, Sarah tells the doctor to leave as she turns the transmitter off by zapping it with the defibrillator, which also knocks her unconscious. On the other hand, Derek and Cameron are brought to a halt by a punctured tire that makes Derek check the van standing a few meters behind them, while Cameron proceeds to change the tire. However, as Derek approaches the van, he is shot with a stun gun and loaded into the van while Cameron pursues them, killing one of the men, but the other manages to drive the van away, with Cameron noting down its number plate. Meanwhile, when John and Charlie return to the house, they hear the security alarms go off, prompting them to run for the boat amidst gunfire. John gets to the boat while Charlie tries to hold off the attacker with a rifle and switches on the explosives with which he had rigged the perimeters. Back in the hospital, Sarah knocks down the janitor as he enters the room and shocks him with the defibrillator before escaping. At ZeraCorp, John Henry explains that he was hacked by the insertion of a worm program, and that the intelligence who designed it has infiltrated the entire internet with its worm program, and surprisingly shares the same code as him, making them brothers. He traces its origin to Miles Dyson, who was killed in an explosion assumed to be caused by Sarah Connor, and answers that it wants to survive when questioned about its motives. Meanwhile, Cameron arrives at the warehouse where the van is parked and tears through the chain-link fence, but water is poured on her, which is followed by a shock to knock her out, after which the kidnapper tries to extract her chip with instructions from his phone. However, Cameron wakes up and kills him before freeing Derek. Upon her return, Sarah finds the house broken into with Charlie's dog dead and the attacker dead from the explosion. She is relieved when she sees the boat gone. However, her relief is turned into sorrow when she finds Charlie's corpse floating in the water with gunshot wounds in the chest. Sarah shows Derek several nameless graves, telling him that Kyle Reese is buried in one of them, which Derek appreciates but disapproves of her hiding their stay at Charlie's house. However, Sarah rebukes him for the secrets he kept from them that could have endangered John's life. Meanwhile, John arrives and shows them a picture of Savannah Weaver on the phone retrieved from Charlie's murderer, claiming that he saw her at Dr. Sherman's office. On the other hand, Savannah is caught chatting with John Henry by her teacher on the school computer, which makes her think that she is getting groomed by a predator and reports it to Weaver, who in turn instructs Savannah to keep John Henry a secret, as people won't understand him. In the meantime, John Henry confesses to James his desire to discover more about the other AI, because it shares the same basic code as him, and to know his thoughts and his plans, as he does not want to die again. Sometime later, Savannah gets a call from John Henry while doing homework at home under the watch of her babysitter, Debbie. He tells her to put on her headset, so they can talk while she does her homework, but just then, a delivery man rings the bell and upon entering, shoots Debbie dead. John Henry sees this through the cameras and instructs Savannah to hide and then run to the garage. But in the garage, the headset goes out of range, leaving Savannah helpless, who is rescued by John Connor hiding in the garage. The man enters the garage and starts shooting while Sarah sneaks up on him from behind and fires at him. But he turns out to be a Terminator who returns it, which is blocked by Cameron. She fights him while John escapes with Sarah and Savannah. However, the Terminator overpowers Cameron to smash her against a wall, and then goes up to the living room where he shoots Derek dead. Outside, John and Savannah run across the lawn while Sarah tries to distract the Terminator and is about to get shot, when Cameron returns and throws the Terminator down the hill, buying them some time. They stop for a moment to check on Derek, but are forced to abandon his body. Later, James finds Detective Creighton from the LAPD, who is currently working on the case in Weaver's office. He reports that Savannah is missing after a brutal gunfight at the Weaver residence, which killed a babysitter, 4 guards, and a gunman, and questions James about Weaver. Moments later, James visits John Henry and discovers that the Connors saved Savannah. Thus, he asks him to keep it a secret and in return promises to bring Savannah back unharmed. Through John Henry, James acquires Sarah's number and calls her at their safe house and is told by her to meet her alone. When he reaches the decided location, Cameron gets in his car and escorts him to their safe house, where he talks to Sarah, who informs him of Charlie and Derek's deaths, before revealing that a Terminator attacked Savannah, so he should let her talk to Weaver to find the reason. Meanwhile, John Henry does not provide Weaver with the camera footage, claiming that it is corrupted, before James returns and reports to Weaver. Back at the safe house, John talks to Savannah, and she tells him about her friend John Henry, who lives in the basement and has a cord in the back of his head due to which he cannot leave, making John realize that she is talking about a Terminator. On the other hand, at Zara Corp, James informs Weaver that Sarah has her daughter and wants to meet her, but Weaver refuses to leave the office as it makes John Henry vulnerable. And to counter James's shock at prioritizing a computer over her daughter, she claims that her daughter and even James's survival may one day depend upon John Henry's survival, but still agrees to meet Sarah. While leaving the office, Detective Creighton informs James that the unidentified dead body at Weaver's house belongs to a fugitive whose case was under James before he escaped from custody. Creighton implies that James might be working with the fugitive, who is Derek, as he escaped under James's custody and then reappeared at his employer's house. James says he understands Creighton's concerns but refuses the charges. Still, Creighton doesn't trust him and eyes him suspiciously as he leaves. Moments later, Sarah and Cameron return to the safe house and are informed by John that Savannah's friend is some sort of Terminator using Camardi's body, which is something much more concerning. Cameron wants to kill him, but Sarah dismisses the idea and calls James, agreeing to return Savannah to close the case before meeting Weaver. Meanwhile, in Weaver's office, Detective Creighton suggests that James may be complicit in Savannah's disappearance, but Weaver does not think so. Moments later, she visits John Henry and confronts him for keeping the videotapes hidden from her on James's orders. But John Henry counters it by mentioning her act of keeping her identity a secret from James and others, and threatens to expose her. However, Weaver suggests it is unwise, as she then would have to kill James. She also explains to him that humans can be sacrificed for the greater good, just as Savannah can be sacrificed to save him. Perplexed, John Henry asks what part he plays. Weaver replies that he isn't either option, he's the one defining the game. Back at the safe house, John reveals to Cameron that it was not his idea to ditch her and Derek in the desert, which she claims to know of, in addition to the fact that Sarah wanted to leave him with Charlie, as she suspected she had cancer and would not survive. While they are talking, Sarah arrives and takes them to the cinema to hand Savannah to James, and there she assures Cameron that she will burn the Terminator at ZaraCorp to ashes even if he betrays them. However, when Sarah walks out of the building after returning Savannah to James, police surround and arrest her, which James swears he did not know about. While Sarah is taken away by the police, the killer Terminator who attacked Weaver's residence watches from the sidelines, while Cameron and John watch on the TVs of a street store. Back at Zeracorp, Savannah is returned to Weaver, and later she goes back to her friend John Henry, and together they sing a nursery rhyme, while Derek's ashes are buried in the same graveyard as Kyle. In the year 2009, Sarah sits handcuffed in an interrogation room in the Los Angeles County Prison, when police officer Aldridge enters and informs her that she is being charged with the murder of Miles Dyson, blowing up a bank along with her son and his schoolfellow, and kidnapping Savannah Weaver. He gives her the choice of cooperating and bringing John alive or risk getting him killed, but Sarah insists that John died in the bank explosion. Meanwhile, John frantically watches the news about Sarah's arrest and the police's search for him and Cameron, and he suggests moving, but Cameron explains that the motel they are staying at is ideal for lying low. John then wants a computer to research whether being in the proximity of shielded nuclear power sources, such as the one in Cameron, can cause cancer. On the other hand, the T-888 that attacked Weaver's residence is busy fixing the damage to his body from bullets in a warehouse while news of Sarah's arrest plays on a television beside him. Sometime later, Mr. Merck plays a board game with John Henry when Weaver arrives and takes him aside to ask him how much time it would take to move John Henry in case of another attack. However, Mr. Merck advises against it, explaining that even changing small portions of wires tweaks John Henry's personality. Thus he should be kept where he is. In the meantime, James visits Sarah in custody and explains that he had no idea that the police followed him to the theater, and that they suspect him of being complicit with her. So she should try to tell them the truth. However, she refuses to do so as it would make her look crazy and screams to the camera that Savannah is not safe, as Officer Aldridge watches from his office, while John Henry and Weaver watch from Zeracorp. Later, James visits Officer Aldridge's office, where the officer tells him that Sarah remains resolute in not providing any information, making James suggest that she might be telling the truth. However, Aldridge believes that Sarah's request to see a priest points toward her guilty conscience. In the meantime, the priest turns out to be Bonilla, in whose church Sarah and the others took shelter, and Sarah proceeds to tell him about the devil that exists and wants to destroy the world. Back at Zeracorp, James sees Weaver and John Henry spying on Sarah through the cameras, which he disapproves of, but Weaver instead tasks him to arrange a meeting with John, as he and Cameron are related to Camardi's past. Elsewhere, the T-888 is busy buying silencers for his guns, while back at the motel, John asks why Cameron thinks that Sarah might have cancer, and is told that Sarah has lost 11% of her body weight in the last 6 weeks. John blames Cameron for it, suspecting that her power source might have leaked and harmed Sarah despite Cameron's denial. In the meantime, John receives a call from Bonilla, who gives a woman named Chola a package containing Sarah's message to be delivered to John. But she is seen by James exiting the church. At the motel, Chola gives them fake IDs and Sarah's message for John to leave and not try to break her out of prison. When she leaves, Cameron observes her from the window and spots James, whom she brings in. Inside, James again states that he has nothing to do with Sarah's arrest and that Weaver wants to meet John, but John rejects the idea. However, James delivers Weaver's message to Cameron, which is, "Will you join us?" But Cameron gets upset and denies knowing what it means while forcing James to leave. Later, Aldridge visits Sarah in her cell, claiming to believe in Terminators and time travel after receiving calls from 35 people who knew her as Sarah Baum, and all agreed that she and John look younger than they are supposed to be. However, Sarah sees through his ruse and still claims that John is dead. But before he leaves, Aldridge tells her of the disappearance of Danny Dyson, Miles Dyson's son, implying that Sarah might be involved in it. Sometime later, the T-888 breaks into the Zeracorp parking lot and kills the security guard. But Weaver appears and impales him with one arm while using the other to conduct electricity into his body to disable him. She then shows his chip to John Henry, asking him to recover data from it, which he claims is unlikely since it's damaged from contact with oxygen, and he thinks the T-888 must have been sent by the other AI like him. Meanwhile, James arrives and reports that John refused to meet despite receiving the message, but Weaver thinks that he will change his decision soon. The next morning, John wakes up to find Cameron staring at him, telling him that she is designed to kill humans so that desire exists deep inside her. Thus, John should know how her chip works. She then guides him in making an incision in her chest through which he can access her chip. Later, Cameron calls Bonilla, who visits Sarah the next day and tells her that Cameron is coming for her. The alarms suddenly ring, and Cameron walks through the gunfire of the guards with a shotgun but avoids shooting them. John Henry observes this along with Weaver while Cameron sets all the prisoners free, creating chaos in which Sarah manages to slip away. Outside, they get into John's car and drive away, but Sarah wants to go to Zeracorp to destroy the Terminator in the basement. Moments later, they are escorted from the reception by James while Cameron breaks into the basement and reaches John Henry, who invites her to join them. However, she takes out a knife and closes the door behind her. Up in Weaver's office, she thanks Sarah for saving Savannah and invites them to join her against their common enemy, Skynet, when suddenly a Skynet drone crashes into the office, decimating it. However, Weaver covers them by expanding her metallic body And then they all get down to the basement where they find John Henry gone and Cameron sitting disabled without her microchip. Weaver claims Cameron herself gave it to John Henry and reveals that she is using the Turk to build a system rivaling Skynet and prepares to travel through time, but Sarah and James refuse to travel with them. Sarah promises John that she will destroy Skynet, and Weaver hands Savannah's care to James, while she and John skip through time to arrive at a post-Judgment Day Zara Corp building. In the destroyed building, John grabs a jacket nearby to cover his body and is found by Derek and his squad while Weaver hides. Derek doesn't recognize John Connor and tells him he is wearing his brother Kyle's jacket, who approaches him from behind accompanied by Cameron. Terminator Rise of the Machines begins with a massive nuclear explosion wiping out everyone. A man rides his bike whilst John narrates explaining the war between man and machines, showing us how they were victorious once mankind had vanished. John is seen working, reminiscing about the past, telling us he lives off the grid due to safety precautions. He has no one, as he has dreams about the danger mankind will be in. A spacecraft is seen hovering before flying above, showing us the war zone and collateral damage everyone suffered. A group of Terminators are seen shooting at them, looking very lethal and unstoppable. John soon wakes up in a random place and begins riding, although he falls off his bike due to an animal. Downtown somewhere, we get another visitor from the future. A female this time though. She walks towards a random car and kills a woman before driving her vehicle. Dialing something, we see she has a target list but draws some attention to herself by taking a red light. Pulling over, this woman is TX model, and once the officer approaches, she stares at his gun. The next day, a couple shop when Kate Brewster receives a call from her dad explaining he isn't able to take time off work to see her and meet her partner. Robert Brewster is her father, a man who works in the military as a high-ranking officer. In the meantime, someplace else, another visitor arrives, a Terminator. Later, a truck is seen dropping John off in a quiet place as he breaks into an animal's hospital to take medicine for himself. On the other hand, the Terminator is seen approaching a bar and enters without permission due to being naked. He goes inside and we see a crowd of people cheering him on. The Terminator approaches a man to give him his clothes and forcefully exits with the clothes as well as shiny sunglasses, but breaks them as it doesn't suit him. Breaking into a car, he starts it up and finds a nice pair of glasses before driving off like a madman. Meanwhile, the TX arrives at a drive-thru, finding and killing one of her targets. On the go, she crashes a house party and kills some more of her targets without hesitation. Back to John, he is passed out and awakens when he hears Kate arriving at the animal hospital, who notices a bottle empty on the floor. John confronts her, aiming a gun at her and ordering her not to call authorities while trying to explain his situation. Kate tells him that the medicine he used is for dogs and courageously jumps on him to lock him in a cage. She soon gets a client who she opens the door for and brings her pet through. Coming back to confront John, she asks him questions and finds out who he is and introduces herself. She tells him they are old classmates and brings back memories before hearing someone talking inside the building. The visitor is problematically shot by the TX, proving how ruthless she is, leading Kate to hide from her. As the machine scans the room, it finds a bandage with John's blood on it. Kate makes a run for it and is confronted by the Terminator, who throws her around and asks questions about John. A vehicle then approaches and crashes into her, causing an explosion. The T-850 exits the car and picks Kate up and begins interrogating her for John's whereabouts by locking her in a locker. John then breaks free and notices the hand of the TX before running away until he sees the T-850 come to him and drag him into the car. Unfortunately, the TX walks towards them and the T-850 begins shooting, only to be met with a force like no other. Driving away, John spots the cops driving to the scene, and upon arrival, they find the T-850. Kate calls the cops and tells them the situation before losing her network. The TX then enters a truck and gains control of all vehicles, making them drive like crazy, and simultaneously, the T-850 gets back up and steals a bike to chase the TX. Driving through the streets, Kate is seen inside John's car before he crashes into a civilian. He begins trying to take off and is stopped by the civilian, until 50 arrives, scaring John into magically starting the car and evading the pursuit. The TX collides into random cars as John continues his pursuit, whilst officers use the pit maneuvers, veering him off course. Close behind, the TX shoots her arm, causing an explosion, and drives straight through along with the Terminator, who's riding alongside her. The TX turns her crane on its side and the truck demolishes anything in its path, disallowing anyone to have an advantage in getting to John. Opening fire, the Terminator hits her tires, making her hit him with the crane, holding on for dear life. On the other hand, John continues going toe-to-toe with the officers as the TX smashes the Terminator into a building, destroying everything with no regard for human life. Eventually, he is smashed into a fire truck and takes over the wheel. With everyone now closing in on each other, the T-850 rams into the TX, causing her to blow up the truck. Surprising her, the Terminator throws her out the vehicle and drives, but unfortunately she holds on. The T-850 then sets her up by flipping her truck and manages to get into John's car as we see the TX eyeing them down exiting the wreckage. The T-850 then checks John's eyes, hurting him and telling him there's no sign of injury, before John goes on a rant telling him how he doesn't remember and is confused. In the meantime, they continue driving on the freeway and we see Kate making a scene, kicking and screaming as John and Terminator continue discussing Judgment Day and the Resistance. He asks for a knife, healing himself up by cutting his wound, ripping it out, showing off his machine body. He explains how TX is better than him at everything, worrying John as to how they take her out. He throws a part of his machinery out, which results in a bomb blowing up, shocking John, seeing the mess he left behind. Coming to a stop, they come to a petrol station and Terminator starts buying items for the road trip before his preferred glasses, leading him to be questioned by the store owner. Eventually, he opens the truck and Kate jumps on him, screaming, getting attention, drawing suspicion as we see the owner call somebody. Calming down, John tries to connect with Kate, who is angry at the fact John kidnapped her. He opens the latch, making Terminator tell her who he is, but is shut down, unwilling to comprehend their words. John begins to put into perspective how the world is dependent on him, unable to bring himself to make the right decision. Kate is confused on what he's yapping about, trying to ask questions. The pair talk about the past and how they had history, starting to gain his memories back a little, continuing to drive on an empty road. In the meantime, Scott, Kate's partner, finds the TX in his room, killing him instantly. Someone knocks at the door and Scott answers, informing him they are police and looking for Kate's whereabouts as we see the TX has taken his body form. Meanwhile, the Terminator arrives somewhere and lets Kate and John out, dragging them to a spot. Entering the building confused, we see Sarah's tombstone, confusing John due to the fact he didn't know where she was buried. Terminator pulls out her coffin, showing us it's filled with weapons, and explains Sarah was buried in New Mexico. John is saddened by this as Kate feels bad for him listening to him talk about his mother. Kate grabs a weapon, aiming it at the Terminator. Unfazed, he walks towards her and is shot in the face, spitting out the bullet. Kate finally believes as she's horrified at the truth and is quickly interrupted by gas canisters. Running away, Kate is grabbed by all the officers and SWAT, preparing to have a shootout with the pair. The Terminator straps up as John freaks out, panicking, until the Terminator chokes him, causing him to get an angry reaction. Letting go, Terminator tells him to keep the same energy when fighting for his life. Meanwhile, officers inform Scott his fiancée is okay, leading the TX to kill them, showing her true formation, and turns the car around quickly to find Kate. Dr. Silberman approaches Kate and she mentions how the Terminator isn't human. He blames adrenaline for this explanation, implying she hallucinated this. SWAT prepares to enter, but the Terminator exits with a coffin in its hand and is shot at. Dr. Silberman sees this, horrifying him with his look. The Terminator fires every bullet in his machine gun, forcing cops to flee for their lives. Accomplishing satisfaction, he puts the coffin in the car as we see John exit from it, also stealing the vehicle, continuing to take fire. Escaping the cops, Kate notices her fiancé and approaches, suspicious of him, only to see she is correct as the TX transforms into her figure. Arriving in time, Terminator fires his RPG, blowing her up, saving Kate. The TX continues her pursuit, whilst the trio drives away, shocked at how she done that. Getting closer, she jumps onto their truck using a saw to get in, making Terminator swerve to throw her off. Opening the roof, John shoots her as they crash, taking their roof off but maintain traction, driving off calmly. Back at the scene, the TX wakes up and burns a tree when looking at her arm. Coming to a stop, the group get out and enter a caravan while Kate cries over her fiancé, with John trying to comfort her. John talks to the Terminator, to which he is informed that he and Kate were married in a different life. He continues talking and Kate overhears him as he mentions her father. She is told that he works at Skynet, shocking John as everything begins to make sense. Kate is told her father plays a big role in the mission but is denied by the Terminator to save him, as John and Kate are his priorities. The Terminator then informs them the launch is happening in 3 hours and they must clear the area due to the nuclear bomb that's going to go off. John then aims a gun, insisting they save her dad or else there is no future for them. Approaching him, the Terminator agrees to save him, relieving the two humans. Beginning the rescue mission, they drive the caravan with John making weapons. Kate asks questions as to why the Terminator is John's protector and ends up thanking him for doing this. Being told she is John's spouse and second in command, Kate is surprised as to why she chose John. John is told he must inevitably die, and when asked how, the Terminator answers by saying he does it. In the meantime, Robert is seen at his workplace discussing a virus that's taken over their satellites. Confused as to how this is happening, the Pentagon makes contact, while we see a robot aircraft in his place. Still shocked at the news, John and Kate review their options and history amongst each other, enjoying one another's company before being interrupted by the Terminator. Meanwhile at the lab, Robert is on the phone to the Pentagon trying to solve this virus issue, reassuring them Skynet will help this issue be resolved. Simultaneously, the TX enters a secured facility, fascinated by the machinery, and begins programming it. Robert is hesitant to make the order happen, but with everyone watching he begins the program, bringing Skynet into work and alive. Their systems shut down and begin glitching until they're interrupted by Kate, who is shot by the Terminator, revealing the real Kate. Terminator fires at will, taking her out, but Robert is caught by a bullet and is attended to by his daughter. Simultaneously, the machines begin shooting at the working people as the group try and come up with a plan. They make their way to the office but see the robots approaching and hide. Looking for the group, the Terminator shocks them by pulling out his gun, terminating his kind. Finally, they get to the safe inside Robert's office, who is close to his death, informing them on what Skynet is and how to beat it. Kate begins to cry at his sight and is disrupted when a spacecraft fires at them. They evacuate the place with the TX arriving in their face, leading to a fight between the two machines. Trying to beat her, Terminator is using his strength to kill her, throwing her around. They continue fighting, unable to be victorious over each other. Noticing how much more advanced the TX is, they fall through the roof, continuing their battle as she burns his face, before snapping his neck, defeating the Terminator. Still focused, John and Kate run towards the lab and are stopped by a machine who opens fire, attempting to kill them. Kate opens fire herself, smashing the machine to bits, impressing John with her courage. Finally they see the TX closing in and turn on the machines to confuse the Terminator. Running for their life, they're chased by the TX, who tries burning them but is stopped due to the magnetic field trapping the TX. Kate screams for her to die as their plan works, melting the Terminator as they begin running to safety. Coming back to life, the Terminator fixes his neck and attaches it to his body, while we see the TX also using a saw to save itself. Finding a plane, Kate and John see the Terminator approaching. Shocked, the Terminator attacks John and is jumped on by Kate, who is thrown off. He is unable to control himself as John pleads with him to spare him, but is ignored, being attacked again. John asks him what his mission is, to which he responds saying the safety of John and Kate is his priority. Surprisingly enough, the Terminator stops himself from killing John, choosing to spare him. He chooses to ignore his command, smashing the car, refusing to kill John. John goes over to Kate to end the upcoming war as the Terminator stands still, shutting off his system. With the duo flying and trying to end this once and for all, they enter the government property and get off the plane. Inside, John opens fire at the air to make sure the coast is clear. Powering on the computer, a chopper crashes into the building, only for the TX to appear once more, looking impossible to kill. Another chopper crashes the place, saving the pair, only for us to see the Terminator back from the dead. As the doors shut, Terminator holds it open for them, allowing them to crawl through. But the TX sees this and grabs John. Terminator helps him and grabs the TX, shoving a bomb into its mouth, sacrificing himself and saving John and Kate. They come to the secure lab where the government hid their work, and John gets angry as nothing is there. Kate stares at him, informing him nothing is here, due to the Terminator and her father saving them, giving them a chance at life. Suddenly they hear voices through a microphone asking for help, and John replies, knowing this is his moment, as Kate holds his hands, uniting together. As we see, the Judgment Day has begun and humanity is near extinction. Terminator Salvation kicks off at the Longview State Correctional Facility in 2003. There, a death row inmate named Marcus has 1 hour to live, and is approached by Dr. Serena, asking him to sign a consent form to donate his body to a noble cause. Being told he may have a possibility for a second life, even though he is responsible for a dead cop as well as his brother. Marcus eventually agrees to it and signs the paper written by Cyberdyne Systems, telling him he is doing something noble. The scene quickly cuts to Marcus being tied down and strapped into what will be his last few minutes. Asking if he has any last words, Marcus tells them all to go f*** themselves. Nah, just kidding. He remains silent when a man on site gives the executor a signal. Triggering the execution, the movie recaps to us that Skynet had become self-aware and attacked humanity. The survivors of the nuclear fire on Judgment Day lived on to become entangled in a war where machines attempted to eradicate humans. But they have hope in one single man, John Connor. In 2018, 15 years later, the Resistance launches a drone attack at a Skynet research and development facility. Causing a massive explosion, humans begin landing one at a time with bombs going off all around them. Out comes their leader, John Connor, who wants an in-and-out mission to grab information from some computers and escape. With the crew heading straight underground, they do not discover any machines, and they think it is a setup when a bogey appears out of nowhere and is shot at until it is destroyed. Continuing through, they arrive at an underground testing site where humans have been chopped up and tested. Moving forward, the crew find what they're looking for, surrounded by caged humans. Grabbing the intel, the humans seem to be en route to create a new Terminator, the T-800. Connor seems starstruck but eventually returns to topside and quickly discovers his men dead. Spotting an enemy aircraft, Connor decides to go after it on his own. On the chase, a massive explosion nearby causes him to shake and eventually crash land. Quickly getting out, he sees the impact of a massive explosion and knows his team is dead when he is suddenly pushed away by a Terminator. Hearing radio chatter from command base, Connor gives the tragic news of only one survivor, himself. As time passes, a man stumbles out of the wreckage, and we get to see that it is Marcus who cannot believe or understand what is going on and decides to steal a dead soldier's clothes. Connor in the meantime wants to head to command base, but his access is denied as they don't want to give away their position. Connor instead says to open the ramp and jump straight out of the plane and into the water below. Down deep is the Resistance command headquarters, and John has a meeting with the lovely General Ashdown, who doesn't believe in Connor being their savior. With the general not saying what they found in the underground base, Connor demands to be let in on the details as his men all died for it. General Losenko says it is a solution to all their problems. Mentioning all the machines use shortwave transmitters to communicate, their intel has located a hidden signal under the primary channel which allows for direct control over the machines. With Connor volunteering to test it, the generals agree due to his admirable qualifications. Being handed the codes for the signal, he is told that the Resistance intercepted a message from Skynet that plans on killing Connor as well as a civilian named Kyle Reese. With Connor getting ready for the mission and seeing the team he will take with him, he meets Barnes, the brother of one of his deceased troops. Soon enough, we get to meet with John's beautiful wife, Kate Connor. The following day, Marcus traverses the landscape while Connor listens to tapes that Sarah Connor made for him. His mother says he must send his father back in time even though he is just a teenager or John will never be born, and Skynet would win the war. Knowing that his dad is alone somewhere and that Skynet is hunting him down, Connor has faith in their new secret weapon but is scared that Skynet will find Kyle and kill him to reset the future. Marcus in the meantime discovers his old home burned and destroyed. Having no idea what is going on, he screams and a Terminator appears in the distance. Firing his machine gun, Marcus is pushed away and told to stay. The hostile continues forward and holds down the trigger until it is caught in a trap and yanked off the ground. The man then grabs Marcus and takes off running when they are shot at once again. The Terminator frees itself from the trap and we see a young girl, Star, holding a shotgun. With the hostile attempts to force its way to the group, Star releases another trap that puts an end to its life. With Marcus confused beyond compare, Kyle Reese aims his gun at Marcus and wants to know why he's wearing a Resistance jacket. Stealing the gun from Kyle and shutting him up, Marcus hands it back and learns the bot was a Terminator, a T-600 model. He also discovers that he is in the year 2018 and learns about Judgment Day. Suddenly the trio drop to the ground as a ship flies past looking for them. Once gone, Kyle explains that was a hunter-killer, and thanks to Marcus it knows their location. Back with John and his team, they have found a Hydra-bot and disabled its way of communicating to Skynet. Plugging their weapon in, they turn the signal up and soon enough the bot stops moving and the group can't believe it. Turning the device off, John tells his crew it's time to take it to the next level. Back with the trio, Marcus teaches Kyle a little trick to not lose his gun. Discovering a broken radio, Marcus attempts to fix it and learns that Kyle and Star are the Resistance branch for LA. With Marcus fixing the radio, John simultaneously gives out a call to all pockets of Resistance. With hundreds of small teams listening, John tells them all that Skynet is planning something big, but the Resistance is also doing the same. Stating his name for the record, Kyle wants to find him. The next morning, Marcus cuts himself while trying to fix a car. Turning it on, he wants to head north alone to find someone. Kyle, on the other hand, wants them all to travel east. With Star forced out of the car, a Terminator scout appears, and the trio is forced into the vehicle. With the drone coming face to face with the crew, it scans Kyle's face and Marcus gets a trick shot and kills the robot. Stopping the car, Marcus tells Kyle to get out of the driver's seat. Back with John, he gets intel that there is unusual movement in LA. John immediately sends out a team to rescue the civilians there. With the trio traversing the great barren landscape, they are problematically jumped on by a random crew. With Marcus politely asking them for fuel, they say no. Their boss, Virginia, then comes out to de-escalate the situation. Offering the group some food for their troubles, they are attacked by a transformer-sized bot named the Harvester. Blowing the place up, Star is injured, and the trio try escaping but are left on their own. It works out in their favor though, as all vehicles are blown to pieces. Marcus watches as people are rounded up and taken as prisoners. So instead of running, Marcus opens up a fuel line and drives the fuel truck directly into the Harvester. Driving away, they shoot at the fuel tank, but it doesn't trigger an explosion. Star comes in clutch though and gives them exactly what they need to send the entire base to hell and leave it in ashes. Somehow the Harvester survived the attack and releases 2 Moto Terminators. Kyle shoots at one of them and damn can these bots drive, but Kyle smartly shoots an oil barrel at one of the Terminators, causing it to crash. The second Terminator, however, disappears, then suddenly comes from above them. Shooting at the truck, the Terminator from earlier also returns and the group is in deep shit. Kyle does manage to get a superb shot and take out one of their assailants, but the second one is a bit of a nuisance until they attach the crane to it and slam it around the place to end it. The hunter-killer suddenly arrives on the scene to blow a gaping hole on the bridge. The crew manage to greatly damage the ship, but both Kyle and Star fall out and are grabbed by the Harvester to be imprisoned. Marcus then quickly dives off the bridge as the truck is blown to pieces. He lands on the enemy vessel and with an axe tries to free his friends when he is grabbed by the Harvester. Two resistance ships then take action into their own hands and destroy one enemy ship and also take out the Harvester, causing Marcus to fall into the water below. With the main vessel letting out more mini-ships, one of the resistance planes are shot out of the sky. With the second one taking fire and doing evasive maneuvers, it isn't enough, and it too is destroyed. Some while later, Marcus crawls out of the water and begins walking through the landscape himself. Finding the pilot that ejected from the ship earlier, Blair Williams is helped down by Marcus. Planning on chasing the ship to Skynet, Blair laughs at him and says just come with her to meet John Connor, the only person that may be able to help him. Soon enough, the duo arrive at some shelter and Blair seems to be injured. After going to patch herself up, Blair is pounced upon by some men who aim their guns at her. However, she manages to handle her own until she is grabbed. Marcus comes to the rescue and one by one annihilates all the bandits, clearly showing off his superiority in combat. Blair kneecaps one of the men but leaves him be. Sitting next to a fire they created a while later, Blair drops a heavy quote.
You can focus on what is lost, or you can fight for what is left.
With it being quite cold, Blair cuddles Marcus for his body heat and thanks him for saving her life, as good men are rare, saying he is not a good guy. She reassures him and says people always deserve a second chance. Back with John and his crew, they travel deep into enemy territory to test out their new weapon. Causing a distraction to lure in their enemies, it works to perfection. Activating their new signal, they turn it up to max and soon enough the enemy ship crashes. With their new secret weapon working as expected, Connor is told the attack will commence tomorrow worldwide, with his unit told to take out Skynet Central. The general has no regards for prisoners, however, and wants to level the landscape. At Skynet, meanwhile, the human prisoners are treated like animals and placed in cages with deadly consequences if anyone attempts to escape. Once morning arrives, Blair and Marcus start walking through a minefield when Marcus is suddenly hit. Being carried to a doctor, he remembers some of his memories when Kate goes to perform surgery on him until she stops and Barnes knocks him out. Awakening soon after, Kate explains that everything is somewhat human, but he has a hybrid nervous system as well as one human cortex and one machine. Marcus seems very confused at John, who mentions to him he is not a human. Screaming in agony and pain at himself, he mentions his name and date of birth. With Marcus trying to tell Connor he means no harm, John refuses to let him go and is sure Skynet sent him to kill them. Better yet, John says that he tried killing his mother Sarah Connor and his father Kyle Reese, but Marcus mentions he saved Kyle's life, who is now headed to Skynet. Blair is lectured at her stupidity of bringing Marcus here, but she tells them he saved her life and is not their enemy. With the humans being walked around like sheep going to the slaughter, Kyle steals a metal rod when his identification is found. Quickly being stolen from the pack, Barnes gets a bullet ready to end Marcus. Shooting him, he yells in agony when Blair arrives and tells Barnes that John wants him as she takes the gun and shoots Marcus. With Barnes going away, Blair drops Marcus to the ground and quickly jumps down to help him escape. With John listening to Sarah's old tapes, he is so confused about Marcus and feels their enemy is ahead of them, as he himself believes he is human, and that Kyle Reese is alive. With that, Marcus is cut free, and he thanks Blair. Barnes then goes to see John, who quickly realizes the deception of his trooper. With the duo making an escape, Barnes quickly launches a rocket and engulfs the place. But it seems Marcus is stronger than he looks and manages to save them long enough to escape. Being stuck in the minefield, Blair smartly causes all the mines to trigger, allowing them to run through. With bullets, rockets, and everything being thrown at them, Marcus tells Blair they need to run. But on the way, Blair is injured. Carrying her, they walk through too much fire and eventually stop. Being surrounded, the troops see that Marcus duped them, and he manages to hijack a bike and jump the barricades. With John shooting at him from a chopper, he eventually hits his target. John then launches a carpet bomb to destroy the whole fucking area and tells his men to find the Terminator. Searching the river below, Hydrobots suddenly pop out and attack the troops. Not understanding how the hell the bots are there, the passenger is ripped into shreds and John escapes the chopper. Shooting at the hostiles, John is forced into the water. Taking out one Hydrobot at a time, he switches to his pistol, but Marcus saves his ass just in time. Telling John that he can get the duo into Skynet to save Kyle, John understands that Marcus is his last hope. Handing him a radio to contact him once he's inside Skynet, the half-human, half-robot swims away. Blair is immediately questioned by John, who demands answers. Simply saying that Marcus is a man and not a machine, he sets her free. The next day, Command contacts Connor, who tells the general to abort the mission or delay it, as he may be able to save the hostages, including Kyle.
The key to the future, to the past. Without him, we lose everything.
The general loses the plot at John and doesn't listen to a word he says and makes sure to relieve him of his command. With the crew staying loyal to Connor, he immediately jumps on the radio and alerts all the resistance everywhere that if they attack tonight, they will all die. Telling them that a woman tried to warn everyone about the truth of judgment, they locked her away, and that woman was his mother. With her theories all coming to fruition, he pleads them all to not attack Skynet, as even one bomb will destroy all their futures. With John saying farewell to his beloved, he has one instruction for his men.
I'll be back.
Pumping music in the streets as a decoy, Connor sets up a trap and destroys a Moto Terminator. Hijacking the vehicle, he reprograms it and sets off. At the Skynet perimeter, meanwhile, Marcus shows himself to the guard and is shown as active. Being granted entry, he climbs the gate and makes it inside the stronghold. Running around the place as discreet as he can, John makes it to the outer perimeter and watches. With Marcus entering the main headquarters of Skynet, he is zapped and sinks into the system. Going through the data and code, he disarms the turret outside before finding Kyle's cell. Sending the information to John, Marcus continues through the database to find records of himself. Seems Dr. Serena died from cancer, but Cyberdyne continued their work and even managed to buy the United States Air Force. The last thing that Marcus sees is the destruction that Skynet caused soon after, and it isn't pretty. With John, meanwhile, he sneaks his way into the stronghold and quickly finds a place to hide before a Terminator approaches and just barely misses him. The general in the submarine, meanwhile, receives some bad news for himself when the entire resistance refuses to launch until John Connor gives the green light. John, in the meantime, discovers where the prisoners are being held and opens up their cages. Sending everyone to the transport vehicle outside, John looks for Kyle Reese. Marcus, in the meantime, awakens and looks like Skynet has done some work to him. Dr. Serena then pops up and welcomes him home. Saying that he was programmed to come back, he is an infiltrator prototype and is the only one of his kind. With Skynet messing around with him and saying he worked exactly as expected by both bringing Kyle Reese as well as John Connor to them, his memories are shown as evidence to support their claim. With all the humans running to the transport, John screams for Kyle Reese, and Skynet makes Marcus understand that when humans are desperate, they look for hope, and they provided it to them, making them believe their secret signal actually works. The signal that they tested was just a way for the resistance to reveal themselves, and Skynet has now discovered the command center. With Command quickly realizing they've been found, General Losenko says they've killed themselves as Skynet has tracked their signal. Within seconds, the submarine is blown to pieces, and Skynet tells Marcus their machines kept failing until Marcus, the perfect infiltration machine, was created, and he will be known as the John Connor Killer. John, in the meantime, is jumped by a Terminator T-800 series who can easily withstand gunfire. Getting into combat, Marcus sees what's happening with Kyle and decides to rip out his control chip, and Skynet tells him he will not have a second chance. Not giving a shit, he destroys the computer and the base goes into lockdown mode. Finding his once human body, the scene cuts to Barnes being told that Connor needs air support, and they all get to work. With Kyle about to be crushed by a Terminator, he stabs it in the back of the neck and it holds down its trigger. John fortunately runs into his dad and the three of them begin their escape procedure. With the T-800 killing one of its own, a grenade does nothing to the Terminator. A second shot does a little more damage, but the trio are forced to jump into the Terminator facility. With so many being built, they discover fuel cells, the life source for the T-800s. With it being nuclear, they must be cautious as their enemy approaches. Coming from behind them, though, the battle kicks off and the trio attempt to flee. John decides he wants to end this all and jumps out of the elevator to get into another fight with the T-800. Bullets do nothing to this advanced creation, and Connor is picked up like a rag doll when Marcus comes from nowhere to save him. John runs to the fuel cells and prepares a bomb. Marcus refuses to let the Terminator touch Connor, but this is not an easy fight for him. With the Terminator using surroundings to knock Marcus all around the place, John plants the bomb and Marcus is punched in the heart and deemed terminated. With John escaping the Terminator for the time being, the civilians outside get to the chopper and Kyle tells the resistance Connor is still inside. With the T-800 using Kyle's voice, it manages to lure John out of hiding. John smartly shoots and drops molten metal on his assailant. Believing it to be over, the Terminator arises from the liquid, and Connor supercools the Terminator, causing it to slowly move until it gives him a massive scar and stops moving. With John getting out of the way, he begins reviving Marcus. The T-800 starts to move again, but John is able to revive Marcus as he is stabbed through the chest. Marcus grabs the metal rod and uses it to detach the head of the Terminator. On the ground and in pain, Marcus grabs John and begins carrying him out. Kate soon sees her husband and everyone boards the chopper and takes off. Once in the sky, Star hands Connor the detonation device and he makes sure that the base is blown to atoms. With a beautiful spectacle, the scene shifts to the next day where John lays down in a makeshift surgical room. With Kate approaching the rest of the group, she tells them John is not going to make it as his heart is giving out. Calling Kyle to come over, he tells him to take the jacket, officially making him a member of the resistance like he dreamed. Kyle walks away with tears in his eyes. Marcus then steps up and tells Kate to take his heart. Blair immediately gets emotional, and Marcus says everyone deserves a second chance, and this is his. Saying goodbye to both Kyle and Star, he jumps on the surgical table and the operation commences. The strength of the human heart is the difference between men and machines, and John Connor awakens soon after on a chopper. But with Skynet's global network still remaining strong, this war is not over. But John is ready for whatever lies ahead. Terminator Dark Fate kicks off with Sarah Connor being interviewed, saying she can see children looking like burnt paper. Then the blast wave hits them, and they all fly apart like leaves, with the doctors telling her it's a dream. She screams at them that they are all dead. The scene then cuts to post-Judgment Day, where there is a future without any hope. A future where the machines destroy everything. That future never happened though, and in Guatemala in 1998, Sarah made sure to stop that future to protect her son. But she fails to do that as her son is shot by a T-800. Then after pushing Sarah aside, John Connor loses his life and is deemed terminated. Being able to save 3 billion lives, she couldn't save the one she wanted to the most. 22 years later in Mexico City, we get to once again see that the world has been greeted by a time traveler, a woman named Grace. Being carried to help, the cops quickly arrive on the scene and arrest both people helping Grace. Believing she has taken something, we get to see that Grace isn't fully human and takes on the police. Easily neutralizing 4 officers, Grace needs a little favor. As the sun rises the next day, we are introduced to Dani Ramos. She goes to see her little brother Diego, as well as her father Vicente, who requires quite a lot of medicine. Heading out for the day with her brother, it seems one more guest wants to join the party. A Rev-9. It consists of an endoskeleton covered in liquid metal and has the ability to split its liquid metal and skeleton. Going straight to Vicente, he asks where Dani is, but Vicente thinks something is off. With the Ramos siblings going to work in a factory, it seems one of them has been replaced by a robot, and Dani goes to have a word with the boss when her dad suddenly arrives and tells the manager that his kids forgot their lunch again. Grace also makes her way into the building and steals a guard's uniform. With Vicente finding his son, he asks where Dani is when he spots her. Turning the bag he's holding into a gun, he goes to shoot but is shot at by Grace. Dani is confused what's going on and Grace takes off running with him. With the Rev-9 quickly catching up, Grace shows off her strength and durability. Managing to neutralize and injure the Terminator, no opponent has ever been this strong before. Diego then uses the machinery to their advantage and have bought themselves some time. Grace explains to the duo that the thing chasing them is a Terminator, a Rev-9 that was sent from the future. She details that she is human but is augmented and was sent to protect them. With cops chasing the duo, the Rev-9 finds his way back into the chase. As Dani is Grace's mission, they are quickly caught by their pursuer and need to do something immediately. Managing to put a gap with their assailant, the trio are not safe and are squished against a barricade but make it out. Being rammed over and over from behind, Grace gets Diego to drive while she tosses metal rods at the Terminator. Being the most advanced model ever created, it is easily the strongest opponent and just barely misses Dani. Grace fights with it until it is hit off the van and ran over. Their truck wheels give out though and the team crash. Diego seems to be tragically injured, and the Rev-9 hijacks a vehicle and goes straight for the group. Grace apologizes to Dani and moves her out of the way when her brother is killed. Screaming in agony, Grace grabs her and leaves just as the Terminator rebuilds itself again. Its endoskeleton also approaches from the other side, and out of nowhere a car hits into it. Out steps an aged Sarah Connor who shoots at both the Terminators and is pretty badass.
I'll be back.
With Sarah going to kill the Rev-9, the duo hijacks her car and she swears at them. Dani wants to go home to tell her father about Diego, but Grace makes her understand the Terminator needs contact to turn into the thing, meaning her dad is dead. The endoskeleton in the meantime links back up with its body and reconnects. Grace simultaneously says she is crashing and needs medicine. Dozing off, she is forced to stop driving and can barely breathe. With Dani jumping into the driver's seat, they go to a pharmacy and ask for specific pills. Using a gun to grab what she can, Grace ends up dropping to the ground and Dani is forced to take on the role of the perpetrator. With the pharmacist helping them outside, Sarah is waiting for them and wants answers. With Grace in the backseat of the car, Dani has no idea what was after them and why Grace was protecting her. Once at a motel, Sarah gives Grace her medicine and they wait. Grace then gets a flashback even though it's in the future. In her flash forward, she and her team prepare for an operation. With their leader leading the charge, the battle begins and almost ends in 1 second. As machines kill off all remaining troops, Rev-9s appear and Grace is greatly wounded with her teammates being killed off one by one. She doesn't give up just yet and shoots when the scene cuts to her being treated. With the only way of her living being an augment, she is made into one and awakens in the past to quickly move Sarah's gun away from her face. With Grace explaining she is an enhanced human from 2042, Sarah begins her life story and learns from Grace that Skynet doesn't exist in the future. But nonetheless, a Terminator was sent from a future that never happened and her son was killed. Sarah's life since then is hunting Terminators and she tells them it's time to get moving. On the road, Sarah learns that Skynet doesn't exist, but something called Legion is embroiled in a war with humans. With humans never learning and continually making the same mistakes, Sarah confesses to the group that she knew where they were as she gets a text message with exact coordinates of Terminators, and the message always ends by saying "for John." Giving Grace her phone, she hacks it and gets some GPS coordinates. Surprisingly, her commander made her tattoo the exact same coordinates on herself in case things go sideways. With their next destination being Texas, the group ditch their car and need to illegally cross. At the Rathium data center in Mexico City, the Rev-9 kills a guard and inserts itself into the grid. Looking through city cameras, he discovers they are headed to Texas. Once night hits, Grace tells Dani that in the future, everything was normal, until all phones, satellites, and even power grids just went out. The world just turned catastrophic, and the second day was a nuclear attack followed by World War III. With the Legion hunting down the survivors, Grace doesn't know how she managed to live past the next few years. When the humans began fighting back, Sarah knows the deal and presumes Danny's child would lead the resistance, hence why they wanted her dead. The next day, the group link up with Danny's uncle, who says he'll help them get across the border. At the operations and aerial surveillance base, meanwhile, a woman casually gets to work but slaughters all men in the room with her. Hacking the data and information there, the Terminator finds the exact coordinates of his targets, and they are in trouble right now. With Grace seeing the drone above them, the Rev-9 uses a general's voice to send a team to kill what he makes them think are cartel members. Within minutes, the entire group is surrounded and told to halt by the Border Patrol. With all of them raising their hands, they are arrested one at a time, and when returning to the officers' cars, the drone from above dives in for an attack, and Grace realizes this and saves Danny just in time. As time passes, we move to the U.S. Border Patrol Detention Center, where Danny is being processed and seen as a lunatic. With Border Patrol conducting surgery on Grace, they find her drugs and realize she isn't normal. Confused with what a scan shows, the Terminator soon arrives at the base and goes inside, saying he has been ordered to pick up a detainee. Sarah Connor is also taken from her cell and is wanted in over 50 countries. Being quite popular, she is taken away when Grace breaks her handcuffs and immobilizes the team in the room. With the Terminator looking for Danny, Grace spots him and gets an idea. Triggering the fire alarm, Sarah uses this to launch her escape, and Grace frees all detainees. Finding Danny and running away with her, all the guards are slaughtered and butchered by the Rev-9, who shows them the heartlessness of a machine. Grace and Danny get onto a chopper, and Sarah quickly runs and joins them and shoots the Terminator a few times to allow themselves to be free. After a lot of traveling, the trio arrive at the GPS coordinates and see an American flag outside. Knocking on the door, Sarah is shocked to see it's her son's killer, the Terminator that ruined her life. Grace is forced to stop Sarah when she says, "You mother..." The other two women manage to calm their companion, and Carl, the Terminator now reformed, says he was made and sent by Skynet many years ago. Danny goes to sit with Sarah, who reminisces about her beautiful little baby boy. Soon enough, Carl offers them all a drink, and Sarah will not accept it or any of his hospitality. With Carl now having a wife as well as a kid, he found her in a very rough relationship and saved her. Caring for the family gave him purpose, and he finally understood what he had taken away from Sarah on that horrific day. Sarah thinks that Carl is talking shit, but with his orders and his mission completed, he learned and became as human as possible. He also confesses he gave Sarah meaning after her son's death by sending her Terminator coordinates. Shooting 3 bullets in his heart, Carl mentions that Sarah changed the future and killed Skynet and also set him free. And now he will freely choose to protect Danny. Soon enough, both Carl's wife and stepson arrive to meet the crew. Sarah and Carl both still have beef with one another that'll soon get to Drake and Kendrick's level, but still come up with a plan to lure the Rev-9 into a kill box and end it. Carl then takes the team into his garage, and they cannot believe the amount of weapons he has, but he simply says,
"This is Texas."
The Terminator has just killed your whole family.
Carl suggests to the team that they grab a military-grade EMP, and Sarah thinks she can help. Soon enough, Carl says goodbye to his new family, and Sarah low-key feels bad for him. As they drive away, Carl seems to have told his family that the day he warned them about has come, and Danny apologizes to him for the problem she brought. Sarah, on the other hand, says she will kill him once the mission is over, and he understands. After a couple hours has passed, it seems the Rev-9 is closing in on his targets. The targets, meanwhile, grab in a favor from a major and receive the EMP device. But Grace cuts the niceties short when she notices a chopper coming at them. The major is shot, and the team speed away in the vehicle and completely miss a RPG shot at the endoskeleton. The major calls in and alerts his entire base to the situation. Safely making it onto the base, the crew go directly on an aeroplane, and the major will stall for them as long as he can. As they take off, the chopper begins firing at them, and they return fire, causing the chopper to crash. The Terminator makes it onto the plane when Carl fights him. This distraction allows the two women to drop their car and push the Rev-9 over the edge. Problematically, the group discover that the EMPs were destroyed in the combat, and Carl estimates a 12% probability of success. Grace opens up about her past, which is the future, and it was Danny who had saved her from the scavengers, and without her, she would never have lived through the tragedy, as Danny raised her and guided her alongside hundreds of scavengers which she turned into an army. It was her, not her offspring, that saves the future, and that's why the Legion wants her dead. Being the John Connor of this timeline, the Terminator attacks again. This homicidal maniac pushes his plane into his targets, and they are all clinging on for dear life. Grace quickly goes to save Danny and holds onto her. With their assailant approaching, Carl is forced to hold him down while the others get into a military vehicle. As the plane sinks lower and lower, the cargo doors won't open, and as the group fend off their attacker, Carl saves the day by locking the Terminator and blasting the cargo doors wide open. Cutting the straps, the Rev-9 splits itself, causing Carl to blow the one half and propel the vehicle into the air, where the team activate the parachute on it. With the plane plummeting down to the ground, it heads straight for a dam and hits the water. With both Terminators still going hard at each other, the other half re-emerges and holds Carl down, ripping off a part of him. The plane separates them and the endoskeleton transforms back. The women meanwhile manage to land but hang over the edge and into the damn water. Needing to move and fast, Grace decides to cut the vehicle free as she attacks the Terminator. With the truck bouncing and moving across the water, the Rev 9 appears and starts making holes in the truck. Quickly filling up with water, they fully submerge, and Danny smartly engages the parachute at the Terminator, causing it to go away. With the duo making it atop the water, Grace quickly links up with them, and they have to move immediately. Once back on the dam, Grace begins breathing and losing her strength like before. Telling Danny to run, she refuses, and Grace says she has one weapon up her sleeve, her power source. With Carl making it to the group, he hands Grace her medicine and breaks the door open. With the four of them making it inside, the Rev 9 slowly approaches when Danny doesn't want to run anymore but make their last stand. Getting all the necessary weapons nearby, the demon makes his way on the scene and wants the girl. Even though Carl came from a similar future, he refuses and the battle begins. With the entire team going all out, the endoskeleton splits from the main body and the group have two enemies to fight now. Grace then does an awesome move by moving a chain so fast that it dissects the Terminator. She is injured, however, and the two bodies re-emerge like they were never damaged and link up to get into another fight. With the team managing to hold the machine down, Grace chains its mouth and attempts to let a machine kill the machine, and Carl gets the job done. He is trapped, however, and an explosion finally gives us a minute of silence. Believing that all machines from the future are dead, they are happy to see Grace alive. Sarah also discovers Carl's lifeless body when Grace moans in agony from her injuries. Grace tells Danny to take her power source and use it to end the Rev 9, who jumps out of the fire and knocks Sarah out. Slowly coming at Danny, who cries at the thought of killing her friend, she does it and apologizes to Grace. Grabbing the weapon, she instead grabs a gun to shoot the son of a machine. Stupidly losing the weapon, she just manages to grab it when Carl awakens and helps her stab the Terminator in the eye and completely fry its circuits. Carl tries moving it away from the women and sacrifices himself. Holding down the Terminator, it tries to move, but he doesn't allow it, and tells Sarah this is for John and dies in a beautiful death. His system shuts off and Sarah just looks at her son's killer as well as her savior. Running to Grace and thanking her, the scene cuts to Danny finding the Grace of her time and watches her. Returning to Sarah, they both get into the car and Danny wants to change the fate of the world. Hence the reason it was titled Dark Fate. Terminator Genesis opens with the main character Kyle Reese narrating how his parents told him about Earth before the machines. He says he never got to see it, but it was so full of hope. He tells us how Skynet came online and launched nuclear devices around the world. A day they called Judgment Day. He was born after that day, and would live in the sewers like a rat. John Connor saved his life one day and he took him into the army he had created and started a resistance in the year 2029. He fought back against the machines and has managed to turn the tide of the war. The humans then prepare for the final attack on the machine's main computer when Kyle questions John as to why they aren't joining the others and instead are attacking a far less important base. John tells Kyle that inside this base is a weapon that they will launch if they lose, and is just as important as the main computer. John thanks him for being by his side for this long, and Kyle says it's only because of him that humanity can be free. By hijacking a prisoner convoy, the humans attempt to sneak into this base. The machines spot this and begin to open fire as the truck begins to enter the base. They let off an explosion, killing the robots surrounding the truck, and begins to open fire back. Helicopters and reinforcements arrive to help, and a full battle begins to escalate. Meanwhile, in the base, it is revealed that the weapon is a time machine, and it begins to activate. John Connor and Kyle get out of the truck and are under heavy fire. John realizes that they are using the weapon and rushes in with Kyle following close by. Inside, the machine selects a Terminator and begins its procedure to send it back in time. As John and Kyle are about to be overwhelmed in a last stand, the machines are shut off. The mission on the main computer was a success, and the Terminator was sent back in time in the year 1984. In the future, John and his troops are looking into the machine when John tells them he knows where they sent the Terminator, to the year 1984 to kill his mother. The troops suggest that they send one of their own back in time to stop it. Everybody begins to volunteer, however. Kyle tells John that he will go, and after a bit of back and forth between the two, John agrees. As Reese is about to go into the machine, he and John talk. Reese questions how it is that John knows all he does. He tells him that his mother would tell him the future up till this point, and this is where his knowledge ends. John also tells him that Sarah will be just another scared woman and doesn't know anything about the machines or Skynet yet. John's final words to Kyle are that he must do this job and all of humanity hangs in the balance. As the machine begins to work, a Terminator appears behind John and says you didn't think it would be that easy, and Kyle screams to try and get out but is taken back. His memories rip through his mind and get some memories which don't even look to be his. One of them is a boy saying Genesis is Skynet, and you can kill Skynet before it comes online. After this, he is transported back into an alleyway. In the same night, the Terminator sent back finds a group of hooligans and demands their clothes. A voice says you won't be needing those, and the Terminator turns to see an exact replica of himself but with clothes and a weapon that gets used. They engage in a fist fight and the good Terminator smashes the evil one until it's noticeably a robot. The new Terminator beats the other to the ground, and just as it's about to deliver the final blow, a sniper shoots it in the heart, killing it. Meanwhile, with Kyle, a cop car approaches, and an officer gets out to chase him. Kyle gets the jump on the cop and takes his gun. The officer reveals himself as a Terminator, and Kyle fires, immobilizing him temporarily before hiding in a store. As the Terminator searches for him, Kyle tries to escape but is spotted and nearly stabbed. He then runs into a real cop who orders him to get on his knees. They arrest him, and as they walk him out, the Terminator stabs one. The other cop fires, and he and Kyle run for it. The officer uncuffs Kyle, and they open fire on the Terminator. As the machine closes in to kill, a van crashes through the building, hitting the Terminator. Inside is Sarah Connor, who shoots the robot's head, allowing Kyle to escape. Inside, Sarah tells Kyle she knows who he is. Kyle says she isn't meant to know, but she replies that the past has changed and 1984 no longer exists. She reveals she already killed another Terminator with the help of the good T-1000. Kyle freaks out and shoots at it, causing the van to crash. The T-1000 incapacitates Kyle. As the Terminator and Sarah drive again, the robot tells her she must have a child with Kyle to make John Connor. Sarah gets defensive, saying she wants her life to be her choice. While knocked out, Reese dreams of a child telling him to go to San Francisco on a specific date to destroy something called Genesis, which is Skynet before it activates. He wakes up demanding answers, but Sarah tells him to stop asking, especially after attacking Pops, her name for the good T-1000. Reese expresses distrust towards the robot. During their talk, Pop spots a bit of liquid metal from the bad T-1000 on the truck and shoots it off, warning them that the T-1000 knows their location. Sarah tells Reese that the timeline has changed, and the mission is now to kill Skynet before it's born. As they speak, the T-1000 in a police car morphs outside, leaps towards their van, hooks on, but is blasted off by Reese and Sarah. They blow up the car, but the T-1000 survives. The group reaches a warehouse, and Reese and Sarah continue talking. She explains the past was altered because a Terminator was sent to her as a child. Reese mentions a Terminator grabbed John before he was sent back, but is unsure of John's fate. Mid-conversation, the T-1000 jumps through the window. They open fire, and it skewers Pops to the wall. Sarah is told to run as the T-1000 reactivates a copy of Pops, which Kyle slows down by launching a grenade. Kyle falls to the basement and avoids its attacks, stunning it with an electrical cord long enough to grab a sniper and shoot its head off. Meanwhile, the liquid T-1000 is still chasing Sarah. She moves through tunnels, hearing noises, and readies her gun, checking her surroundings. Suddenly, Kyle appears, and then another Kyle shows up. One is real, one is fake, and both try to convince her. Sarah makes the right choice, shooting one in the foot, the fake. She and Kyle run as she blasts the roof, causing acid to rain down on the T-1000. It escapes but is about to kill Sarah when Pops grabs it and throws it back in, destroying the T-1000 but melting his hand in the process. Sarah reveals to John they had anticipated the Terminator's arrival and set a trap, gaining access to the T-1000 chip they had been waiting for. They built a time machine and can now use it. Pops tells Kyle and Sarah they must travel into the future to stop Genesis before it activates, but he can't join them because his melted skin would be torn apart by the magnetic field. Sarah berates Kyle, insisting he follow the plan to prevent the attack. Kyle agrees, admitting he's receiving messages in his head, guiding him on the exact time and what to stop. Pops explains the messages are from an alternate timeline of Kyle, who saw them when John was attacked. Sarah and Kyle argue, as she wants to go to the 1980s while Kyle insists on going to 2017. Kyle removes the chip and Sarah points a gun at him. John remembers a quote from his alternate memories that shocks Sarah as it holds personal meaning to her. Finally, she agrees and they prepare to leave. Sarah starts asking about her future son, and Kyle shares stories about the hope John brings to humanity. He also tells her how much he knows about her, recounting details John shared. Kyle assures Sarah he would do anything to protect her, even if it meant dying. Pops then talks privately with Sarah, questioning why she hadn't revealed that Kyle is John Connor's father. She hugs him and prepares to leave, saying Pops will be there when they arrive in the future, though he'll have taken the long way. Kyle and Sarah enter the machine, traveling to the future in 2017. They arrive on a highway and are lightly hit by a car. Soon after, police take them away. From a distance, an older Pops watches. In the police van, Sarah shares her childhood story with Kyle, explaining how a Terminator killed her parents. Before her father's death, he told her to swim in a straight line. The same quote Kyle had said earlier, which changed her mind. Sarah was found and raised by Pops for over a decade. Kyle again expresses distrust toward the machine, angering Sarah. At the station, the police believe Kyle and Sarah tried to blow themselves up on the highway. Two detectives are joined by O'Brien, who claims it wasn't a bomb but time travel. They dismiss him and say Homeland Security is taking over. In the infirmary as Sarah is being treated, she overhears a doctor discussing Genesis, an operating system that connects all aspects of life. The detectives inform Sarah that there's no trace of her existence, but Kyle's fingerprint matches a 12-year-old child. O'Brien interrupts, explaining that Kyle and the child are the same person, revealing that Kyle saved his life in 1984. Kyle then tells O'Brien who he is and that he's from the future. Sarah and Kyle argue again, and in the chaos, Sarah knees Kyle and grabs a small metal piece. As the police leave the room, Reese unlocks the handcuffs and they bicker again. Suddenly someone enters. It's John Connor. He embraces Kyle and Sarah, then calls the officers back in and tasers them. They cuff the officers, grab their weapons, and head for an escape. Downstairs, Pops enters the building holding a giant teddy bear. As the group prepares to leave, Sarah asks John to prove he's really him and not a shapeshifter. John shares information that undeniably proves his identity. They make their way through the hospital and into a room to avoid Homeland Security. Pops reaches the security room and spots them moving. As John, Kyle, and Sarah approach a vehicle, John calls Kyle Dad, stunning him. They explain the truth that Sarah and Kyle are John's parents. Just as they say this, Pops arrives in the car park and immediately opens fire on John, hitting him. Kyle and Sarah pull their guns on Pops, but before they shoot, John's blood turns into a metallic liquid, revealing that he's been corrupted by the Terminators. John tells them he is neither fully human nor machine, he is both. In the future, John is captured, tortured, and corrupted by Skynet. He offers Sarah, Kyle, and Pops a deal to join him and become part of the machine, but they refuse. John charges at Sarah, but Pops defends her. Despite Pops' efforts, John easily overpowers him, showing his superior strength and intelligence. John throws Pops through the building, fighting in front of everyone. Both are pulled into a magnetic medical device, and Sarah pulls Pops out, leaving Kyle with John. As John is sucked into the machine, he pleads with Kyle, who amplifies the device, holding John long enough for their escape. After the battle, O'Brien examines the scene, wondering what happened. In the car, they argue about whether John can be saved. Pops explains that Skynet created a biological weapon that infects humans and there's no cure. The only chance to stop John is a magnetic field. Sarah argues that John is now Skynet's hope, not humanity's. At Genesis headquarters, John played a key role in developing Genesis, building an army of robots and a time machine. With Genesis launching in a day, he plans to use everything to take over. A Genesis spokesperson gives a speech as a childlike figure representing Genesis, addresses the crowd. Pops takes Sarah and Kyle to his bunker, filled with weapons and gear. They plan to destroy the Genesis servers with C4. Kyle confronts Sarah about their future child, and she tells him that after John is born, Kyle will die, and the only way to protect him is to stay apart. Their talk is interrupted by John, who recalls Sarah telling him about the bunker. He offers them another chance to join him, saying it's the only way Kyle will survive. Sarah fires a grenade launcher, engulfing John in flames, and they escape. Boarding a bus, they leave as John watches them through the blaze. They take a school bus, but John re-emerges on a motorcycle and chases them across the Golden Gate Bridge. John latches onto the bus, pulling out the brakes, causing Sarah to lose control. Kyle and Pops try to fend off John until the bus flips and slides over the edge of the bridge. Pops pulls Sarah and Kyle to safety as John falls into the water with the bus. When authorities arrive, the three surrender, knowing Pops can't take on all the cops. In custody, O'Brien introduces the 12-year-old Kyle and his parents during interrogation. Neither recognizes adult Kyle, but young Kyle comments that he looks like his father. They leave, and Pops notices something is off with one of the detectives. Suddenly, Chung shoots the other detectives, revealing herself as John in disguise. Pops breaks through the two-way mirror, and O'Brien helps Sarah and Kyle escape. Sarah finds the 12-year-old Kyle, tracing his hand and telling him to never look back. O'Brien guides them to the roof, where they escape with Pops on a chopper heading to Cyberdyne. John follows in his own chopper. In the air, Sarah shoots at John, but he keeps chasing. Pops gets an idea and tells Sarah, "I'll be back."
I'll be back.
What?
Before dive-bombing into John's chopper, crashing it. They all reach Cyberdyne, but John arrives first, kills the guards, and speeds up the Genesis countdown to 15 minutes. Sarah, Kyle, and Pops plant explosives around the facility, aiming to stop John. They destroy the Genesis avatar projectors as it taunts them. John tries to stop them from damaging the facility, leading to a battle. Pops secures the detonator, but can't set it off since John has Sarah in his grasp. Neither can kill her. Pops is still protecting her, and John needs her to stay alive. Pops takes the fight to an unfinished time machine where John's human tissue is blasted off, revealing his full T-3000 form. Despite heavy damage, Pops impales John and pulls him into the active time machine, trapping both in the magnetic field. Pops tells Kyle to protect Sarah. Kyle gets her out just as the magnetic field intensifies. Pops is thrown into a pool of mimetic polyalloy liquid, while the T-3000 is destroyed in the magnetic field. The explosives go off, destroying most of the facility. Sarah and Kyle take cover in a bunker, surviving the blast. Pops reappears, upgraded with liquid metal. The three go to find a 12-year-old Kyle, where adult Kyle tells his younger self to remember Genesis is Skynet. Now free from Skynet's threat, Sarah chooses her own future and pulls Kyle in for a kiss as Pops looks on awkwardly. They drive off, with Kyle reflecting that while Skynet may be gone, there are still unanswered questions, but they will continue moving forward. In the end credit scene and last seconds of the movie, we discover that Skynet still lives on underneath the rubble. Thank you all for staying until the end. I would love to know which Terminator movie was your favorite, and as always, stay awesome and take care.